Welcome to our 2021 NBA Free Agency Show presented by Panini. We are here from basketballnews.com. We're going to be here for the next 4 hours reacting to every rumor, every report, every agreement that shows up. Thanks for hanging out with us. Let's get started. Actually, I want to introduce everyone first here. Spencer Davies, our editor at Basketball News. We have Nekias Duncan, who is a writer and podcaster for Basketball News. Matt Babcock, who is our NBA draft analyst and a former NBA agent. He's going to be hanging out, giving the agent perspective on things throughout free agency. And we have Evan Sidery here, who covers the Phoenix Suns and the NBA for us at basketballnews.com. How you doing, guys?
Doing well.
Doing great.
Doing great, dude. I mean, it's funny that we call this the moratorium period. And, 6 p.m. is when you can officially start talking. And just a wave of news just seems to come out like 2 or 3 days beforehand. And I wonder what's going on other than that. There's just some things are just worded a little differently than others.
Well, let's start with that because I think that's kind of the worst kept secret in the NBA world, that teams and agents and players are talking before that date. Matt, when you were an agent, do those conversations typically happen? Does the NBA just kind of look the other way? Can you walk me through that? Because it is one of those interesting things where it's technically in the rules. And we do see there's times where the NBA comes down on teams, but it seems kind of random. How does that kind of work when you're in the agent world and trying to schedule visits for your players?
Yeah, it definitely happens. It's sort of like a cloak and dagger type thing most of the time with agents and teams. And I think every agent, every team operates a little differently. There are certain cases where some of the general managers, were by the book, like Mitch Kupchak, for example. From my understanding, he does not speak to agents before free agency starts. Because I remember I was part of the agent David Bauman. We had Ron Artest, now Meta World Peace, and we wanted to get him to the Lakers, and David tried to get things moving quick, and Mitch wasn't having it. We still got the deal done, but I think kind of get both ends of the spectrum. Some GMs that are cutthroat, will do whatever it takes to get an advantage. Other guys that are by the book.
We're going to be here reacting to every rumor that pops up. We'll be hanging out until about 9:30 p.m. Eastern time. We'll also have some different people popping in too, some guests. I wanted to ask you guys this. It seems like the biggest name, the biggest unrestricted free agent that was on the board, Kyle Lowry. It sounds like he's going to the Miami Heat. We don't have anything official yet, but everyone's kind of saying that they're the front runner. And kind of like Spencer was saying, the wording was, basically indicating that it's happening, but it just can't be official yet. So I'm curious, Nekias, you obviously, covered this Heat team for a long time and, have a lot of thoughts. What do you think of this Kyle Lowry fit, and what do you make of him going to Miami? And once we have the official details, we'll share those as well. But in terms of just what that fit could look like.
I think if you're just looking at the on-court fit, it's a pretty seamless one. Like, I think he juices their transition attack, and this Heat team does not play particularly fast, nor do they score particularly efficiently in transition. So he'll juice the attack there. He would immediately become their best point of attack defender. They struggled with that last year, really the last couple of years. Like, Jimmy Butler seems to be their best guy in that regard, and you don't want him doing that on top of basically running the offense as well. So Kyle Lowry helps you there. He adds some pick and roll playmaking. He adds some shooting, not just shooting, but pull-up shooting, relocation. So there's off-ball equity there. Can do some work as a screener as well. He just makes life easier for Miami Stars while also being pretty darn good in his own right. So I think for Miami, that's a pretty easy move to make.
I'm curious, Spencer, what are your thoughts on Kyle Lowry to Miami and some of the rumored sign and trade, details that we've heard?
Well, the thing that piqued my interest the most is seeing all of this buzz about DeMar DeRozan possibly going to Miami. And I know that Nekias reacted in a certain way on Twitter about that one, just because obviously DeMar DeRozan and Jimmy Butler are pretty much similar on the offensive end. And then defensively, obviously a little bit less of an effective player than Jimmy is in his own right. But just as far as Kyle Lowry's fit goes in Miami, I think it's perfect. It's somebody who is very reliable in transition as a three-point shooter, somebody who's going to really create a nice little rapport with Bam Adebayo, I think, in pick and roll situations, and take a lot of the creation off of Jimmy Butler, which is, I think, the very top of the priority list for Miami, because Jimmy looked exhausted last year.
Well, you mentioned DeMar DeRozan. He's one of the biggest names that's, out there right now where we're not really sure where he's landing. There's been rumors about Kyle Lowry to Miami, Lonzo Ball to Chicago. We've already heard some, the big name players like Chris Paul, Kawhi Leonard, they're likely staying put. So DeMar is kind of the one that I think a lot of people are curious about where he could land. Evan, you wrote a great article for Basketball News about possible destinations for DeMar and kind of what that could look like in terms of his free agency. Can you break down some of those most likely destinations and, where you think he could land?
Yeah, it was really interesting just canvassing the market for DeMar DeRozan. There's so many teams that could use him. Dallas, I think, makes a lot of sense with Luka Doncic, take some of that playmaking and pressure off of him. A team I didn't mention that we're now hearing today could be making kind of a splash move with Chicago with him and Lonzo Ball. That's a really strong fit, in my opinion, as well. Memphis is a fun one, as is Charlotte. I love DeRozan's fit in Charlotte if that were to happen. Outside of that, I don't know if you would even consider the Lakers. We've heard that at that point that I think that marriage is kind of passed for that possibility. Clippers, the same thing. So I think he's going to chase the bag a little bit. There's a lot of teams, though, that do make a lot of sense for DeRozan. And I do wonder, I think he might be one of those guys when free agency opens here in about 20 or so minutes that could strike a deal here pretty fast.
Yeah, he was one of the guys early on. There were rumors, does he go to the Lakers for the mid-level exception? And it sounds like that's not happening now. Those rumors have kind of died down. So we'll see what happens there. There's a few teams that he's been linked to. Dallas is one that's been talked about. As you guys said, Miami's come up as a possible destination. I think that's more just people imagining Kyle Lowry and him reuniting in Miami. And then a few other teams, Memphis, Charlotte, teams that have some space too. Have been, coming up, New Orleans. So we'll see what happens with DeMar DeRozan. Let's see. We have some updates here. Chris Haynes reported that the Lakers are pursuing Danny Green. Let's see. Dennis Schroeder expected to engage in talks with the New York Knicks. Schroeder's interesting because with Russell Westbrook going to the Lakers, he's kind of left without a home. He hasn't really been talked about a whole lot. I think people are focusing on some others. I know Chicago was mentioned as a possibility there, but what are your guys' thoughts on Schroeder and the fit with the Knicks? I think the Knicks are interesting. They have so much cap space, $50 million. We really haven't heard them come up much. In rumors, there was some talk that they might try to keep that cap flexibility for next summer whenever guys like Bradley Beal, Zach LaVine, other big names are available. Nekias, what do you think about Schroeder possibly to the Knicks?
Schroeder to the Knicks is a fit that I'm not a huge fan of. Like, I do think Dennis Schroeder had a pretty good year last year with the Lakers as a point of attack defender, and I think that would vibe very well with what Tom Thibodeau wants to do defensively. Just having more pressure at the point of attack. The Knicks were one of the better defenses in the league last year, but I am a little bit concerned about what it looks like offensively. Like, obviously he gets to the rim. I don't know how much I believe in the shot. Like, he shot very well in OKC. It was kind of an up and down year with the Lakers last year. Doesn't have much pick and roll equity. I don't know how much he unlocks Julius Randle in pick and roll in particular. I think you're just going to duck under those screens if those two try to hook up offensively. I think that's putting a lot of pressure on RJ Barrett to continue to grow as a spot-up shooter. Did have a very good season last year, but he's going to have to commit. I mean, he's going to have to draw like legitimate attention as an off-ball spacer and as an off-ball mover to kind of open up the floor for those two guys to work.
Anyone else that have thoughts on Schroeder? By the way, Jackson Frank joining us now. What's up, Jackson? How you doing?
Doing well. How's everyone here?
Good. We are excited, getting ready for a ton of rumors, I'm sure, popping in. So we'll see. As things break, we're going to keep talking about them here. Anyone else have thoughts on Schroeder and possible destinations?
I kind of like Schroeder to Washington. I don't know about anyone else, but that seems like maybe a fit. We've heard him kind of linked a little bit to Washington. That's another destination potentially for him. I like it a lot more than New York, like what Nekias said. I don't know if I like the fit in New York there. Maybe someone else like a Washington makes more sense, potentially New Orleans. But it's going to be interesting what kind of market Schroeder gets because we've been hearing some of these point guards in their range of annual value. I'm kind of curious to see where Schroeder falls in that.
One more rumor here. Ramona Shelburne says the Lakers are not done pursuing Buddy Hield. So that is interesting. I think once the Russell Westbrook trade happened, a lot of people figured that was, those talks were done. I'm not sure what they have that could make sense for Sacramento, but, the Hield fit obviously be great for the Lakers, but I'm not sure how that works for the Kings. Spencer, I see you reacting. What are your thoughts there?
The only thing I could think of is maybe a multi-team deal in that situation since the deal isn't, official yet, I don't think, between the Lakers and the Wizards, that they could branch that out into something bigger. That's literally what I'm thinking right now. Just the only way, because there's nothing left that the Lakers have to offer over. So just a thought.
So
would it be like?
Go ahead. No, you're good.
I was about to say, like, would it be like Harold being rerouted and Schroeder in a sign and trade as well, like going to Washington or something like that? That's
Mega
the only thing
deal.
I
You know,
can
like kind of how like New Orleans did it last year when they got Adams and Bledsoe, and it just kind of expanded. That's the only thing I can think of in that situation, especially contract-wise too. Not thinking off at the top of my head.
I got you.
Interesting. I'm curious, Matt. Buddy Hield's someone that we've heard rumors he's disgruntled. It hasn't even been very subtle at times. He's liking tweets and things about wanting out of Sacramento. When you have a player that doesn't want to be with their current team, as you know, as a guy that has represented players, people that don't know, Matt's a former agent. What is that like when you have a guy that's disgruntled and you're trying to look around the league for, possible destinations for him?
Well, I mean, it depends on the player and sort of what their status is at. I mean, with Buddy, he's making a lot of money. And so, I mean, just because he's disgruntled doesn't mean it's, it'll be easy to move him. So it really just kind of depends on the situation. I mean, if you've got a young guy that's on a rookie contract and, and things aren't going well with the team, that's a lot easier to get a move done. I mean, if you have the conversation with the GM where you sort of mutually agree, hey, this isn't working, do you mind if I, start calling teams and help kind of broker a trade? That's something that happens. But we're talking about a guy with big money. That's usually pretty complicated.
I want to talk about Spencer Dinwiddie because, he is one of the bigger name players, too, that's available. Initially, there was a lot of talk that Washington could make sense, that he had interest in going to the Wizards and that a sign and trade could be possible. And then Jake Fisher said that at the moment, the Nets aren't interested in Kyle Kuzma or Montrezl Harrell, so that could kind of hurt those sign and trade talks. Jackson, you did a great article for us at basketballnews.com about Spencer Dinwiddie and, the value that he brings to a team and some possible destinations. What are you looking for Spencer and, what do you think he could get in free agency? And then what are some teams that could make sense for him?
Yeah, I think anywhere in that $20 to $25 million range is pretty reasonable. I know, I get there's some hesitancy about a guy who's never been an all-star, but I think if you're kind of trying to find a guy who's right and below that kind of that sub all-star level as a creator, I think he fits that mold. I mentioned a few teams in that article, but the Knicks, the fit I love the most, especially with the news that comes out that they're likely to be able to retain Nerlens Noel. Mitch Robinson will be healthy again, so you get, assuming Mitch Robinson continues to grow with improving his discipline and whatnot, you get 48 minutes of high-level rim protection there. And so I like that fit a lot. The Knicks just obviously need some more floor spacing, but beyond that, they just need someone who can kind of turn the corner from the perimeter and get downhill. Dinwiddie is one of the best kind of drivers and guys who can get paint touches in the NBA. Pretty good lob passer as well. Mitch Robinson, they benefit there. And they have some shooters. Burks was good from through last year. Nekias mentioned RJ Barrett took a huge leap as a spot-up shooter. So I like that fit a lot. I think Washington makes some sense as well, but I think I worry a little bit about the defensive infrastructure there. Part of the reason I love the Knicks fit is because they have the defense in place there to insulate some of what where Dinwiddie struggles, especially at the point of attack. So that's my number one fit. I think New Orleans makes some sense. But again, I worry about the defense there with a Zion, Ingram, Dinwiddie trio. And so that's kind of where I stand. But I think that I think a lot of teams make sense offensively, but it's about preventing how often Dinwiddie has to guard a top tier creator. Because the last year with the Nets, didn't have a lot of great perimeter defenders, and so he was guarding Luka sometimes. He was guarding LeBron in games, and so you don't want Dinwiddie on the ball that much. You really want to minimize how often he has to be involved in the action, which isn't a great sign for his defense. But I don't think it's like the bottom rung. But I think he's a guy that you want to minimize how often he's involved in things. So for that reason, I like the Knicks a lot, just what he offers offensively and what they offer defensively.
Just an update there. Shams Charania says that Spencer Dinwiddie is set to meet with the Wizards at the start of free agency. It seems like he has his eyes on Washington. So we'll see if there is some kind of sign and trade that can be worked out between the Wizards and Nets. That's really the only way that Washington can, give Spencer the money that he wants. So we'll see what happens there. We also have an update. John Collins and the Hawks are not close to a deal, and there's not momentum toward a deal right now. That's really interesting. Nekias, you've been kind of calling this from the beginning whenever they loaded up on forwards, and you kind of said maybe there wasn't a future for John Collins there, or that they wouldn't pay him maybe some of the money that he wanted. Could you see, it's possible that this is just a sticking point and they kind of get past this and do agree to a bigger deal, but what are your thoughts on hearing that?
I just found it kind of funny. Like when I wrote, I was doing like the divisional season previews before the season started, and one of my main points on Atlanta was like, they've added a lot of guys that can play the 4 and or the 5, and John Collins is set to be paid. And then the report comes out before the season that he turned down like a $90 million contract. And it's like, I wonder where this is going to go. And now it's looking like that continues. Like they haven't been able to agree to anything. Like, I don't know if it's dire because ultimately someone can offer John Collins a contract and Atlanta can just match it and then we're just done with it. But it's still kind of telling that this hasn't been a clean re-signing based on the year that Collins had to adjust to a slightly different role on both ends of the floor and performed well, and then kind of boosted his stock a little bit in the postseason, like a little bit uneven offensively, but was able to dig deep and make impact plays elsewhere. It's like a weak side rim protector, timely offensive rebounds, knock down timely threes. Defenses still did not guard him, despite this being like year 2.5 of him being a solid spot-up shooter. Not sure why teams still treat him like a non-shooter at this point, but whatever. But I don't know. It's just interesting that this hasn't been like an open and shut case for him.
Yeah, for sure.
I'd like to jump in on that one. So
yeah, go ahead.
One thing, and Nekias, you brought this up, is with him being a restricted free agent. I mean, Travis Schlenk doesn't have to break the bank if the market's not demanding, a certain number, for John. So I don't blame Travis to kind of playing it sort of shrewd and giving him an opportunity to see what kind of money he can get on the open market, because they always have the option of just matching it.
Yeah, that's why it's so tough to be a restricted free agent. Like, it's not a great position to be in. We see some of these guys, it typically takes a long time for them to get that contract worked out. And then there's so many guys that don't end up getting the money they ended up wanting in the, from when free agency started. One more update. The Lakers, we mentioned that they're pursuing Danny Green, but there's some talk that I guess Kyle Goon says that he'd be surprised if he ended up in LA. He mentioned staying in Philly and Miami as possible options for Danny Green. So we'll keep kind of mentioning different rumors that pop up. The Mavericks are expected to re-sign Tim Hardaway Jr. I don't think that's much of a surprise. Both those sides have been talking about, staying together long term. So I'm curious, what are some of the free agents that you guys are paying close attention to? And, you want to kind of see where they land. Spencer, is there anyone that you're kind of following or situations that you're monitoring?
So just the one that came up for me, at least in the last couple hours, was the Jarrett Allen deal. That is at least the framework of a deal that would be that Mark Stein reported earlier, about 5 years, $100 million for Jarrett Allen. Obviously a restricted free agent, drew multiple suitors. Toronto was supposed to pursue him heavily. The Hornets, I'm pretty sure, were out of the picture once they acquired Mason Plumlee and then drafted another big, on Thursday. But I think with Jarrett Allen, a lot of people are confused a little bit around the league because they just drafted Evan Mobley. But they are really putting in their chips there with Mobley and Allen being in the same front court, and also using Mobley as a backup five, if you will, because Isaiah Hartenstein actually just did not get offered the qualifying offer by the front office. So clearly a lot of plans for Jarrett Allen. This is an interesting deal for me. I'm kind of indifferent on it. I don't think it's good or bad, because at this point there's a little bit of an unknown. Jarrett Allen is 23 years old, though he does have 4 years of experience in the league. There's still a lot left in his development to go here. He's obviously a low usage guy, somebody who's great at cleaning up, setting screens, a decent passer, somebody who's trying to extend a little bit on the shooting, and probably it would be good for him to learn a little bit of a face-up game. But with Evan Mobley there now, what his role is going to be. It's going to be to get rebounds, block shots, and really pretty much just, set screens for guys. And he's just so good at anticipating plays before they happen. And I think that knowing that he's 23 years old, he's not even close to his prime yet, and they could get him for $20 million a year, which, is quite a pretty penny, but it's really not that bad of a value in today's league, at least. And especially because you don't know how much further his ceiling will, ascend to. But I am quite intrigued by that fit with him and Evan Mobley together, and we'll see how it goes.
I do want to say, if anyone has any questions or comments, feel free to drop them in the chat and we'll throw them up on screen and talk about them. We are getting some comments about Nekias' awesome dunker spot shirt. Let's show everyone that, Nekias. Actually, there's a lot of these comments. So let's
break out the phone. You got to get the flashlight on that puppy. Can really see the details of the shirt.
Hold on,
we're gonna get employee discounts on those.
There it is.
Yes, we do, Matt.
I need more of those. The dunker spot.
Hey, beautiful, beautiful.
We here,
You can
folks. We here.
That is at shop.basketballnews.com. So check that out. A little plug there. Yeah. So if anyone has any questions or comments, throw them in the chat. Some people are asking about the Boston Celtics. Let's talk about them for a second, because there was a report yesterday that they're mostly targeting role players. There was Jeff Green, Avery Bradley, Kelly Olynyk, 3 former Celtics that are being targeted. Apparently, Rudy Gay, Patty Mills also being discussed. What are we thinking Boston could look to do during this free agency period?
I would imagine they target some backcourt depth. They don't have a ton of like guys you feel confident playing heavy minutes at the guard position. Obviously, Marcus Smart. You can play Jaylen Brown at the 2. But other than that, Peyton Pritchard had a nice rookie year, but I don't think you want to lean too heavily on him. Chris Dunn was a lot better his final year in Chicago. Struggled last with some injuries. The offense wasn't very good. I may be missing maybe a guard or 2, but I would look for them to find someone who they can maybe play 15 to 18 minutes. Just give them a little more guard depth there, because I do worry a little bit about that, especially in the event of the guy missing time. Marcus Smart's not necessarily injury prone, but he's always a guy that maybe misses 10 to 15 games a year, just because of how much he's asked to do on defense and the way that he always is willing to take those risks. So I think adding a little more guard depth, solidifying that rotation would help. And again, if anyone wants to chime in terms of maybe I'm missing a guy in the guard depth, but that's kind of how I see them trying to approach some of their small avenues to free agency here.
Does Frank Ntilikina fit that bill to you as somebody that would play 15 into 18, especially the defensive way that they're trying to go as well under Udoka?
Yeah, to me, it feels a little too much like an overlap with Chris Dunn. I get the appeal. I think there's probably a higher ceiling there with Ntilikina than Dunn. But you're looking at 2 guys who have some size and length and point of attack, but really need to take strides as offensive players to be viable for more than 7 to 8 minutes. But I get the appeal. If they didn't have them, and I guess they haven't officially made the trade for Chris Dunn.
Yeah, if they flip him, then that's probably more of a thought. Yeah.
There was also a report. Adam Himmelsbach said they might be looking to flip him. So interesting there.
In that event, then I think there's definitely some appeal there, because they could just use. I think they could definitely use that. Especially not because like Marcus Smart's out the door, but I think he's in his final year. You don't know what the market's gonna be like for him next year, so a little insurance. And not to say that Ntilikina is going to replace Marcus Smart, but having a guy who might be a viable point of attack defender for 15 to 20 minutes a night would be a nice investment, I think.
I think they could also use another true point guard. I mean, like a third guard, because really Peyton Pritchard's their only true point guard, really, on the offensive end.
Yeah, just someone who can organize the offense, let Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum do some of their off-ball stuff.
Exactly.
Tatum always took a huge step forward the last year or so, but yeah, just someone to maybe let them play off the ball, let them play in the post, let Jaylen Brown be the cutter and attacking closeouts. I think would definitely help. So I definitely agree with Matt there.
Someone who I think might make a little bit of sense with Boston, I'm curious to see where his market is, his campaign in Phoenix. There's rumors that he might re-sign on really a hometown discount with the Suns, but I'm curious to see where campaign does land, because he's one of those guys to me where it feels like he could really add a lot of creation. He's improved as a playmaker as well, so maybe he can fit in Boston as well as that third guard like Matt mentioned.
One rumor
he's
that's
a spark plug for Phoenix off the bench. He come in and made all kinds of stuff happen, gets to his spots. He's really grown as a player.
His story is incredible too. Going from getting cut in China and being out of the NBA, and you have people kind of bashing him. The Chicago Bulls, when he was there, they said some negative things, and the coaching staff said they knew within 5 minutes he wasn't an NBA player. To go from that to contributing in the finals to, now hopefully he gets a nice payday. Pretty cool for him. Chris Haynes, says that the Lakers are, quote, trying to get the band back together and bring back players from their 2020 title team. You've heard the Dwight Howard rumors. Now there's the Danny Green stuff. So pretty interesting that they're trying to bring some players back. Aton Thomas, one of our writers, former player at basketballnews.com, he was adamant that they shouldn't have let go of Dwight and JaVale McGee last offseason. So I'm sure he loves this. What do you guys think of the rumor that the Lakers are trying to reunite that team from 2020? Anyone have thoughts?
I get it. Like, I think especially since they've traded Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. They've traded Kyle Kuzma. Well, at least they're going to whenever the deal's official, whatever the wording we want to work with it. They're going to need some perimeter shooting because if you have a big three of Russell Westbrook, Anthony Davis, and LeBron James, you are going to need not just spacers, but guys that can really move off the ball and maximize the attention that those other guys are going to draw as drivers. So Danny Green, to this day, is one of the best off-ball movers in the NBA. Very smart relocator. I mean, he has a cut named after him, basically going from opposite corners. So, like, he's going to help there. And then just the big man rotation, like, as talented as a player as Montrezl Harrell is, like, he is, I think it's fair to say, limited defensively. Was a little bit better last year than I anticipated he would be, but still leaves a lot to be desired on that end. Like Dwight Howard for all of the antics and the fouls and the fouls and the fouls and also more fouls. He is still a strong post defender. He is a solid rim protector. Can obviously still operate in drop coverage if they need him to. And the locker room oddly liked them quite a bit last year. So like I think if you can get both of those guys back at a reasonable price, like I would assume it's going to be like the vet's minimum for Dwight or probably a little bit of what did the Lakers have? The taxpayers MLE probably.
Yeah.
I mean, like
5.9.
Yeah, so if you can get Dwight and Danny back, like that helps in a multitude of areas.
Yeah, I'm curious. The Dwight situation last year was so strange, where he tweeted out apparently about having a contract and then, it kind of fell through. Then he goes to Philly. It wouldn't be a Dwight Howard free agency without something like that. So we'll see what happens there. But maybe
I remember talking about that last year too. Like it happened like when we were doing one of these shows and we were like, what the heck is going on?
It was so weird. We got 1 minute until free agency starts. Again, we'll be on here until 9:30 p.m. Eastern time, breaking down every rumor that pops up. I want to ask you guys this. There was a report earlier from Mark Stein saying that the Celtics might bring back Isaiah Thomas. That would be kind of a feel-good story. We all know how he left Boston and obviously he dealt with injuries. He played 3 games with the Pelicans this year. So interesting there. What do you guys make of that? He hasn't been able to really find a spot in the NBA over the last 2 years. The Pelicans only brought him in, I think, on a 10-day and cut him. So he's a fan favorite there. What do you guys think of IT possibly going back to Boston?
I mean, he just has so little explosiveness compared to his prime. And that was kind of the basis of his ability to, stretch the floor, set that up for drives, and make things happen there. In Sacramento, he was one of the best rim finishers for a guard. Despite being 5'9", 5'8". But the last few years, ever since that, was a torn labrum in his hip, I believe was the injury he suffered. And whatever it was in that lower body, it's really sapped him of his burst and explosiveness. That was really the basis of what he could do offensively. And obviously we know how much he is, behind the 8 ball defensively, whether it's a size, navigating screens, whatever it is. I think it'd be cool. Like he seems to be someone that, a lot of people get along with in the locker room, but from an on-court standpoint, I don't think he'd really affect Celtics' outcome next year. I just don't think he's quite the level of athlete anymore, and that burst was really key to what he could do as a prolific offensive player back, half a decade ago.
Well, we are underway.
First piece of news is here already.
Lonzo Ball, a 4-year, $85 million offer sheet with the Chicago Bulls. Not a huge surprise there. We kind of talked about this over the last few days. Thoughts on? Do we think the Pelicans match 4 years, $85 million? And how do you guys think Lonzo fits in Chicago?
Well,
feel free.
I'll start. Yeah, let me hop in with how on earth did they negotiate that deal in 34 seconds? That is incredible to me. But beyond that, no, I don't think New Orleans matches. I think they should match that. Like, I think anything under honestly anything under like 24 mil a year for Lonzo, I would match. Like, that's my opinion. Like, I'm not working for a team, obviously, so take that with a grain of salt if you want to. But I do like the fit in Chicago. Like, I do think they're still like a rim pressure guy short of really making that work. Like Vooch very much, he's a post-up guy, but doesn't really threaten the rim in that way. Isn't really a rim runner in that way. Like Zach LaVine is the one guy in the starting lineup, at least, that can get to the rim basically whenever he wants to. And I think you want to maximize guys that can really draw attention and put pressure on the rim so you can maximize what Lonzo does off the ball as a mover and also just an advantage passer, just a guy that can take advantage of closeouts. Doesn't get to the rim and score for himself, but if a defense is bent, like he's just one of the smartest guys in the league, can make every pass you need him to kind of keep the chain moving there. So I get it. I think Chicago will just have more work to be done to really maximize what Lonzo can do.
I worry a little more defensively. I worry that they might trust Lonzo as a point of attack defender, and that's very much not his strong suit. But offensively, I think I would agree that maybe the one driver short, but in terms of like guys who create advantages with Vooch and Levine in different ways too, I think that fit is really good. But I think I'm a little lower than Nekias, the high end of what I'd offer him. I think I would offer, I think 490 would be about my top end. But then you're splitting hairs. It's $1.5 million over, per year. But I like the fit. It's not perfect, but it's tough to find perfect fits for guys of this caliber usually.
We have a few more rumors coming in here, or I guess agreements. Tim Hardaway Jr. has agreed to a 4-year, $72 million deal with the Mavericks, according to Shams. Mike Conley on a 3-year, $68 million deal with the Utah Jazz. Duncan Robinson expected to sign a deal or agree to a deal today on day one here, according to Mark Stein. So it seems like Duncan Robinson will be back in Miami. We also have a deal for Boban. There's no details yet, but he's agreed to a deal to re-sign with the Mavericks. So a lot of guys staying with their current teams. Not a huge surprise there. We talked about Lonzo a little bit. Tim Hardaway Jr., do you guys think, I know Nekias, you wrote a great article about the Mavericks situation and kind of where they go from here. Do you think this is the right move to bring back Hardaway Jr. at this, $72 million over 4 years? Or where do they kind of go from here, when you look at this Mavericks team?
I really would have preferred. Well, let me start here. Tim Hardaway Jr. is a good player, and he had a really good season last year. And for large portions of last season, he was Dallas' second best player. And I think that's also a problem for Dallas. If Tim Hardaway Jr. is the second best player alongside Luka, you want KP to fill that void, or you just want somebody better than Tim Hardaway Jr. So, what Dallas is missing, at least offensively, they need someone that can take some of the creation burden off of Luka. And this is why I really like the DeMar DeRozan fit. Doesn't seem like that's going to happen, especially with them giving Tim Hardaway Jr. this money, but he deserves every penny. He did grow as a creator last year. That still isn't what you want him to be as his primary role. He's very much a shooter and a guy that can work off ball and can attack or close out on occasion. So it's good value for Dallas. Tim Hardaway Jr. is worth it. I don't think this signing feels what Dallas really needs, if that makes sense. They still have more work to be done, I guess is the best way to phrase that.
I think this takes Dallas out of the DeRozan race too, re-signing him and Boban. So I think they're pretty close there on the cap.
It's a good point there. Some more news here. Kyle Lowry expected to sign a 3-year deal with the Heat after the sign and trade. We all knew about the sign and trade, but 3-year deal coming. So there's some confusion. Garrett Temple, according to David Aldridge, Garrett Temple has agreed to a deal. He said the New Orleans Hornets. So I'm not sure if that's the New Orleans Pelicans or the Charlotte Hornets. We'll get some clarification there.
Hey, there was a detail, by the way, on the Lonzo thing. Remember how he asked if he was match? Well, it's a sign and trade. So something going back to New Orleans in that one, I'm guessing.
And it actually is the New Orleans Pelicans. So Garrett Temple to the New Orleans Pelicans. So interesting there. It's a 2-year, $5 million deal. So interesting there. Well, we'll see what the Pelicans get back for Lonzo. So then, he's definitely going to be in Chicago. So I guess we kind of talked a little bit about it. Anyone else have thoughts on Lonzo in Chicago?
I love the fit. Quite honestly, him and Zach LaVine are a perfect complement. You add him in Nikola Vucevic. I think that team, if you can make another big move, we've heard DeMar DeRozan could be a guy out there in a signing trade with Lauri Markkanen. Even without DeRozan, I think this Bulls team, adding Lonzo, who I think hasn't hit his peak yet, he's continuously improved as a three-point shooter. I think this Bulls team has a really good chance of making the playoffs next year as a 7 or 8 seed, potentially more than that. I love the fit all around for Lonzo. I think he's such an underrated player, and he's going to continue. I think he's going to really earn that contract, $21 million per year.
One thing that Jake Fisher said when he was on my podcast is that the Bulls are looking to sign multiple point guards this offseason. So, Lonzo's obviously the first one, but they could be looking to sign other point guards too. There's been the Derrick Rose rumors. Don't think that just because they got Lonzo that they're out of the running for, some of these other point guards. It sounds like they want to, go ahead and bring in some other point guards too. And yeah, I agree with you, Evan. They wanted to basically have some facilitating and playmaking, but the fact that he can provide that while also, kind of covering up some of their defensive issues, I think it makes a lot of sense. So I like that too. Let's see. Jimmy Butler expected to agree to a max extension with the Miami Heat on August 6th when the league year opens. We also have Reggie Bullock as being linked to the Cleveland Cavaliers. So we'll see if that ends up happening. All right. And if you guys see anything too, feel free to jump in. I'm also keep an eye on our comments. If you guys have any questions or comments, definitely, drop those in. Someone said Reggie Jackson to the Pelicans. Is that? Oh, they're just asking a question about it. Never mind. I thought I missed it.
Furkan Korkmaz is also being linked to the Cavs, which is interesting.
That makes a lot of sense, just given his relationship with Cedi Osman and the Turkish team, obviously. And the Cavs have that money now to go after a wing after they figured out their backup point guard situation by acquiring Ricky Rubio on draft night. So that makes a lot of sense to go after Reggie Bullock or a Furkan Korkmaz.
I'm curious, Nekias, what are your thoughts on the max extension for Jimmy Butler? 4 years, around $184 million, according to this.
Necessary. Like, I think the point of getting a star in, going back to 2019 when Miami was able to acquire Jimmy Butler, you want to get a star in the room, and once you get your star in the room, you have to pay your star. Jimmy Butler has been an all-star, an all-NBA caliber player. He's led the Miami Heat to a finals. Despite having COVID this year, and the Heat just dealing with a lot of weirdness, as did other teams, but Miami was hit pretty hard with injuries and COVID this season. Jimmy Butler had the best season of his career this year. Like, he was an absolute demon on defense, got to the rim whenever he wanted to on offense. Like, his free throw rate was absurd this year. The true shooting percentage was also absurd, considering that he could not make a jump shot to save his life for 98% of the season. And, like, if this is what you're getting from him right now, then of course you keep him happy, you pay him what he's worth. And if, this is obviously looking down the road, but like, if the wheels fall off with Jimmy Butler, like, this is a Heat organization that has gotten out of bad money before. So I don't really see much long-term risk with it either. And in the short term, of course you do it. Like, Jimmy Butler right now is conservatively a top 15 player in the league.
And of course they took care of Bam last fall. So there's your two at the top right there. Another piece of information that's coming in on the Bulls and Pelicans sign and trade. So the Bulls are going to send back Tomas Satoransky, Garrett Temple. So he's signing and trading there. So it's a double sign and trade, and a second rounder going to the Pelicans for Lonzo Ball in return. So there's that. Yeah. So what are we thinking about that return? I mean, I think Sato's a pretty underrated player. Just as far as his ability to, he's a scorer, but he can also create for others, and he's got good size for being a guard. So I think that's him and Garrett Temple, maybe not quite what Lonzo Ball brings to the table, but also kind of different in their playing styles anyway.
I like it. Both guys are, from my end anyway, both guys are very good team defenders, and let's just say that New Orleans needs a few of those to complement Brandon Ingram and Zion Williamson. And if it's also true that there's a little bit of like organizational or locker room type weirdness surrounding like Brandon Ingram or Zion, we've heard more smoke about Zion than Brandon Ingram, to be fair. But if that's true, then like by all accounts, Garrett Temple has been like an elite locker room guy for basically his entire career.
Absolutely.
So that obviously helps. And then on the court, if you're looking at the other end of the floor, like Garrett Temple can knock down shots. You don't really need high usage guys if you have Brandon Ingram and Zion already. Tomas Satoransky is a smart passer, a solid shooter, just a solid all-around guard. Sounds very cliche, but like, he just does what you need him to do on that offensive end of the floor. So like, if you're going to lose Lonzo, like, are those two guys in a second worth Lonzo in a vacuum? Absolutely not. But if you're losing him, you're able to get two solid veterans that can help you on and off the court, and also you can point out pretty easy fits on both ends of the floor, how they surround your two stars. I mean, that's a pretty solid job done.
Yeah, get something back for them. We have a few updates here. Alec Burks gets 3 years, $30 million to stay with the Knicks. And then JaMychal Green agreed to a 2-year, $17 million deal with the Denver Nuggets. So he'll be back there.
Knicks also just brought back Nerlens Noel, 3 years, $32 million.
So interesting. There was some talk about, what the Knicks would be doing. It seems like, right now they're prioritizing their own free agents, but after that, do we think they're going to go out and try to make some big splash? DeMar DeRozan, some people were mad in our comments that we didn't mention the Knicks as a possibility for DeRozan, but do you think they're going to, sit back and kind of wait until next year to spend their money? Or what are your guys' thoughts on what we're seeing from the Knicks?
First of all, if they go after DeRozan, I mean, you're just really turning the clock back and giving Tibbs exactly what he wants as far as stylistically, offensively. But no, I think that they understand how necessary chemistry is in this league. I think they also have to address different areas, like they were saying earlier about, finding someone who's a primary shot creator, not putting all of that on Julius Randle being the guy in the mid post and trying to make things happen on his own. But as far as the big fish are concerned, I don't know if they're going to really force themselves to use the room they have this year, where a 2022 class, like you wrote for basketballnews.com, could be very fruitful.
For sure.
I mean, this team was a number 4 seed in the East this year. Running it back, bringing back that continuity. If you can add a splashy piece, or maybe even not a splashy piece, like an Evan Fournier, I think that makes a lot of sense for the Knicks. I think we saw it this year with the Phoenix Suns. Continuity, you add in a big piece, and you can make a jump like that. So I do wonder how the Knicks will do this year, but I love them bringing back these guys, just having that continuity on the roster. And nowadays, it's such an underrated aspect.
Yeah, and they were being linked to Fournier, so good call there. It seems like that's a possibility. Apparently, Boston's kind of moved on. They realized they're not going to be able to keep him, and the Knicks have been mentioned as a top contender for him. Let's see, anything else that is popping up? There you go, Jarrett Allen. That deal is official. 5 years, $100 million. So Spencer, keep an eye on that situation. Let's see. Any moves we've seen so far that you guys want to react to, or that you're surprised by, or any rumors that have popped up? Feel free to jump in.
I just want to go back to like an earlier prompt about free agents that we were going to be monitoring. Like y'all talked about Frank Ntilikina a little bit. He was on my list. I still want to see what happens with Justice Winslow. Like I still very much believe in him. What he can be is very much in question at this point. Like year of injuries, roster changes and stuff, so a lot of weirdness around him. But he's still a very good wing defender. I do think he can get to the rim. Once he gets there, it's still an adventure. That's obviously a problem in today's NBA. But a guy that can get to the rim, still a heady pick and roll passer. Like I think if he finds a spot, probably for the minimum or a little bit above that, and on kind of like a prove it deal somewhere, like I think he could flourish somewhere. Like I tweeted about it, I think yesterday when people were asking, or when his team option got declined, I was like, I would like to see him in Denver. Like if they just want to add some perimeter depth, like I think he's a guy that can flow off of Jokic or just help run the second unit, or just gives them another defender to throw out there when they need him to. A spot like that, I think he's from Houston. So like if he just wants kind of like a prove it deal to say, hey, here's the ball, see what you can do. Let's see if we can get something for you at the trade deadline. Like maybe that's a spot for him, something like that. I'm just curious to see where he goes. Like I still have the Miami ties to him, so I'm always going to be invested to see what happens with him.
For sure. Anyone else have any other free agents they want to keep an eye on, or they're paying close attention to?
Just tying it back to going back to the repercussions of the fallout of Lonzo to New Orleans. I'm curious to see like who, if any, of the three of Najee Marshall, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Kyra Lewis kind of solidifies a spot in the rotation next year. Now bringing in a couple of viable rotation guards and Thomas Adorant and Garrett Temple maybe muddies it a little bit, but I think part of the reason maybe New Orleans is willing to part with Lonzo was because of the confidence in either one of those or all three of them, making a step forward. Marshall was, Najee was a great perimeter defender last year. Good kind of a passer, attacking closeouts, good cutter. Jumper is still work in progress, but Nickeil, good pick and roll ball handler, shows flashes, good spot up shooter. Kyra was fantastic at the point of attack, really good getting downhill. So curious if Lonzo's departure paves the way for any of them, but also wondering kind of how the arrival of Satoransky and Temple interferes with that at all. But I'm curious to kind of see how those three come along next season.
I think Marshall, he has a lot of fans in the organization there. Corey Brewer has written some articles for us at Basketball News, and he was an assistant coach last year with the Pelicans, player development coach. Now, obviously, they've changed their coaching staff, but he said, Marshall blew everyone away, and he said he's the kind of guy that a few years from now, we could be looking at him and saying, how did this guy go undrafted? So he definitely looked good behind the scenes there and, has some fans there. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. Let's see. Kelly Olynyk gets 3 years, $37 million from the Pistons. I think, Evan, you wrote about Olynyk's stretch with the Rockets last year and just how productive he was. The numbers, I think, would surprise a lot of people if it was obviously a small sample size, I think 27 games, but, he did really well and made the most of that opportunity. What are we thinking about this Olynyk deal for the Pistons?
I mean, it's something they need, floor space with Cade Cunningham on board. I love the fit with Olynyk. I think he's deserving of that money, what we saw in Houston. Small sample size, like you mentioned, Alex, but 19 points per game. I think that's something that Detroit could really use. Isaiah Stewart and him is a really good center combination as well. Detroit needs to target shooting. So adding Olynyk right away in free agency, I think that's a really good deal for Detroit.
Anyone else? Thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I think just giving Killian Hayes a DHO partner, giving Cade Cunningham a pick and pop partner. He complements Isaiah Stewart well. Isaiah Stewart stretched the floor a little bit at times last year, but is very much good at kind of cleaning up the glass, playing inside a little bit. So really, just I think I like the fit there. Good players who complement young guys well really help that sort of development with those guys. And the Pistons have a pretty interesting foundation there with Cade Cunningham or Killian, Sadiq Bey, and Isaiah Stewart. And I think Olynyk pairs well with all of them. That's something that's useful. So I really like that move.
For sure. We will be streaming on here until 9:30 p.m. Eastern time. Thanks for hanging out with us. If you guys have any questions or comments, drop them in the chat. I also want to thank our sponsor, Panini. Panini is the exclusive trading card partner of the NBA. You can get Panini's NBA trading cards featuring all of the league's top players, including rookies and free agents on the move at Walmart, Target, hobby stores nationwide, and online at paniniamerica.net. They also have their Panini Instant Draft cards. The draft night cards are still available. They're available until Tuesday, August 10th. We actually have a few of them here. Let's throw them up on screen for a second. So if you guys want any of these draft night cards that Panini has, go ahead and check those out. They're available until August 10th. So be sure to get those. And thanks to Panini. All right. We'll keep an eye on any moves up. TJ McConnell returns to the Pacers. Not a huge surprise there. We don't have the contract details yet, but once we do, we could talk about that. Let's see. Any other rumors you guys are seeing?
Mike Conley back in Utah for $372.5.
Okay, I mean that was one that I think wasn't a huge surprise. What do you think, Nekias?
I was just about to say, I think Shams had it at 3 years, 68, and then Woj came in with 3 years, 72.5. So it's like one of those, a contract that doesn't include potential incentives or something like that. Is that where kind of that discrepancy comes in at?
Probably.
Sounds like maybe Woj got the agent call and Shams got the front office call or something like that. So
that would make sense. Yeah, I think
good
once
old
they
discrepancies.
once they did the Derek Favors to OKC move, it seemed like they were trying to free up some cap room, and everyone's kind of linking Conley back to Utah. So not a huge surprise. I'm curious, who do you guys think is going to be the biggest player to change teams? Of the guys that we haven't talked about yet. I think a lot of these guys have returned back. There was a rumor, which is interesting. We can talk about this too. Kawhi Leonard is apparently going to take some meetings. He's expected to re-sign with the Clippers, but if you're the Clippers, are you kind of worried about the fact that, he's taking meetings when that really wasn't something that was rumored or discussed until maybe yesterday? I think Chris Haynes came out with that he was going to be taking meetings. Any thoughts on that?
I mean, if you're taking meetings, it's just taking meetings. I don't think that there's too much to, have some hoopla over. I mean, I think Chris Paul's doing the same thing. It's just you're just hearing some other teams out, right?
Is Chris Paul doing the same thing?
I think from what I've heard, I think Chris Paul is going to be signing here pretty soon. I don't think he's going to be taking any meetings with anyone.
Okay. I just think it's interesting. Everyone's, basically assumed that he's going back to LA, and it's probably happening. Don't get me wrong. But, if you're the Clippers, I'd be sweating a little bit just because that's not a great sign that he wants to at least hear other teams out. I don't know.
I'm curious as to what the incentive would be to leave though, because I feel like they did a fine job this year. There's just a stroke of terrible luck for him.
Sure,
but I feel like the team building around him was fine. Thought Paul George was excellent in the playoffs. I thought that the fact that they brought Reggie Jackson back and what he did in the postseason. Marcus Morris, they had a good solid team. I don't think that wherever else he can go, wherever he can get paid, would be a better situation than where he's at now. That's at least my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree with that. There's really not a whole lot of options out there that make a ton of sense. And also, I saw someone say the other day, I forget who it was, but the amount of control the Clippers have given him too. He can basically do whatever he wants there. Right. There was the reports that he was determining flight times and whether he would practice or not. And they've basically just said, do whatever you want. You're, our star player and we're happy to have you. So I think, if he were to go somewhere else, I'm sure that wouldn't be the case too. So that's also, there's nowhere else that can give him the same level, chance to contend as the Clippers, but also be so close to home, give them that power and that control within the organization. So yeah, it's probably not happening. But I don't know. I was surprised by that, just seeing that he's taking any meetings. I know you're saying, hey, they're just meetings, but that was something that kind of came out of nowhere that caught me off guard. But maybe
unless
I'm
he's taking a big pay cut. If he takes a big pay cut, then it's a different story.
Yeah, wait, Laker fans are going to jump in the comments saying he's signing for the mid-level here pretty soon. That's definitely coming. What do you anything else here we go. Looks like we have some details on the sign and trade between, the Heat and the Raptors for Kyle Lowry. The Heat are sending out Goran Dragic, Precious Achiuwa, and a future second-round pick in the sign and trade for Kyle Lowry. So thoughts on that return for Toronto? They could have traded him at the deadline, and there were some different rumors out there. Instead, they waited to do the sign and trade. Now they get back less than they probably would have at the deadline. What do you guys think of that return?
I'm also curious to see what happens with Goran Dragic too, because I believe that Mark Stein reported yesterday that he would be a candidate to get flipped to either Dallas or New Orleans. And now we know that New Orleans has their point guards. So Dallas and the connection to Luka, that sounds like a pretty fitting situation.
DeMar DeRozan, 2-year, $57 million deal with the Pelicans.
That might have been. Hold on, that you might have got.
Did we? Oh, our producer. Hey, Brian, you got to come on screen for that one. If you're going to give us fake news to say on the screen, you got to come on screen and defend yourself, because you made me look bad there. Oh man,
I am glad that was not real. I would have been very disenchanted by that fit.
Wow.
But
all right, Brian, before you post something in our chat, you got to look over it like 3-4 times now.
Show yourself.
Yeah, show yourself.
I got busted on that one, man.
Oh no.
I got busted, and then the second I was trying to correct you before you said it. So that's
Hey, I'm like Ron Burgundy. I say whatever's in the chat right there. So you got to be careful.
The worst thing is, though, the reason I got it is because somebody else that I follow actually retweeted. So somebody else got, and then they got me.
The double got.
That's tough.
Yeah.
All right. Well, DeMar DeRozan is not going to the Pelicans. I mean, not yet. He could be later. We don't know. But there's nothing decided yet. Sorry about that. All right. Let's see.
Outstanding.
Anything else? We do have some news here. The salary cap and the luxury tax are set for next season. The cap will be $119 million and the luxury tax at $145 million. So about $4 million higher than the previous projections. So that's interesting. Any other news you guys are seeing, or
can we go back to the Goran Dragic conversation? Yeah. Because like I said, he was linked to New Orleans and Dallas by Mark Stein. He reported that yesterday. But now that we know that the Pelicans have, Satoransky coming back, they have Garrett Temple over there. Is he still fit for that team? And then you think to yourself, with the Mavs, the Luka connection, Team Slovenia, that he would be a solid fit for that team, and just kind of spelling Luka, probably playing together as well. What would you guys think if he went over to Dallas, or do you think that he just ends up staying in Toronto?
I get it. I mean, I think it depends on what Dragic you get. If you get the version that was kind of, not, I wouldn't say relentlessly, but pretty comfortably getting into the paint in the bubble, or you get the one that kind of showed down the stretch of this past year, then I think he's a pretty useful fit, both in New Orleans or Dallas, especially Dallas, because the kind of the ease with which he might get some open looks and just be able to space the floor with how often teams trap Luka and throw multiple bodies at him would be there. But if you get the one who really struggled for part of this season, just really struggles from the corner, then it's probably not a very like functional offensive player beyond some some connective passing and some spot up shooting. But I get the allure, and I think I'm curious. I'm also curious like what Toronto does with him. I would imagine he's rerouted somewhere, whether it's right off of this deal or if it's by the trade deadline. Maybe we could see a buyout, but I feel like that would surprise me. Just because I think Toronto could at least. They have a lot of guys already there, but I think they could use Dragic services for the time being, depending on what their vision is, what its vision is. But that's kind of how I view it. I think it's just tough to know exactly who Dragic is at this point. There's been kind of a lot of different versions of him over the last year or so.
For sure. Yeah, I'm curious. They also, the Mavericks, not only they have the Luka connection, but they also brought in Igor as a assistant coach. So, he obviously worked both those players with the national team. So, a lot of connections there, ties. The Suns are showing interest in Gorgie Dang for the biannual exception. Evan, you're our Suns guy. You want to? Oh, wait, we also have Duncan Robinson staying with the Heat on a 4 or 5 year deal. But Evan, how do you feel about that? The Gorgie news?
It's interesting because he's not really a shot blocker, so to say. I think that's what Phoenix needs, is like an athletic guy to complement DeAndre and behind them. But he's a great floor spacer. He showed improvement as a three-point shooter over the last couple of years. I think he's a great pick and pop option the second year with a guy like Cameron Payne if he does re-sign. I think he's just a really smart, high IQ player. He fits Monty Williams' 0.5 system very well. For the biannual exception, I'm actually pretty intrigued by Gorgie. I think he's a pretty solid fit there.
Okay, and then Duncan Robinson, staying on a 4 or 5 year deal. Nekias, what are your thoughts on that? We had talked a little bit about at the beginning of the show about DeMar DeRozan rumors and just how it didn't make a whole lot of sense as far as him taking a pay cut or the spacing. Duncan back on a 4 or 5 year deal. We're not really sure exactly what the money is, but thoughts on them, keeping Robinson?
Gonna need the terms. So, I think if it's within, I can't remember who had the report out that said that Mike was trying to get him back on a deal between $16 to $18 million a year. If it's in that range, then you feel great about it. This is one of the best shooters on planet Earth. The off-ball equity is off the charts. The way he's used as a dribble handoff weapon, the way he comes off screens, the way he screens for Bam Adebayo on occasion. Just a lot of utility for him offensively, made strides defensively. Still wouldn't call him a plus per se. He can get a little hands. He can get himself in foul trouble. He's not going to be defending elite wings on purpose either, but can hold his own, rotates well. So he was, outside the top two, of course, Jimmy and Bam. He was Miami's third most important player last year, just for what he provides to the offense, because that offense absolutely sunk when he wasn't on the floor just because of the spacing that he provides. So even if you're adding Kyle Lowry, you still need someone like Duncan Robinson to take pressure off of everyone.
Campaign, we talked about him earlier. Just a cool story. He has 3 years, $19 million from the Suns, so he'll be staying in Phoenix. Again, not a huge surprise after how well he played during the postseason, kind of filling in for Chris Paul and hitting some big shots. Again, kind of a cool story. The fact that he's out of the NBA not long ago, playing in the G League, playing in China, now all of a sudden, gets a multi-year deal. Pretty good payday there. Evan, thoughts on the Campaign deal and how he played with the Suns this year?
He was so instrumental to their success, being one of their primary shot creators off the bench. Really improved three-point shooter, 44% in the regular season. He kind of dipped off a little bit after his ankle injury in the playoffs, but he's a huge boost to Phoenix. They need that creation off the bench. And I feel like, quite honestly, I saw this morning a report from the New York Post when they expressed interest in the Knicks of the Campaign. He might get around $10 to $12 million. He only gets around $6 million right now with the Suns on a 3 year deal. Feels like he might have taken a hometown discount here for the team that gave him a second chance in the NBA. That's a really good value for the Suns right there.
For sure.
It seems like maybe he just wanted to come back. I feel like he could have gotten a lot more than that. He's a legit drill pass shoot guy who's okay fine defensively, especially for his size. So it's obviously important for Phoenix. One of Phoenix's downfalls was a lack of high-end shot creation, but getting Payne back maybe mitigate some of that. So just surprised, but Phoenix is the team that gave him an opportunity to prove that he belonged in the NBA, and so maybe there's some of that there. Wanting to go to a system that he knows works, he knows as well as anyone. I'm sure that context is so important. So, I kind of get that part of it, but yeah, definitely a little less than I think he could have gotten on the open market. But I understand it for him for sure.
Yeah, Suns fans are celebrating right now. I see on my timeline, people are very happy at that number. I actually see some people talking about the Jarrett Allen deal. And Spencer, I want you to kind of talk about this because I'm seeing a lot of negativity. People saying they just drafted Mobley. They're saying, why would they pay him that much money when, they're looking at some of the other contracts that have been given out and saying that that's an overpay. What are your thoughts on that deal? You kind of talked about it a little bit earlier, but, is that a fair contract for Jarrett Allen?
Hold on 1 second. I know you're going to want to talk about the newest piece of information here first, so we'll wait on that,
sure,
and I will get to you.
Oh yeah, so Sam Amick says that the Hawks and Trey Young are finalizing a max extension. The deal will be 5 years, $170 million, with a supermax trigger that could push it to $201.5 million. The Hawks are meeting with Trey in LA tonight to discussed that. So it seems like that's going to be finalized. So yeah, 5 years. That's not a huge surprise. It's kind of like the Luka thing. We all kind of figured it was coming, especially after the success that they had in the postseason. So yeah, let's talk about the Trey thing, and then we'll get to the Jarrett Allen conversation. Thoughts on this for, the Hawks? Trey had a huge year, obviously struggled at the beginning. This Hawks team was really playing poorly and had a lot of injuries and issues. And then the way they turned things around was pretty remarkable. Anyone want to chime in on this Trey Young news?
First from 2018 to get it, right? First one to get the big payday. Very well deserved. I mean, you just saw what he was able to do in the postseason, and just like just unlocked another different level to himself. I think that Nate McMillan had a lot to do with that, and they're a perfect fit for each other. Just as far as him getting that team to really buy in and execute down the stretch, I think that's really what separated him, and avoiding those turnovers and really getting a perfect feel when he turns the corner of when to put up the floater and when to find a guy in a lob. He's just somebody who's just fearless when he gets downhill and is able to draw a ton of attention. And it's a tough shot to block when he's just throwing floaters over you. And he's even gone to some of that pull-up game too. So, obviously defensive end, it's a little bit tougher, being his size, but this is pretty much, turned into the heart and soul of Atlanta's organization. And, this is the face of their franchise.
Nekias, you did a great article about Trey's development and kind of how he was dominating the postseason and what we saw from him. What were your thoughts on, Trey's development throughout last season?
It was important. Like, Atlanta added a lot of talent, and there was a stretch, early in the season, but heading towards the middle ways of the season to where the floater was not falling for him. There was no off-ball movement when he gave up the ball. And Atlanta was going through this rough stretch with Lloyd Pierce. There was some bickering going on there as well, to where it just looked like Trey just wasn't there. And like he could rack up the numbers just because he had that kind of usage and he has the kind of talent, but he wasn't really playing team ball, which also seems like very cliche and narrative to say, but he wasn't. One of the hallmarks of his offensive game beyond the passing is just how proficient the floater is. And during that stretch, the floater wasn't falling for him. So it was just a lot of missed shots. The three ball wasn't falling for him. The percentage is already a little bit lower than what his skill level is just because of how deep he takes his threes and just him taking a majority of those off the dribble. So once all of that was just kind of going the wrong way, this stuff kind of started. Like, people were questioning who Trey Young was. Was he a winner? Was he just an empty stats guy? And he completely turned that around the second half of the season that went on into the postseason where he dominated some games in the postseason. Just what he provides as a playmaker and as a shot creator, as a foul drawer. Like, there are only a handful of players in the league that can provide that blend of it. So it's a no-brainer move for the Atlanta Hawks to pay him that way. The fact that he wasn't really hunted the way that you would think he would be defensively speaks to kind of the offensive limitations of the teams that they face. Like, Philly didn't do it. New York didn't really try.
Yeah.
And Milwaukee didn't have a ton of success going after him, but they were able to win the series anyway. So maybe that portion of it's a blend of them not doing a good job, and maybe that it's also overblown depending on how teams scheme around Trey. And so, this is a guy that made the playoffs for the first time and made these conference finals, and very well could have made the finals if a couple of other things broke right. So he's obviously a guy that you can win with and can build a very, very good team around. And he's only going to get better. Like, if as he gets stronger, gets smarter, we'll see how the rule changes affect him as far as some of the tricks that he has in his foul drawing bag. Like, I don't think you can completely eliminate what he does because he's so prolific as a driver, as a pull-up shooter, and he's just freaking smart, man. Like, that's what a lot of people miss. Like, you may get frustrated watching him draw fouls, but like, there is a reason that only your Trey Youngs, your James Hardens in particular can draw those type of fouls consistently. Like, they have a keen understanding of angles, body positioning, timing, the way they accelerate. There's just a lot of layers to Trey Young's game that I think go underappreciated on the offensive end of the floor. And so I'm excited for him. I'm excited for this Atlanta team. Like, I'm probably going to be in Atlanta more next season, watching more games. So the brand and the bit will continue heading into next season. But good for Trey and good for Atlanta for getting this done.
Yeah, so we have a few more numbers coming in. TJ McConnell's deal is 4 years, $35 million. So we, basically more than campaign. We talked about that a little bit. The Mavericks can still create $14 million in cap space, even after bringing back Boban and Tim Hardaway Jr. So we'll see what they decide to do with that. Also, we talked about, Trey Young being the first player in that draft class getting the extension. There was a report earlier today from Mark Stein saying that Luka will be we'll get that extension as well, $202 million, but they're going to have that conversation after the Olympics. So he's obviously, in the Olympics right now playing in Tokyo. And so when he gets back, they're going to have that extension conversation and he'll likely sign then. Pacers are working hard toward trading Jeremy Lamb. So that's something that just came out. Thoughts on any of the news I just mentioned?
I think the Jeremy Lamb news might be the Pacers trying to create some more room to get Doug McDermott back under the luxury tax. I think that's definitely something to watch out for there.
Interesting. All right, let's see. Jackson, a lot of people in our comments saying hi to you, and they're fans of you. So appreciate that, everyone. Thank you all for watching. If you guys have any questions too, drop that in the chat. We'll definitely try to answer any questions you guys have. And then we'll keep reacting to any rumors. We'll be here until 9:30, so about 3 more hours. A lot of stuff happening. That's a busy first half hour, honestly. We saw quite a few deals and then a lot of rumors popping up. So pretty crazy.
It wasn't the Mason Plumlee free agency of 2020. That was the first deal I remember. And then there was no deals that were struck like in the next 20, 25 minutes. And we were just trying to buy time on air, just trying to figure out what to talk about other than Mason Plumlee's fit on the Pistons. I remember that like yesterday.
Cracking jokes about Detroit and going after all the big men. I remember that.
I do remember that.
So some people are asking about Marcus Smart. There was a rumor today that they'd rather trade him than extend him. And I know he's been popping up in trade rumors for a bit now, but what do you think about the possibility of a Marcus Smart trade? Do you think that makes sense for Boston? Do you think we'll see that happen? And if so, are there any teams out there that could make sense for someone like Marcus Smart?
I mean, I think if you're going to do it, you got to get back someone you feel comfortable playing at the point of attack defensively. Jason Tatum's taken some pretty big steps forward as an on-ball defender. But he's still best utilized playing the nail, playing the low man, doing his thing off the ball with his mobility and size. Jaylen Brown is a good isolation defender, but he struggles navigating screens still. He's clearly has some limitations, some severe limitations off the ball defensively. Smart, is very good on the ball navigating screens and doing what he does. He's also very good off the ball, making rotations on the interior, things like that. So I think if you're going to trade him, it's either got to be for a guy you really feel comfortable can, be a very good defender. You're not going to approach Marcus Smart, but be a good defender or a guy that you really think can turn the corner and get into the paint, because where the Celtics still really struggle offensively is guys who are, creating on the ball, getting 2 feet in the paint and collapsing defenses. So obviously, if you trade Marcus Smart, you're not going to get a ton back for him because he is, he has 1 year left on his deal. So I think I get it to an extent. Like maybe if you're like, I know there were some rumors that maybe they would trade him to New Orleans and a sign and trade for Lonzo. I got that deal. Like it made some sense to me. You get much more long-term security there, but I don't think I think you'd have. There's a particular set of guys that maybe you would trade Marcus Smart for, but I don't think I'd be rushing to move him.
Real quick, Duncan Robinson, 5-year, $90 million. Nekias, we talked a little about the range that they could get him. 5-year, $90 million. Thoughts on that? Largest ever for an undrafted player. It also
That's
includes that's what I said. Largest ever for undrafted player, and it includes a early termination option after the 4th year. So thoughts on that, Nekias?
I'm trying to do mental math. Is that 18 a year?
Mm-hmm. About the same as Joe Harris got last offseason, right? Joe Harris got 470, I think.
Yeah,
so 1 more year. So
everyone was saying
a lot more. Yeah, more guaranteed money there, but similar AAV.
Okay. It's funny. Like I was having not even an argument on Twitter, but I was always kind of making a point. Like I don't think he's going to get Joe Harris money. Just 'cause I didn't think he was as good as Joe Harris, and now he got Joe Harris money. So I will take the L on that. But no, like it's obviously a great move for Miami. Again, he's wildly important to their offense. Like the Heat found him basically out of nowhere, and I remember like quote tweeting a Miami Heat official tweet before the 2019-20 season started, where Eric Spoelstra is just glowing about Duncan Robinson. Said you're already one of the best shooters on the planet. You just have to put in the work. And I'm looking back at like the 5 or 6 games that he played at the end of the 18-19 season. I'm just like like, I'm not Eric Spoelstra, of course. So I was like, are we sure that this is one of the best shooters on earth? And then Duncan Robinson puts together one of the best shooting seasons in history. And it's like, okay, this is why I tweet, and Eric Spoelstra makes millions of dollars and is a multi-time NBA champion. But just that story is incredible. Like, going undrafted, the Heat finding him putting in an insane amount of work, Eric Spoelstra trusting him not just to fire up shots, like telling him, hey, we want you to get 10, 12 threes up a game and actually mean it. And for him to turn into this kind of off-ball weapon and to make this kind of money, like, it's a testament to his work ethic, a testament to his skill, a testament to Miami's scouting department, a testament to Eric Spoelstra for empowering Duncan Robinson the way he did. It's just a great all-around story for everyone involved.
Fun fact, Udonis Haslem was on Kenyon Martin's podcast, Neat Unfiltered. Nekias' favorite player, Udonis Haslem. He said that player, yes, not assistant coach, player. He said Duncan Robinson was he said Duncan Robinson was the best shooter he's ever been around. Better than Ray Allen, better than Rashard Lewis, better than anyone he's ever played with. He said Duncan Robinson was the best, and he just dominates in practice. So interesting little anecdote there. I just had to mention Udonis Haslem to see what Nekias would do. We do have Torrey Craig news. He signs agrees to a 2-year, $10 million deal with the Indiana Pacers.
That makes sense now with the Jeremy Lamb stuff. That goes hand in hand.
Suns lose a player that was pretty significant for them, played pretty well. What are your thoughts on that, Evan?
Yeah, Torrey Craig really helped swing that series late against the Los Angeles Clippers. Paul George shot 25% when matched up against Torrey Craig in games 5 and 6. So he's a great defender. He can play small ball 4 and 5. He can play 3 positions, in my opinion. He's a great fit in Indiana. I love him potentially as a small ball 5, even a stretch 4. He should improve shooting as well while in Phoenix. That's a great deal, in my opinion, for Craig, getting $5 million per year. His fit with Rick Carlisle, too, is something I really like.
We also have some news here. Tim Reynolds of the Associated Press says if the Raptors do buy out Dragic, then he would obviously, quote, have interest in joining Luka and Igor in Dallas. Contenders will also line up for him. The Lakers have had interest in him forever. So he could be interesting if he's bought out or, possibly flipped in a trade. So that's something to watch. Doug McDermott, 3 years, $42 million from the Spurs. So that is interesting. Wow. Thoughts on that?
They got a shooter.
What?
$42 million.
14 per year.
It's a lot. It's a lot for him. I mean, maybe a little. I mean, not a ton more than maybe I would offer, but it's a lot of money. But the Spurs needed shooting. I'm not necessarily that's justifies giving 14. I probably would have been more in the 10 to 13, 10 to 12 range, but I understand why they did it. But I like that more than having to give Larry Markkinen. I just think he makes more sense. Having to give Larry Markkinen a good amount of money, but McDermott was really good working off handoffs this year, getting downhill. Obviously, he's a good shooter, and so I like the fit there. I think it makes some sense. When you're running a lot of offense to DeJounte Murray, and Derek White is didn't play a ton last year, but he's still a guy who's not letting it fly a lot from 3, likes the mid range more. I get the fit of a guy who can get downhill off of handoffs and also just spam spot threes and the ball swings his way.
Chris Paul officially back in Phoenix for a 4-year deal up to $120 million.
4? Wow.
4 for 1.
So he'll be getting paid till he's 40.
Good for him.
One thing that no one talks about is that Chris Paul and LeBron, when they were, running the players union together, obviously Chris Paul's still involved. LeBron's no longer VP. Help me with this, but wasn't there a rule they changed that said you couldn't sign a max contract or a multi-year $100 million deal or something after turning 35 years old? And they just totally got rid of that deal, which is pretty amazing because this contract would not have been able to happen if it wasn't for that rule change. And obviously it doesn't just help them. It helps other star players who are still able to contribute at a high level as they get older. But I think it's so funny that that doesn't get talked about, that they were able to kind of make this rule change that helped them get way more money before their career ended. Let me pull up the specifics of that because I'm curious. By the way, props to you, Nekias, for you want to tweet stats and continue to have an active presence on Twitter right now while still contributing. That's impressive.
Yeah, how the heck? What in the world? I just looked down my timeline on there.
I think we're realizing that Nekias is a ghostwriter. That's what this is. He's on your Twitter account right now.
He did this at Summer League. I remember doing that too. I looked over and I'm like, how are you doing this? This isn't humanly possible.
We're
to be able to watch. Exactly.
As someone that used to write articles on their phone, like you have to learn how to do multiple things at once.
I love
He's
it.
got an intern, I think. I'm pretty sure at this point.
Paying somebody under the table. But I did want to ask. I did find it hilarious. See that Chris Paul, that he opts out, and they're like, oh, maybe he'll take a pay cut to go somewhere, and then he ends up making $30 million over the next 4 years each. Like, it's so funny to me that people were saying that CP was going to take a pay cut. Like, he just kept making his money, and he never ended up being that quote unquote bad contract. It's really good for him, man.
Yeah,
I think there's a scenario too. Correct me if I'm wrong, but there's like an over 38 rule when someone is like around 38 years old. The other teams around the NBA can only offer a 3-year deal. The Suns maybe doing a loophole here, offering a 4-year 120. Maybe the 4th year might be non-guarantee or partially guarantee on that. Just something to monitor. I think the Suns might have used that.
Yeah, that's what it was. So before it was an over 36 rule, and then Chris Paul and LeBron pushed it to an over 38 rule. So that's what I was kind of referencing. So a team without bird rights cannot offer a 4-year contract to players who will turn 38 during that contract. So yeah, that is interesting. We'll see what happens there, but that's a good point.
Loopholes.
Yeah, I'm sure I'm sure they'll figure out something. Oh, here we go. The Bulls are reportedly showing interest in DeMar DeRozan. That's interesting. I think that was reported earlier today. So they're one of the teams out there that's looking at DeRozan. How do we feel about that fit for DeRozan? Bringing in Lonzo and then potentially DeRozan as well. Jackson, you're making a face. I'll let you go.
I don't love the idea of building a defense around DeMar DeRozan, Zach LaVine, and Nikola Vucevic. I think you're very short on ideal team defenders.
Lonzo and Pat Williams. Lonzo and Pat Williams.
Yeah, but who's guarding the point of attack? I mean, like, Lonzo's best off the ball. I mean, Zach LaVine is still your best on-ball defender on the perimeter, and he's fine. He's good in ISOs against like-sized guys, but navigating screens is not his thing. Vooch tends to be conservative as a rim protector because he doesn't want to get in foul trouble, because how much teams tend to rely on him offensively. DeRozan, I can't even say is poor navigating screens because he doesn't really try to navigate screens very often off the ball. And he's just not great laterally either in ISOs. So, and he's as much as he's improved as an offensive player, he's still pretty stagnant off the ball. I think I prefer Zach LaVine. I prefer last year's Zach LaVine as an offensive initiator to DeRozan. So, yeah, I get the idea. Another guy who can create with some size, but defensively, I really worry. And offensively, I think there are some pretty diminishing returns around 3. LaVine's pretty good off the ball as a scorer, but he's still best on the ball given the strides he made last year with his pull-up jumper, and I think he averaged 25 on 63.5% true shooting. It was pretty ridiculous as a scorer. So I just don't love that fit. I don't love the defense there, especially because Billy Donovan's fine. He's definitely an upgrade as a coach over Jim Boylan, but I don't think he's a particularly innovative scheme guy. So I think you'd be in a really, really tough spot defensively, and you'd have some diminishing returns offensively there.
I think it's a team in Chicago, too, that's under a little bit of pressure to win right now, making a splash move with Lonzo and adding DeMar DeRozan. Like you just mentioned, Jackson, the defensive fit's not there. But if you add DeRozan, if you add Lonzo Ball, I think that's a guaranteed playoff team for an organization that needs to get back in there. I think it's been about 4 years since they have been back in the playoffs.
We also have rumors about ongoing discussions about Lauri Markkanen and DeMar DeRozan sign and trade. So maybe Markkanen to San Antonio and DeRozan to Chicago, like we just talked about. Let's see. Any other thoughts on DeMar? No?
I mean, he would give Chicago another rim guy, but I echo Jackson's sentiments defensively. That's a lot. And that's a lot. Patrick Williams has to be like Andre Karolinko or something. I don't. That's just kind of tough.
He improved as a mover last year, but he does not have the ranginess of prime Karolinko at this point. Now there's Lonzo. Yeah, you're relying a lot on guys, but I think if you got DeRozan, you'd be maybe a playing team again. But I don't think it's really improving your ceiling. And your team building wise, I think the vision there is pretty poorly constructed.
All right, so we'll see if any other rumors are popping up just yet. Again, if anyone has questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, and we'll throw them up on screen, and we'll answer them. Some people are asking about that Chris Paul rule, saying they thought he could only get 3 years. interesting to see how that, some details once those emerge. If we see anything, we'll definitely mention that. Let's see.
On the DeRozan front, by the way, I was thinking too, I mean, they've got Troy Brown as well. I think that could help as well, like defensively. And I'm not sure, if Aminu's around there anymore or not. That just might be speaking from the top of my head, but just a couple of guys more that you could throw out there and maybe not play, all of those defensive liabilities together at once, but like kind of stagger them so you have at least a decent balance. So I don't know. I don't hate it as much as you guys. I don't know.
So it's official now. Kyle Lowry announced that he's going to the Miami Heat, and that's not a surprise. He tweeted something out, a graphic, or I think actually posted on. I know he tweeted it. So again, just official now. So let's see. Some people asking questions. What are your thoughts on what the Pelicans should do next? I saw Kevin O'Connor was tweeting about, they were in talks with all these huge names and then have to settle for the return they got in Lonzo sign and trade. Thoughts on where the Pelicans go from here?
I think Dragic is someone who makes some sense still. I mean, obviously he's a downgrade from the Lowry or even retaining Lonzo or Mike Conley they were linked to at times. Spencer Dinwiddie as well, but I think Dragic can still make some sense. I think he's a different type of player than Satoransky, and I wouldn't let Satoransky be the the reason I don't try to acquire Goran Dragic in either a trade or maybe he gets bought out. But yeah, I mean I'm curious, kind of they just need. I think they need more guard play still, and because like when you trade for Jonas Valanciunas, you're trying to win immediately. When you have a guy like Zion, top 20, top 25 player, you should be winning as well. So. Like as much as I want to see what those young guards do, I wouldn't be like, oh yeah, play them a ton. Like that's not realistic to me. So I think maybe a trying to find an upgrade on Satoransky and let Satoransky maybe it cracks the rotation great, but if he doesn't, you're not kind of relying on him too much.
Some people asking about that Jarrett Allen conversation that we kind of started and pivoted away from. Again, there were people saying that it was a crazy overpay. They shouldn't have given him all that money. How does he fit with Evan Mobley? That's something I was seeing a lot on my timeline. Any thoughts, or Spencer? You obviously cover this team a lot. Allen, thoughts on that? Fit and the payday he got.
So it kind of mirrors a little bit the Clint Capella deal. Then a lot of people were thinking to themselves as well that was too much of an overpay, and he was probably the second most important guy on the Hawks this year. I think with Jarrett Allen, this is a little different than years past anyway, because again, he's 23 years old. He has 4 years of experience, but he's still young. He's still developing. Somebody that can really protect the rim, but also, really make it tough on different defenses as far as being a lob threat, going up and getting offensive rebounds. Just the fundamentals that he has are outstanding, and it's the fact that you don't know what he can become still. And as far as the fit with Evan Mobley goes, you're going to see Jarrett Allen's going to be down more on the block more. He's going to be more inside of the paint, whereas Evan Mobley, he's probably going to be operating from the elbows. He'll be using in dribble handoffs. He's a really good passer, to baseline cutters. He can even put it on the floor better than a Jarrett Allen can do that. So I think their thinking here is that the defensive potential of this to be able to cover for guys like Colin Sexton and Darius Garland, who are a little bit smaller, even though they have had some growth spurts, including Isaac Okoro as well, that everyone forgets about. It's enough to max that on defense. And then offensively, you kind of have to really think to yourself, how are we going to get past, these, they're calling them the, Tower City here already, because they're so long, they're so tall. And the difference too, between Mobley and Allen, Mobley can keep up with guys out on the perimeter defensively as well. So there's a lot of versatility in what Evan Mobley can do. And Jarrett Allen, even though he is more of the traditional center, he's very, analytically friendly, so to speak, and somebody who's low usage. He's not gonna, impede anything on the offensive end, and he just does what he does. And he's still got plenty of room to come out of that box a little bit. But I think that between those two, it just makes them very intriguing. And I think that they're like really, really curious about the possibilities. So we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, they're you can You can call them the Guardians of Cleveland, the reference there. But yeah, the way I view it is, it's like I'm not going to be like overly, like singing the praise of the front office there. But I think it's a fine deal. One, because even if Mobley ideally is a 5 long term, he's absolutely not a guy you're playing at the 5 for 32 minutes a night right now. And I think he's going to be a guy who's good enough as a rookie to warrant a lot of playing time. So I like the ability to have Allen be the 5, let Mobley experiment with the perimeter skills on both ends, and that starting lineup could also be the backup 5 for 10 to 12 minutes, however long a night, and kind of grow into that role. Because, Mobley is super skilled on both ends. For all the reasons, Spencer, you mentioned there. And the fact of the matter, too, is, it goes back to kind of similarly with the Olynyk thing. Jared Allen's a good young player, or a good player who's also fairly young, who complements and amplifies the skills of their other young guys, and that helps your development. It's not like they didn't sign another ball handler to a 5-year, $100 million deal. It's going to inhibit Garland from doing his thing. So I like the fit, and I don't think it's some home run move. I don't think it's a disaster either. It's not too much of a deal to the point where in year 3 or 4, if you realize, okay, Mobley's our 5 of the future with Garland, Okoro, Sexton, whoever's in tow still there, that you can't move off that. He's good. He's young. Like he's an okay short roll passer as well. I think the hope for the organization is that he stretches the range a little bit moving forward. They've tried it at times with in Brooklyn and Cleveland, so it's a perfectly fine deal. I think it's been overly scrutinized, but I like it because he's a good player who makes the young guys better, and that's what you need when you're trying to develop a young core.
And I think too that you see center and you see the amount of money that they're paying him, and people would just automatically just go, oh no, because centers are largely the types of centers that Jared Allen exemplified at first was someone like a traditional big, quote unquote. But he's clearly expanded his game a little, and it's continued. You continue to see flashes throughout his career so far of what he can do when he goes outside of the box. Like you said, he stretched the floor before. He shot some threes. Not a guy that's going to take 3 or 4 a game, but just enough to stretch the floor a little bit. But again, it's largely going to be unneeded when Evan Mobley is going to be the one out on the perimeter and on the elbows.
We're getting some questions about Carmelo Anthony. I'm curious what you guys think of that. I've seen a few things in our chat here about it. So obviously been linked to the Lakers, one of those guys that, have been discussed as a veteran minimum type guy potentially there. Thoughts on Carmelo and, where we could see him land? Does he go back to Portland? Does he go to LA? Any thoughts there?
If that's the first move the Lakers are maybe making to surround their guys, I'm not overly infatuated with the direction of their offseason. Sorry to cut you off, Nekias, but that would be my one takeaway if that's the first rotation guy they add after retooling their roster pretty significantly last week.
Oh, okay.
If you have Westbrook, Carmelo, Dwight, and then you just find a time machine, you'd be set. It's not a bad plan.
Alex had to get his joke off.
I was just about to say, before I respond to Melo in LA or whatever, Woj did just tweet out that Lowry's getting a 3-year deal worth approximately $90 million. So that's official, I suppose. But yeah, Melo to the Lakers is sure, I guess. He has shot well over the last couple of years, and he can give you a mid-post bucket every now and then, and it's cool. And him and LeBron are friends, so that's also cool. That's about all I got on that front. I've had enough Melo talk on my timeline over the last year and a half. I don't want to do this again.
The issue is will try to give you too many mid-post buckets, and that's rather than taking the rhythm spot up 3 that will come his way playing alongside Dame and CJ, or maybe in this case LeBron, Russ, and AD. So, to his credit, he definitely tweaked his approach a little bit, but not to the point that should, because he's a good spot-up shooter at this point. 3. I don't love that. The defense is it's not good. He struggles to move. He's not very aware off the ball. You really be putting if you're putting a lineup out there with Russ and Melo alongside LeBron and AD, you're asking a ton of them as team defenders, and they're all world defenders, but I think that might be a bridge too far for even those guys at times.
I wrote a story this morning on basketballnews.com just about what the Lakers can do to add, I think, a lot more perimeter shooting around this trio of LeBron James, Anthony Davis, Russell Westbrook. Some names here: J.J. Redick, Otto Porter, Reggie Bullock, Rudy Gay, Wayne Ellington, James Ennis, Bryn Forbes, Patty Mills. some of those guys I think make a lot of sense for the Lakers. With that big three we just mentioned, you have to add as much perimeter shooting as possible. All those guys are at or near plus 40% from the three-point line. That's what the Lakers should target. A lot of guys will want to go there in better minimum deals as well. So I keep an eye on those kind of guys heading to LA.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. I mean, they definitely need shooters around that core. After bringing in Westbrook, they have to surround him, that big three with shooters. One thing, I'm not sure this is out there, one rumor that was kind of being floated around is that Carmelo and Kurt Rambis had some beef apparently from the past. So that could be one of the reasons why, he hasn't went to LA in the past. And who knows if that has any kind of impact on the Laker rumors this time around. I don't know. We'll see. One thing, Bobby Marks says that despite the Kyle Lowry sign and trade and Duncan Robinson signing, Miami can still use the 9.5 mid-level exception and stay below the hard cap. The rest of the roster after that would be filled with minimum contracts. Indiana is right at the luxury tax with the McConnell and Craig contracts. They have 15 players under contract, but 2 are non-guaranteed. And then because the Suns, here's the answer to our question about the over 38 rule. Because they had his full bird rights, they can give him that 4-year deal, and it won't trigger the over 38 rule. So just some housekeeping things that we discussed before, kind of clarifying and talking about some numbers. Let's see. A lot of questions about Duncan Robinson. We already kind of talked about that a little bit, but people are kind of shocked at the number that he got. We can talk about that a little bit more, I suppose, just because there's so many people asking. What are your guys' do you think that is an overpay, or do you think that is a warranted contract for Robinson, and what do you mean to this team?
I think it's fine. I think it's a good deal. I don't think it's some bargain. I think it's good though, and I really love the way that both Lowry and Duncan are going to work off the ball as screeners and just movers. Have another you obviously Duncan and Bam have been great in DHO's last couple of years. You got Lowry to that. Was a really good screener for a guard too. I think that's an awesome fit. So, I thought even without Lowry, independent of Lowry, it was a fine contract. But bringing Lowry into the fold for the next 3 years, for basically 60% of that deal at a minimum, I think it helps a ton. Just how Lowry can leverage his own smarts off the ball, but also connect with Duncan, I think is a really, really good thing, because the Heat's big issue last year was the offensive stagnation and and whatnot. So I think Lowry and Duncan will really work well off of that, because you're going to see a lot of the offense center around Bam and Jimmy having the ball. I expect Bam's role to maybe increase even more again with with the ball in his hands and bringing it up. So I think it's a good fit as is, but you factor Lowry in, it makes even more sense to retain Duncan at that price point.
Trailer 3 contest between those two.
Yeah.
Come on, think about it.
Where does Duncan, as far as the highest paid podcast host, where does Duncan rate now? Joe Rogan is definitely up there. Who else? I guess Bill Simmons, just from that Spotify deal, he's up there. Duncan's doing well for himself though.
I think McCollum's got a pod, right? McCollum makes over $30 million, I think. So
that's true.
He might be outdone there, but he's up there. He's up there. Absolutely. He's got to be top 3 or 4.
The dunker spot, Nekias Duncan, he's up there, I think.
Lucrative deals.
Bring it in.
Oh, by the way, while we're on this, let's shout out our shirts again. We got the basketball news shirt. Spencer's got his on. Nekias has his dunker spot shirt. Shop.basketballnews.com. Gotta get that plug in. Back to some questions. People are asking about Derrick Rose. A lot of the notable names. We talked about Carmelo. People are asking about DeRozan. Derrick Rose obviously played pretty well with the Knicks. Had a couple big playoff games as well. Someone asked. Let's pull this up. Boston, Washington, Clippers, Dallas, or Knicks were the teams that were mentioned here. There were some reports that the Bulls had interest, and there was mutual interest in a reunion with Derrick Rose.
That would blow things up.
The problem though is, after the Lonzo deal, and then if they are talking about DeRozan, I'm not sure how that would work financially. I'm not sure what Derrick Rose is gonna warrant, how much he would get paid. But what do you guys think about Rose? As a player at this point, and then maybe some destinations for him that could make sense.
I mean, he can get downhill still. He clearly has. It's impressive how much of his his burst is still there after all the lower leg injuries. The jumper is okay. He can he can spot up a little bit. He's more comfortable from about 18 feet it in. The defense, though, especially at the point of attack, navigating screens, containing guys on the ball, is pretty poor. Part of the reason the Hawks were so good at getting into their early offense, such with Trey, is because Derrick Rose couldn't defend at all at the point of attack. He was getting blown by all the time. So you have to understand exactly what you're getting. And so part of it too was the Knicks needed his offensive creation, so they had to start him. I think maybe in a smaller role. Like I think Boston makes some sense, just as a guy I've talked about with Boston. They need someone to get 2 feet in the paint. From a basketball perspective, I get it for that. But yeah, the defense is still pretty abysmal, especially on the ball, and that makes things tough in a lot of contexts.
Right on cue, actually. The New York Post, Mark Berman, says that they will likely work out a deal, the Knicks and Derrick Rose. So it sounds like he will be staying in New York. So again, going back to kind of what we talked about the Knicks, they're bringing back a lot of the same guys. We already saw, Nerlens and Alec, Burks re-signed there. So we'll see what that deal could look like. But it sounds like that's happening according to Berman. Sterling Brown to the Mavs. And then I believe there's been some conflicting info about Dragic and what would happen if he's bought out. Everyone's kind of saying that the Mavs are his first option, but Mark Spear says look out for the Pelicans as well. He could be going to New Orleans. Jackson, you mentioned that fit. So it seems like if he can't get to Dallas, then he would look at New Orleans. But pretty much every source is saying Mavs are his top option. So we'll see what happens with that.
Griff's really going after the vets, isn't he? Whew.
Yeah.
Griff really.
So I'm curious. People are asking about the Houston Rockets. What we think they might do. Do we think they're a playoff team? Thoughts on how this team could turn things around? I'm not ready to say they're a playoff team just yet. I see people asking that in the chat, but what do we think about Houston and how they've improved either through the draft and how they can improve through free agency? Oh, by the way, Sterling Brown, his deal is a 2-year deal. We don't have the money yet, but sorry, go ahead.
Okay, I was gonna say I tweeted about this the day after the draft. Like Houston's draft was interesting to me in that I liked, at least in the first round, I liked everyone that they took individually, and then when I was thinking about what they were like, what that looked like as a collective, I was a little bit lower on it because I feel like they obviously drafted Jalen Green to be the guy, and then they basically draft like 3 high usage guys and Usman Garuba, who is like just absurd, just an absurd defensive prospect. So I don't really have much to say about him, but it's just like, how do you dole out enough developmental reps for everyone to gel and for everyone to hit the way that you want them to? And that was kind of my question going into it, and not necessarily making the fit over talent argument or anything that drastic, but it's just like, if you're taking the upside swing on like Josh Christopher, for example, outside of, and a few people comment on the tweet like saying that Houston uses their G League team quite a bit. So like that was a fair rebuttal to that question and it eased my concerns a little bit. But I'm just like, on the surface, if you're drafting him because you think he can be something as a creator, you have Jalen Green, you have Kevin Porter Jr., like you have John Walford now. I'm sure he's going to be traded or something at some point. But like you have a lot of high usage guys already. So like, where is he getting the reps to even hit as that that on-ball creator? So that's kind of where I was with their draft. As far as the offseason, we'll see, like losing Kelly Olynyk. It's weird to say that it's going to hurt since they just had the second pick in the draft. Like obviously they're not ready to contend or anything like that. But like I do think that's going to hurt a little bit. So I'm interested to see like how they fill out the roster with spacing and just defense in general. Because I mean their best players right now are not great defenders. And I think that's a fair thing to say. So I'm interested to see what kind of infrastructure they're going to have in place. Like, I don't think they're a playoff team this year. I think this is going to be basically year 1.5. Like, I want to see Steven Silas with just some semblance of a healthy roster, ultimately, because I like some of the things that he did last year, but there was just so much in flux with Russ and Harden, and then Wall is there, and then he isn't there. And it's just, I would just like to see them play together. It's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah. Quick, just jump in.
I agree.
Jeff Green, we can go to you in 1 second, Jackson. Jeff Green got a 2-year, $10 million deal from the Nuggets. There's a player option in the second year.
It's not a 1 year. Let's go, Jeff. Good.
Yep,
good
2-year deal. We'll get back to some of these recent signings in a second. Jackson, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just kind of building off of what Nekias was saying. Like, where do they? I mean, obviously Nawaba helps, but like, where do they go? Because like, where do they go to find veterans or established players to complement who they have in place? Nawaba helps there a lot. Because they drafted 3 guys in the first round who, aren't. I mean, I think Josh Christopher and Jalen Green are like fine defensively in a lot of ways, but Sengun is a pretty porous defender. Christian Wood helps not defensively, but Christian Wood, like having a play finish like that, versatile offensive big man, helps there when you're trying to develop creators. And Jalen Green, Kevin Porter Jr. and I think Josh Christopher is more of a secondary handler, but I mean, it never hurts to have that. But just curious kind of what they do in free agency to accentuate the development of kind of what they have in place with the three guys drafted this year, and then obviously Kevin Porter Jr. getting a lot of reps last year and taking a big wing handler role on. So that's important. Obviously it's okay to like build up your youth talent, but you need to have some sort of stability there with guys who kind of know what they bring and how they can complement guys on the ball. So curious to see how they approach this. I think Nwaba is more of a defensive minded center or move, but I think it helps, as Nekias was saying, there's not a lot of defensive infrastructure in place there. And he's a pretty dang good wing defender when he can stay healthy for his sake.
Yeah, Nwaba gets 3 years, $15 million. So let's see. How do you feel about the Jeff Green 2-year, $10 million deal with the Nuggets? They've made some moves. Obviously, the trade line, we saw the Aaron Gordon deal, and I want to say there was another signing too they made earlier. I forget. Maybe I'm mixing them up with someone else. But what do you think about Jeff Green in Denver?
Well, I think that in the postseason, they were missing a Torrey Craig type. And for the most season, I think they were missing a Torrey Craig type. And Jeff Green's not quite as burly as a Torrey Craig, but I think that he can fill that role a little bit better. Having that veteran experience, somebody who is honestly becoming a reliable shooter now, somebody who can really have that versatility defensively, to stay in front of guys and to force guys to give the ball up, solid in transition. Obviously, still has plenty of athleticism left. I think it's a good fit.
We do have 2 rumors here. The Mavericks are nearing a deal with Reggie Bullock, so that is coming soon. Mark Stein reports that. And then Mo Harkless to the Sacramento Kings on a 2-year, $9 million deal. Any thoughts on either of those?
Reggie Bullock. Go ahead.
No, you go, Evan. I'm sure probably have similar sentiments, but
No, yeah, Reggie Bullock. I mean, to me, great 3-point shooter. Dallas needs to have some more spacing alongside Luka. The Kristaps Porzingis contract puts him in such a bind now, where you kind of have to do moves on the margins here. Re-signing Tim Hardaway Jr. limits their flexibility moving forward as well. Bullock is a guy who could either start or play off the bench for them. Just a really good floor spacer is going to add a lot of equity to that Mavericks offense. That was already really good last year. So just adding more floor spacing alongside Luka is going to make his job a lot easier.
And that's something they lost too when they, moved away Seth Curry, and that's something they're just getting right back by bringing in, a sharpshooter like Reggie Bullock, who has a little bit more size and can play a little bit of defense. So, no, I think I agree with you on that. Being able to just spread things out, let Luka operate, drive in kicks, what have you. That'd be a good move if they can get it done.
Yeah, I like. He's got a little bit of a move, ability to shoot on the move. Set screens, run off pin downs, things like that, which always helps. There's always a little more value when you have some diversity as a shooter. I think Bullock brings that. He's not like he's not a JJ Redick, Duncan Robinson type guy, but he has a little bit of ability to shoot off from weird releases and whatnot. So that's useful with Luka. Set some screens, let Luka get downhill and create and whatnot. So I always think it's a nice little wrinkle in the offense that he can provide.
Let's see. Sterling Brown, 2 years, $6.2 million. That just came through. We kind of already knew, that he was going to Dallas, but that's a detail that we didn't have. Let's see. Anything I'm missing that you guys are seeing that we should be talking about, or any rumors that popped up?
Some minor things just coming through. I think that things have slowed down just a little bit. In usual times, this would be like 1 a.m. Instead of they actually started it off on a decent time for us to be able to discuss these things without looking bloodshot eyes and all. So, but no, I think first hour's been pretty active, but it feels like things are slowing down. So that's probably means calm before the storm.
Yeah,
we've got nothing on Dinwiddie yet.
Yeah, me too.
No.
There
Just
was one
meetings or anything
rumor
like that. So
there was one rumor that the Pelicans are an option that popped up. Celtics and Fournier reportedly not close on a deal, so we'll see what happens with Fournier. I also saw something here that Marcus Smart wants an extension. The Celtics seems like that's not likely. And this, oh, here we go. Seeking a max extension, 4 years, $80 million. The same money that a team doesn't want to pay Evan Fournier. There's a tough negotiation happening. The Celtics are targeting 2022 free agency. So we kind of talked about Boston and what they're doing. Seems like they're looking ahead instead of spending a lot of money here, which is why, again, they don't want to pay Fournier either. So it seems like he'll be on the move. There was also a report that they've moved on and pretty much figured they're not going to be able to re-sign him. So not too surprising there. Let's see what else we got here.
Marcus Smart negotiating with his head coach of 5 years to figure out what he's going to make. That's just so interesting.
It is. By the way, Marcus Morris tweeted out a cryptic tweet. So people are wondering, if Markieff Morris could be going to the Clippers. He said basically something, I know a few things I want to happen. So people are, reading into that. Who knows if there's anything there. Let's see.
Here's some people. I just had a couple of, just looking at the list of, available guys. Kind of surprised that we haven't heard anything on the Norm Powell front.
Yeah, I was thinking that too.
That was interesting to me. Rashawn Holmes is another one that was a really solid name that was on the market that we haven't heard much of either. So just kind of looking through this list, you mentioned Dinwiddie too already, Jackson. Very, very surprising. Given that Gary Trent Jr. as well. Still plenty of names out there, but just really interested to see when those. I'm always interested to see the negotiation process and like how things just come out. It seems like everything happens at once, or there's a dead period, and nothing really trickles through except for the minor stuff. I'm always interested in why that happens.
Bouncing back to Boston just for a second. I just was doing some quick math, looking at their salary sheet. Like you mentioned, Alex, 2022 might be what they're looking for. Obviously, Bradley Beal is a player option next year. Looks like they can clear almost up to $40 million in cap space. Then that might be what they're kind of targeting there. That's just something to keep an eye on down the road.
There was a report that Rashawn Holmes is likely heading back to Sacramento. So that's interesting. I think Jake Fisher had that. So we'll see if there's any movement there. And also there's a lot of these restricted guys that are going to take a few days probably. Teams typically wait on those restricted free agents, but there's a number of talented restricted guys to keep an eye on too in this class. Let's see. Some questions coming in. Are the Kings going to make another move at the wing? Signing Mo doesn't make sense to me. Thoughts on the Mo Harkless deal and the Kings and what they could do?
Like, sure, for Mo Harkless. Like, he did show some interesting stuff in the second half of the year. Like, he, as someone that watched a lot of Heat games last year, it was interesting to see him go to Sacramento and actually score the basketball. So that was cool. But the defense across both forward spots is still there. So I certainly understand it from Sacramento's perspective. And, like, it's a 2-year deal that doesn't cost much. So I don't think there's any sort of real risk with that move. As far as the wing, like, I'm curious what Sacramento you've been looking for. Like, so much smoke has been around trading Buddy Hield. So is that where they try to find another wing, like another Harrison Barnes-esque wing, a guy that can kind of fill the margins on offense more so than self-create, because they have De'Aaron Fox, they have Tyrese Halliburton, they don't want to give more reps to. They just drafted Davion Mitchell, which is more guard room than wing room. But like, I wonder, like, is that going to be the type of wing to go for, or do they want a wing creator to complement that? To compliment Fox in particular. So I don't know where Sacramento goes from here, honestly.
Just gonna be starting Hallie at the 3 at this point, right?
Yeah. Like, are they like a funky, like DeRozan fit?
That's an interesting question.
That's interesting.
Maybe, I mean, if they play fast enough, maybe you can.
Yeah, I don't
weird
dislike
fit.
that offensively. I worry about the defense again, but I don't dislike the offense there. But yeah, I mean, I did want to point out though too, just circling back to the Rockets stuff, they did sign Daniel Tice. That, I mean, he's not like some huge offensive player, but there's just a little more infrastructure defensively there, so I didn't want to ignore that. But a smaller signing that's kind of a ripple effect. Looks like Paul Millsap will be elsewhere in Denver. I know they just signed Jermichael Green and Paul Millsap agreed to terms, I should say. So curious kind of what his market is. He's obviously taken a big step back for the last couple of years, but still has some juice as a passer and a spot up shooter and some defensive ability, helps out rim protection. So not the guy he was when he first arrived in Denver, but I still think he's a viable kind of rotation big in small ball five in certain lineups, but he can also stretch the floor and play that four. And if he's not asked to task, guard a big time mobile four.
Some details coming in here. The Chris Paul deal, according to Rick Bucher, only 2 years are fully guaranteed. Third is a partial guarantee. Fourth is non-guaranteed. So if you are worried about, paying him at 39, 40 years old, that does seem to help a little bit. The Heat have shown interest in Bobby Portis, who's looking for more than $9.5 million, the mid-level. So, but that's all that Miami has to offer. So maybe that doesn't happen unless he's willing to take a pay cut. He took a pay cut last year to go to Milwaukee and kind of bet on himself and play for a championship and to prove himself. And that obviously worked out. So we'll see what happens with Bobby Portis. There really hasn't been many rumors about Portis. So he's an interesting one to watch. Let's see.
Milwaukee's got the money to bring him back, right?
I'm not positive.
I think they might only have the taxpayer mid-level. Could be off. I'm not the cap space isn't my forte as much as some people, but I feel like I've read that he's asking for a certain amount of money, but it might not be within Milwaukee's price range.
Here we go. He's agreed to a 2-year, $9 million deal with the Milwaukee Bucks. That keeps happening. We talk about a guy that immediately after they sign. So
that's crazy.
There you go.
All right,
and then
there's the taxpayer. 4.5 mil.
No, is it 2 years, $9 million, or 2 years, $18 million?
2 years, $9 million.
Oh shoot, they're not above the tax. My bad.
So interesting. He was looking, according to the other report, he was looking for a deal more than the mid-level and got 2 years, $9 million. So pretty interesting.
Well,
it says Shams just tweeted after the championship, Portis' loyalty with the Bucks. Oh, he wanted to stay loyal. He cherished the organization's culture, winning environment. The Milwaukee community embraced him. He passed on more money in favor of the Bucks last summer, and this year he stuck with the happiness and stability. So actually, I had him on my podcast, I think it was 4 months ago, and he talked about just loving it there and saying, he had been in other organizations, but none of them matched what Milwaukee was doing, and he loved the winning atmosphere and culture, and just said like day to day he was happier, and he would wake up looking forward to going to practice and being excited. And that wasn't necessarily the case other places where everything was stressful and everyone's anxious all the time and, upset about losing. So I think he was really happy to be in that winning environment. And then obviously winning a championship, it pays off. So interesting. He stays in Milwaukee. Let's see. Gary Trent Jr., 3 years, $54 million with the Raptors. So that's
18. I'm also thinking of the numbers. Hold on. 15.
So Toronto keeps him.
16. I'm doing the mental math thing too now.
Portis turned down potential deals with the Mavericks and Heat to stay in Milwaukee. He wants to compete for a championship again next season, thinks they can repeat potentially. So interesting. Mavericks and Heat also went after Portis. But let's talk about the Gary Trent Jr. one, because that's a pretty big deal. He was one out there that a lot of teams were, thinking about throwing money at. I have a question for you guys, and this is less on, a specific player or team, more just a vague thing. Are you surprised we don't see more poison pill offers get thrown around in recent years? Because I feel like there was like a period there where we saw it work with Houston with Jeremy Lin and Omer Sheik, and then Tyler Johnson got one. And it seems like it puts so much stress on a team that's trying to re-sign a guy. Do you surprised we don't see that more in recent years? That team, it's almost like teams found a loophole and then kind of started going away from it. I don't know why they did that.
Yeah, that is interesting to me, just because, like you mentioned, Alex, you saw it a lot over the years. I think Sacramento, maybe I'm wrong on that, but they offered Zach LaVine a poison pill a while ago before he signed an extension. I think Chicago might have matched that as well. I don't know why they've gone away from it. Maybe it's just teams kind of holding on to long-term flexibility there down the road instead of paying guys extra, just maybe flat value over a long-term contract. But it's something to monitor down the road. Just I feel like maybe we can see a return of that, but it's a really interesting one.
For sure. So what are you guys thinking about the Gary Trent Jr. deal? I mean, he played really well after the trade. Let's see. Well, actually, before we get into that, Alex Caruso has multiple offers for the full mid-level. Whenever Jake Fisher was on my podcast a few days ago, he said that it's looking like he may be leaving the Lakers, that he's getting a lot of interest from different teams. So we'll see what happens with Caruso. Obviously, a fan favorite there. What do you guys think of that Gary Trent Jr. deal?
I don't love it. He's obviously a very good shooter. I think he's over at 39% in his career now. But not a very good defender. Has a limited handle. Can't really get to the rim. I think you'd have to make some $18 million is about starter level money or so, and I don't think he's provided starter level impact yet. Now, he is still fairly young, so you're projecting some growth there with these rookie extensions. But I think you have to make some pretty big strides as a passer and 2-point scorer, interior scorer, along with some defensive growth. So obviously a very good shooter with some size that has value. Like, absolutely, you don't want to undersell that. But I think you'd have to become a plus defender or add some versatility to his offense to really be worth that deal. But good for him, second round pick, get some good money. So never going to disparage a guy like that. But I think I do worry a little bit about him returning full value on that. But again, he's young, and so there's always a little bit of investment and projection you're doing there from the team side of things.
And I'm wondering too what the terms on that are. If it's a 2-1, just thinking to myself, like, because if that's someone you got back from Portland, you obviously valued him, you wanted him to be a part of your organization moving forward. 3 years, that's not exactly long term. It's like in the middle. So I'm wondering what their commitment level is, just for him as far as being a core piece moving forward. I think that is where my questioning lies.
Yeah, that Raptors core to me is really intriguing. You add Gary Trent alongside Fred VanVleet in the backcourt, Scotty Barnes, of course, number 4 overall pick in this year's draft. OG Anunoby, I think, is very underrated as a two-way wing in this league. Pascal Siakam, we'll have to see what his future is in Toronto. Chris Boucher. It's a really interesting collection of young assets Toronto now has on board there, kind of hitting the reset button a little bit, letting Kyle Lowry go. I like adding Precious Achiuwa to the mix as well. Just a really interesting mix of guys they have up there in Toronto, taking some swings on some big upside guys there.
Do you think Achiuwa makes Boucher expendable or Pascal expendable for them?
I think so. I mean, we've heard a lot of things around Pascal over the last couple of weeks. You could add Boucher with Precious Achiuwa. Scotty Barnes obviously needs to get a lot of minutes at the 4 as well. He could be a playmaker for them. I do wonder. I mean, we've heard a lot about Pascal. Even a lot of other players around, like Miles Turner in Indiana, for example, could be another guy, could be on the move here soon. Without the Pacers go in their roster, drafting Isaiah Jackson at 22, who's almost similar to Miles Turner as far as athleticism and defense goes. I feel like that's kind of the calm before the storm. We haven't seen any trades just yet, but I feel like that's coming here either tonight or later this week.
Jackson, I know you got to get off in a second, so we'll leave you with this. You wrote a great article about Pascal Siakam and kind of his development, what he can mean for a team, and some potential destinations if he is to get moved. Can you kind of break down Siakam's game and kind of people that missed the article? I definitely recommend you guys check it out. But what you've seen from Siakam and why teams should target him.
Yeah, so I think Siakam the last couple of years has been miscast as a primary ball handler on a team that when they traded Kawhi away, they didn't have anyone to really take that load over. They went creation by committee with Fred VanVleet, Marc Gasol for a year with his passing, Kyle Lowry, of course. But Siakam was the guy taking most of the shots and had to really take strides forward as a pull-up shooter and whatnot, and didn't get to pick and choose his spots as a creator as much. And I think that really hurt him. But in the secondary role that we've seen him play, we've seen him be a 2B on a title team. We've seen him be arguably the best player on a team that was on 60-win pace. He can be really good picking his spots as a cutter, attacking at closeouts because he's I know he's not been great from through the last couple of years, but I still trust him as a spot up guy there. Really smart moving in space, really good passer for a big man now, attacking downhill and pick and rolls or attacking off the catch, making interior passes to cutters. And then defensively, it's really rangy. You can cover a lot of ground. You can guard 1.5 through 4.5, I'd say. Good help defender, good kind of on the interior as a weak side rim protector. Not great in any one regard, I don't think, defensively, but has size, mobility, and a baseline of instincts that I think really help him there. So the main gist of it is he's been overextended on both ends the last couple of years. I would say mostly on offense the last couple of years, a little bit on defense this year. And I think in the right role, where he has a legit primary creator around him, whether it's Portland or Golden State, a couple of teams that we included as a potential suitor for him. He'd look a lot better just playing off of the defense has already kind of been broken down by someone who gets 2 feet in the paint. It can kind of his creation can be more of a feature of his ability offensively rather than the main source of how he provides impact there. Mainly let him be the guy who attacks closeouts, attacks as a cutter, attacks advantages, and then posts up mismatches, gets out in transition. More than the guy who's running a bunch of pick and rolls and ISOs and post ups every possession. That's kind of the gist of why I think there's still a lot of enticing things with him on offense and then defense. Kind of just, again, the ranginess, the versatility, guarding a couple of different positions pretty comfortably, 2 or 3 positions. and then helping as a low man on the interior and whatnot, providing some weak side rim protection there.
Yeah, I'm surprised that we've heard so many rumors about Siakam being available. I know there was a few reports, Mark Stein and a few others, Jake Fisher, had said that, after the Scotty Barnes pick, teams were feeling, okay, well, now the Raptors really want to move him. I agree with you. I think, we've seen in that role, not necessarily being the number one option, but, in a complementary role or number two role, he can really thrive. I'm surprised that, the Raptors are putting him out there. If they indeed are, that's been rumored, but we'll see what happens with that. Evan, you did a great article too for Basketball News looking at, other players that could be available. You mentioned Miles Turner. There was some talk about, him possibly being on the move there. I think earlier there was something about the Knicks being linked to Turner in a possible sign and trade. I forget exactly what the details were, but who were some guys that you think we should keep an eye on as far as trades? Because with a free agent class like this that is a bit weaker, I think a lot of people turn to the trade market to see, who some of the big names could be. Who are some guys that you have your eye on as far as trade candidates?
Yeah, like you mentioned, Miles Turner is definitely someone to watch there. Kemba Walker, we have to see if he's still going to stay in OKC or not. I could easily see a team like New York maybe going after him for a cheap price. His value is at a career low right now. To get Kemba Walker, it's probably super cheap. Buddy Hield, even after drafting Davion Mitchell, I think he's someone to watch for. We've heard already today the Lakers are still interested in trying to get Buddy Hield. Another one, too, Andrew Wiggins. I mean, they drafted Jonathan Kuminga and also Moses Moody, two wings there. Maybe they package together Andrew Wiggins, maybe something alongside like Wiggins, Wiseman for Pascal Siakam. That's just me spitballing here, but that makes a lot of sense to me on the surface. And also Colin Sexton. Spencer, you can chime in on this as well. Just what's your thoughts on Colin Sexton? Because I feel like he's a guy now. We have always have to see what happens there in Cleveland. They drafted Evan Mobley. He can still start there with Colin Sexton. We heard so much smoke around Sexton leading up to the draft, not so much afterwards. But what's your opinion on Sexton's future?
I think that they can wait it out, and it's the same opinion that I've had for the last couple months when I wrote it. There was no need to rush it. There's no need to rush any of this process. They waited it out somehow. The thoughts shifted from Jalen Green to Evan Mobley because the Rockets loved Jalen Green's game. And then they ended up with a prospect like Evan Mobley, who, again, 7-footer that's going to, make a formidable partner for Jared Allen there in that front court. But I think with Sexton, it's just something that you have to let play out. I don't know if he's quite at that maximum level yet. It's obviously going to take a little bit of time to figure that out. And that's going to be, in one season, you're going to have to make that decision. But in this case, if you don't come to terms on a deal before training camp or something, and you do let the season play out and he enters restricted free agency, a la a Jared Allen, like literally what Jared Allen went through this year, then if he plays well enough and plays himself into that kind of money, then that's beneficial. And then you make that decision whether or not you're going to match an offer sheet. But if he doesn't, and he, either regresses or doesn't play up to par to that maximum contract level, then you have yourself a situation where you can pay him, and then you can, negotiate, depending on how Darius Garland plays, a max extension with him in the year after that. So that's where it comes, it's a really tough balance to think about, because these rookie scale extensions and rookie scale contracts that we continue to talk about rebuilding,
Oh, did we lose Spencer? Looks like Spencer froze. We'll get Spencer back in a second. There is some deals we want to mention. We talked about Reggie Bullock's deal with the Mavericks. That is a 3-year deal. Bobby Portis has an option in the second year of his deal, so maybe he goes back for 1 year, see if they can compete, and then contend, win a championship again, then possibly hits free agency again. Zach Collins signed a 3-year, $22 million deal with the Spurs. Alex Len gets a 2-year deal with the Kings. Not bad for him. Hey, Spencer, there you are. We're just going through some of these moves that just happened. The Raptors are making a play for Rashawn Holmes. That's pretty interesting. I think Holmes is one of the better players that, is still out there right now. So Raptors, that's interesting. They're going after Rashawn Holmes. The Spurs, even after the Zach Collins deal, Doug McDermott, they still have more than $25 million in cap space. So they could still be players for some of these players. And then Mike Muscala gets a 2-year, $7 million deal to return to the Thunder. So of all that, Spencer, you missed a few of them. Bobby Portis has an option on the second year. Zach Collins has a 3-year, $22 million deal with the Spurs. Any of those jump out at you? Evan, actually, you wrote a great article about the Spurs and kind of what they should do this offseason, how you think they should kind of go younger. We've seen now Zach Collins deal, that kind of lines up with, with that. And actually here, the Spurs, Knicks, and Pelicans are some of the main suitors for Evan Fournier. So what are your thoughts on what we've seen from the Spurs? And does that kind of line up with what you were thinking they would do?
Yeah, I think so far they're on schedule with what I think they should do, which is a rarity, honestly, in San Antonio. But I think they should be in position to tank this year. They obviously signed Doug McDermott to a 3-year deal, $14 million per year, but they needed shooting anyways. Zach Collins is a young project who obviously has been injured in Portland, but he could turn out to be a guy who he's making $7 million plus per year right now. That could be a boom later on for the Spurs. But the Spurs right now, when you look at the Western Conference hierarchy, I think they're in the very bottom of that tier. I think they're in the bottom 3 of the West right now. And I think the Spurs and Greg Popovich need to realize that this might be the year to tank for a guy like Chet Holmgren of Gonzaga or Paolo Banchero of Duke, 2 guys who are near the top of the 2022 draft class. So I do wonder if the Spurs are in that position where they could be a team that kind of stealth tanks a little bit. We saw it before way back in 99 with Tim Duncan. But I do wonder, honestly, what their position is. Because if they go out and get Evan Fournier, Alex, that's kind of me thinking they're making win-now moves, getting Fournier and McDermott, 2 starters there on board with this young core. So if they go in the direction and get Evan Fournier, that's really interesting to me because I feel like that's kind of not the right move to make for them. I think they should be in a position, when you look at the Western Conference, where I think it's easy to say they're not really a true playoff contender just yet with that core. I think they should go the opposite direction.
Yeah, they're getting some criticism.
They're going towards that middle right now.
Yeah, that's what I don't really understand. I agree with you. I think they would have been better just to, let the young guys play, see what happens, and, draft some talent. But instead, if they do the Fournier move, I'm not a huge fan of that. And the fact they're giving out multi-year deals, too, is pretty interesting. Zach Collins, 3 years, $22 million. I see Nekias right now on Twitter kind of killing that move. Thinks that's a lot of money for him. He has so many injuries and stuff. It's been tough. And we don't know the exact specifics. Maybe there's some protections in there in case he does have injuries, but pretty surprising to see that. Let's see. Someone mentioned a good point about the poison pill deals, that teams may have just recognized that they're gonna have to do business with people and they didn't want to stick it to other teams. That's very possible too. You don't want to, piss off other GMs that you have to call later on and try to do business with. So that's definitely possible. Garrett Temple, his deal with the Pelicans, only the first 2 out of 3 are guaranteed. Trevor Ariza to the Lakers on a 1-year deal. So we had heard that the Lakers are trying to get the band back together. Not a 2020 Laker, but obviously a former Laker going back.
Is this his third stint with them?
Yeah, seriously. Trevor's
he's been there sometimes.
What do you guys? I mean, I'm not sure what he can provide at this point, but thoughts on Trevor Ariza going to the Lakers?
I like it. I mean, they need some wing depth. He can provide some shooting. He's versatile defensively, but covering him up close in his 1 year with the Phoenix Suns, or just say 2 months with the Phoenix Suns, he looked like he was completely cooked physically, but he did a little bit better when he went to a winning situation in Miami this past year. Maybe Ariza can hit that reset button a little bit with the Lakers, but I like it just as a bench piece, but I don't know if I can really trust Trevor Ariza from my own eyeballs from what I've seen the last couple of years.
That's probably more in a reserve role. And guys like Evan mentioned this morning, you got Rudy Gay on the radar, and you got, these other guys like Wayne Ellington on the radar. Those are the type of, kind of bargain deals they're going to be looking for on this team. And that's going to be necessary, especially with Russell Westbrook's salary, having to really bolster that cap sheet. But no, I don't mind it. I think it's a good move, and it's interesting, to have some of these players that might not get that much playing time, like Jared Dudley and Trevor Ariza on the team. But as far as like a culture goes and a locker room presence goes, and knowing how talented the top heavy part of that roster is going to be, I'm a fan. I think it's a good idea.
So question here, Terrence Ross, there was some talk about Terrence Ross on draft night possibly being available in a trade. It would make sense for the Magic to move him. We saw them trade away many other veterans, Fournier, Aaron Gordon, they're clearly rebuilding. Evan wrote a great piece about, where this team is headed. And I know you were a big fan of their draft, being able to bring in Jalen Suggs, Franz Wagner. They have a lot of young pieces there. And I think they have, 10 players that are 25 years old or younger. I mean, it's crazy. They have a very young team. Do you think we could see them trade Terrence Ross to try to get another young player or draft pick?
I think that makes the most sense for Orlando. You need to create some room. They still have Gary Harris on that roster as well, who's only 25, 26 years old. You also have some other young pieces on the wing, Franz Wagner, like you mentioned, Jalen Suggs, Cole Anthony, Markelle Fultz, Chuma Okeke, Wendell Carter, Mo Bamba. I could go on and on. There's so many young guys on this roster need playing time. And Terrence Ross kind of that last man standing there as far as veterans go. And we heard some noise on draft night. The Knicks could be a team that could be interested in Terrence Ross. Now with Reggie Bullock going to Dallas, maybe they could restart those talks for a guy like Terrence Ross who can help fill that Bullock role for them. But yeah, I really do see Terrence Ross be on the move here soon. A full reset in Orlando. I do love the Magic's draft. Getting Suggs, we were all talking about this off the air before, but Jalen Suggs, his interview during the pre-draft process was super impressive to us. And he's a guy to me I feel could be an easy building block for the Magic. Franz Wagner's a connective tissue kind of guy that can help out that young core. If Jonathan Isaac's fully healthy here soon, that's a team in about 2 or 3 years that could really make some noise in the East.
This is hilarious. It happened again, Alex. Wayne Ellington reached a 1-year deal with the Lakers, according to Chris Haynes.
Hey, by the way, props to Evan. You wrote an article this morning, 10 free agents that we should look out for, and he's one of the ones on there. So why do you think that, in your article, you mentioned it's a great fit. Why do you think that's a good fit for the Lakers, and what are your thoughts on the deal?
Sharpshooter, plus 40%. I think he shot 43% last year from 3 with Detroit. He was actually a full-time starter of the Pistons as well, and I can easily see, we don't know the terms just yet on that contract, but a veteran's minimum type deal for Wayne Ellington where he could be potentially a starter for them at shooting guard alongside Russell Westbrook. He can space the floor, be kind of in that Buddy Hield role they're looking for a lot cheaper. He can be a guy who can really hit 40 to 45% of his three-pointers next season. I love the fit a lot more than I did Trevor Ariza. So they're kind of getting these guys right now on board, the veterans that are ring chasing with Los Angeles. Wayne Ellington's one of the moves I really like so far in free agency. He's a perfect fit in LA.
Yeah, that's exactly what they need to look for. The, cheap 1 year type deals, guys that can shoot, spread the floor. When you bring in Russell Westbrook and you have the kind of the core they have, they definitely need shooters around them. So yeah, it makes sense. And one thing that you mentioned in your article that I thought was a great point too. It's not even just the fact that you can go, play with LeBron and these guys and play in LA. But if you're a guy that, you're thinking, you're Wayne Ellington, you're thinking, I'm probably going to get a minimum deal somewhere. You might as well go to a team like the Lakers where, you're going to have a big role. He could potentially be a starter next to Russell Westbrook. So it's also the minutes and the role these guys could get, which is, so attractive. Plus, we always see guys want to be in LA. They want to be a Laker. You're on national TV all the time. So it's a bit more attractive. If you're going to take a veteran minimum deal from somewhere, you might as well go to the place where you might be able to chase a championship, play with a star-studded team, be on national TV, be in LA, and get a big role. So it makes sense. Do we think, we heard some rumors about Dwight Howard to LA. It seems like there's mutual interest there. I think it makes so much sense. Just what we saw from him last year. They're familiar with him. He played with AD and LeBron in this team. Do we think that would be a good move for the Lakers?
I think so. It makes some sense. I do wonder, though, if this might be the point where AD can finally embrace being a full-time 5. I think especially this is what the Lakers need to do is have LeBron play 4, AD play 5. But if they're looking for a primary backup, we saw it last year in Philadelphia with Dwight Howard. He was a really good backup for Joel Embiid. I could see the same thing happening here with Los Angeles behind Anthony Davis. It's a really strong fit. He can roll to the rim very hard. He's still a great rebounder. He's a solid defender. You get him again on a minimum deal. I mean, that's something you have to easily consider if you're the Lakers. Howard is obviously, like you mentioned, Alex, familiar with the system there. So I would definitely roll the dice there and try to bring him back if they can.
Yeah, it just makes so much sense. It'll be interesting to see if we, see that deal come through. I'm sure he's someone that could generate, decent interest from other teams too. Just a good shot blocker. Does he cause issues off the floor, the locker room? There's things like that could still come up, but it makes sense for the Lakers. While we're kind of on the topic of the Lakers, we'll move on here in a second. But again, we talked about the article that you wrote, Evan, breaking down, 10 possible free agent targets for this team. Who are some other free agents that are out there that you think would make sense for the Lakers based on your article?
Yeah, Rudy Gay is one of them. Patty Mills, actually someone in the comments just asked about Patty Mills. He makes a lot of sense to me as a backup point guard for the Lakers. He can create for himself. He's doing very well right now with Australia in the Olympics. He's showing he could really be a spark plug off their bench for them. Those are two Spurs right there, in my opinion, that make a lot of sense. honestly, when you see just the overall market, if you're a Lakers fan out there watching this, go to NBA stats and check out guys who are shooting at least 40% from three. That's probably who the Lakers are going to try to go after. They need shooting and a lot of it, especially with Westbrook, LeBron, and AD on the court. Guys combined shooting 32% from three this past season. Wayne Ellington's a solid start. Trevor Reeves is another one of them, but they need to continuously keep adding sharpshooters. I'm really interested to see what happens with Alex Caruso, too, because we're hearing rumblings now that he might be on the move elsewhere from Los Angeles. So that makes me wonder if they lose Caruso, maybe a guy like Patty Mills does make a lot of sense to replace him.
And then maybe Bryn Forbes is like a contingency plan or something.
Yeah,
well.
yeah, he can fit the MLE, I think, in my opinion.
There you go.
All right. So as we mentioned before, if you guys have any questions or comments, be sure to drop them in the chat here. Patty Mills is so interesting. I saw a great stat that in 829 NBA games, he's only scored 30 or more points 3 times. And in his last 11 Olympic games, he has more than 30 points 3 times. So it's just wild to see. I mean,
FIBA Patty Mills is different, people.
He's
FIBA
used
Patty Mills is
differently.
different.
Obviously, like the role is different. He's used differently, but like it's amazing to see what he's been able to do in Olympic play. He's been incredible. So let's see some of the comments here. Steven says that the Magic have already said they want vets to balance out the roster. So interesting there. You know, if they do want to keep Terrence Ross or maybe add a few vets, it's always good to have veterans when you have such a young core. Let's see. Front office said they would make it clear with free agents of their role at the team that's developing. So it reminds me of like the Sixers when they were kind of going through the process years, not to compare, you know, the Magic team to the Sixers, but, you know, getting guys who understand they're going to be mentors and playing limited role.
The Amir Johnsons of the world. I remember doing an article I remember doing an article. Actually, Amir Johnson was mentoring Rashawn Holmes when I was writing at Basketball Insiders. And I did a feature on those two. And it's actually kind of funny to see see how good that Rashawn's become. But no, yeah, every rebuild needs vets. I think that's a huge part of this that a lot of people don't understand. It's not a game of 2K. You can't just throw a bunch of 20-something-year-olds on one team and expect them to just develop the right way. Like, you need guys like that. You need locker room guys. The human aspect of this is so important. Even if you look at, Jared Dudley and what he did in Brooklyn before he got to Los Angeles, what he did in Phoenix before that too. Like those types of guys are so paramount. Garrett Temple, you've seen his impact, other places. I'm sure he's going to be really good for the Pelicans in that respect. But veterans are so crucial for young guys that are really trying to find their way and trying to get used to what it means to win and what it means to be a professional.
Really quickly here, I'm seeing something on Twitter. Norman Powell just tweeted out the eye emoji, so maybe we see something soon with Norman Powell.
Ooh, interesting. Gotta love the eye emoji around this time of year. B-Boy says, keep naming guys, get them signed. Yeah, if we're on here for 2 more hours, if we just keep naming dudes, at this rate, they'll be all signed by tonight. Let's see. We talked about Patty Mills for a second. Someone asked, what's going on with Nance Jr.? How expensive would he be? I'm a Suns fan.
It's a good question.
That's interesting.
It's a good question.
Go ahead, Spence.
No, and I was actually, texting with a couple of my friends about this too, because, you think about the fit that he has in Cleveland right now, but you also know that he plays primarily that 4 role, and Evan Mobley's there now. Isaac Okoro's putting on a couple inches of height and a little bit more size, so that 3/4 role is starting to fill up a little bit. You don't know what Jetty Osman's going to be. He's been linked obviously to trade rumors as well, but Larry Nance Jr. is clearly one of their top assets right now. If he can net you a first-round pick and someone can absorb that salary of his, which is very team friendly, mind you, then yeah, I think that you have to listen to it at least. In return, if the Cavs could get something, they are scouring the market for a wing right now, because that is their number one priority. They want to add shooting, and they want to add, continue to add that defensive mindset. So it's actually funny when you mentioned, Terrence Ross earlier, or even a Gary Harris. I thought that'd be a perfect fit for Cleveland. And in that case, that would be a Larry Nance Jr., someone to come in and fill that role if they were to part ways with him. So we'll see what kind of offers come in for Larry Nance Jr. Obviously, he was very, coveted at the trade deadline this past February, as you remember. So we will see on that front. But if the Cavs can net some sort of pick for him, I'm interested to see what teams would be able to absorb him for not too much money to send back in return. But I think the Cavs would want, if it's not a pick, then a very valuable young player in return, or even perhaps a veteran that just plays on the wing, like I said.
So it happened again. Dwight is going back to the Lakers. We talk about it. It happens, folks. Yeah. So there you go. And then Solomon Hill has agreed to a 1-year deal to return to the Hawks.
Huge for them. Huge for them.
I think this Dwight addition is huge. We talked about it earlier, but that was Atan Thomas, who works with us at Basketball News. That was his big thing last year. He was saying they should not have let Dwight go. And we saw it during the year. They had Marc Gasol, they had Montrezl Harrell, but they were missing a shot blocker. And, even when they brought in Andre Drummond, that's not his, skill set. He's not a rim protector. So to be able to go out and get Dwight, he was so big for this team last year, not even just shot blocking wise, but, being able to, as like a lob threat, he just really fit in with this team. We all know during that championship run, what he did against Jokic and the joke, he's huge for this team. I think it makes a lot of sense.
Come in for 15 or something minutes. That's literally what you got to do, and just be the guy off the bench to accept your role and to get offensive rebounds and to do exactly what he did in the bubble. And I'm sure that he's just going to go right back to doing that.
We got a Suns question here. Actually, Evan, I know you got to run real quick to grab your charger. Why don't you do that while we talk about this? Someone asked about Markelle Fultz and whether he fits.
I asked that to you, actually, the other day about what Markelle's role is going to be, because think about it. You've got Jalen Suggs on top of RJ Hampton, and now you add another different guard into there, like Cole Anthony. So think about the guard room's filling up quick there. So are you going to be able to balance out that playing time fairly? We obviously know how good Markelle looked before he got injured again.
That's what I was going to say.
So I'm curious to see, because you're not going to throw out many 3 guard lineups, I don't think. That's a good question. I don't know what the market looks like for Markelle. I'm assuming that some teams would call about him and inquire about his availability, or maybe one of the other guards. Maybe someone inquires about RJ Hampton or Cole Anthony, depending on how the franchise values all of them. Because again, you've got 4 very talented young guards in that room, but someone's got to be the odd man out, I think, especially because they're all similar sized. It's not like one of them can play up at the 3 or something. It's going to be very difficult to have all that. And plus, we mentioned them earlier. They've got Terrence Ross. They've got Gary Harris. So it's really tough to find playing time for all of those guys.
Yeah, they have 9 players aged 25 or younger, and a lot of them are backcourt players. You mentioned RJ Hampton. It'll be interesting to see what happens. I'm not sure. I think right now, I don't think Orlando is expecting to compete. I think they're just trying to get the best players they can and develop them. So it wouldn't be surprising to me if they held on to Fultz and just
play him at the 4.
Just see how he develops, see what they have in him. Again, he was playing great basketball last year before he got injured, which is why they gave him the extension that they did. It seemed like he was kind of getting over some of the issues he was having mentally and all that. So if he can get back to the player that we kind of thought he was at one point, even if he's not number 1 pick Markelle Fultz, but a solid, he's 23 years old. Isn't it crazy that he's 23? So, I mean,
it is.
I don't think they'd want to give up on him just yet. But I'm curious to see what Orlando does, because they do have just a ton. We talked about Suggs, Anthony, Fultz, RJ Hampton. It's pretty wild when you start talking about all the pieces they have there.
That's what I'm saying. There's a shortage of wings there. And it's also kind of a logjam in the front court. You look at Wendell Carter Jr., you've got Mo Bamba, you've got Jonathan Isaac coming back. So like that part I think is going to be hard. The roster construction is very interesting. We'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, it is very interesting. So we shall see there. Evan's going to jump back here in a second. I do want to throw that question about the Suns over his way. So definitely hang out if you whoever asked that question. Oh, here we go. Evan's back now. Let's add him back in. Evan, we had that question. Which backup big should the Suns target with Noel and Tice off the market? Who do you think would make sense?
I think we hit on this a little bit earlier, but maybe someone like Gorgie Jang. But I think a better fit, honestly, for what the Suns are looking for, a more athletic rim running type who can be a very good efficient guy around the rim, a shot blocker when need be. And the Suns only need a guy to play around 10, 15 minutes per game behind DeAndre Ayton. We saw Ayton in the playoffs play close to 40 minutes per game. He's very good at not getting into foul trouble. JaVale McGee, maybe someone to watch out for there. I think he makes a lot of sense for them as someone as a similar type to Ayton. It gives you a little bit different kind of flair off the bench, but he's a solid guy to watch there. But one hypothetical I want to throw your way, Spencer, because I know Larry Nance actually was connected to the Suns before, I think around the trade deadline. But Jalen Smith, the former number 10 overall pick, maybe Dario Saric's contract, he's out for the whole year with the torn ACL. But would that intrigue you from Cleveland's side? Maybe a former lottery pick in Jalen Smith plus Dario Saric. I think the money matches up there.
Money does match up. I think. Oh, that's a good question. Because now they kind of have the backup big situation figured out. But Jalen Smith is quite intriguing now that I think about it. I mean, it's a first round pick. Barely had any playing time last year. Obviously, a developmental year. I know that the Cavs have had interest in Dario Saric in the past. So, sure. I think that would probably, pique their interest a little bit. Depends if they get, a pick back with it. That probably wouldn't be a bad fit for Phoenix. Because again, Larry's a jack of all trades. Me and Alex have talked about Larry at length before, just the way that he gets deflections. He's able to, I call him a ball mover because he just keeps the thing going. He's really good in transition, always has his head up. You can play him at the nail. He'll do dribble handoffs. He'll do fake dribble handoffs and turn around and do quick pull-up jumpers, which he's gotten better at. The 3-point acumen is there. I think that last year's numbers were a little skewed at some points because he was dealing with a finger injury. So I think that he's a lot better of a shooter than, even though the numbers are respectable, I think they're a lot better than what they were last year. But no, I think that would intrigue them, but I feel like if they were going to try and find a taker for Larry, that they'd be looking more in that looking for a 3 more than a big, just because again, with the Mobley situation with Jared Allen, you're going to probably see him playing backup big a lot. But certainly something to think about. But again, Hartenstein didn't get offered the qualifying offer. So that just kind of makes me think, all right, they might be going with just Evan Mobley as the backup big. And, whoever's at the 4 might be playing up a little bit, maybe a Dean Wade, just thinking off the top of my head.
Some updates here. Patty Mills has interest from the Lakers and the Nets. That's interesting. Another player that was mentioned in Evan's article about, free agents to target. Patty Mills is on there for the Lakers. He'd be great in Brooklyn too, so that makes a lot of sense. The Heat have made an offer for Markieff Morris, who has a home in South Florida. So interesting there as well. Miami making some big moves today. Been very active. Some top free agents we're still waiting on: Spencer Dinwiddie, Dennis Schroeder, Rashawn Holmes, Alex Caruso. Any other guys that you guys are paying close attention to?
I have a question. Have we heard anything about Victor Oladipo's free agency?
No.
How crazy is that?
Anything.
Yeah. So it's crazy to think that a year and a half ago, even a year ago during the offseason, there were reports that the Pacers were asking for a ton in trade, negotiations, and that, they wanted to keep him. He was an all-NBA guy not too long ago. It's pretty wild. Oh, Kelly Oubre is also out there. Thanks, Jake, for dropping that in the comments. You're right about that. To go from a guy that we were talking about as, not too long ago, all-NBA player, a guy that the Pacers were valuing so highly, to, obviously getting traded at the deadline for not very much, to now zero mention as far as rumors in free agency. I saw some people responding to your article, Evan, about the Lakers saying, oh, they should add Oladipo on the mid-level, or, it's crazy to see how much his stock has fallen in 1 year or a year and a half. It's pretty wild. And I mean, if you're a team, you would think you would just take a shot on him to see if he can return to that level, because it wasn't too long ago, and injuries obviously played some role in that. So if he can get back to healthy, it'll be interesting to see what he can provide. But I am shocked. That's a great point, Spence.
It's unfortunate too because Oladipo actually was offered before he left Indiana a 4-year, $100 million deal. Looking back at some old reports, and now unfortunately might be getting like a minimum or even like a low exception type of deal just to prove himself next year. It's unfortunate because three years ago, Victor Oladipo was an All NBA type of player, and just his quad injury just really shot his ability to do that. But I'm a big Oladipo fan when he's fully healthy. If he can go join a team like, let's say, just for spitballing here, the Lakers, Brooklyn on a short-term kind of deal, that's a guy, if he's fully healthy, could swing you a series or two and help you get a title.
Recoup his value a little bit. It almost reminds me of, a DeMarcus Cousins situation in a way. The way that, he was dominant for so long and then, devastating injury, another devastating injury just completely shot his value. But, as we saw in the playoffs, DeMarcus Cousins was able to get, some pretty decent minutes there with the Clippers. Before that, he was in LA, but he had the big time injury. Also, he played with Oladipo in Houston actually too. Come to think about it, but it's sad to see what injuries can do in these situations. But story's not over. Still got plenty of career left, in my opinion. Got the outside shooting ability. Just got to make sure that he can move. He obviously doesn't have the same burst as he used to, but it could come back with more reps. And again, hopefully he can just stay strength, conditioning, all that, and keep that in order.
You're right, though. The fact that he turned down that much money from Indiana, I mean, that's brutal. And, he's 29 years old, so team is probably between the injury risk and then the fact that he's 29, that's probably scaring some people away. I think there's also this perception of him that, we saw him in Orlando when he was younger and he kind of struggled a bit. In OKC, he didn't play that well. So really, like, that stretch in Indiana was the time we saw him break out and play, some of his best basketball. Maybe some people are wondering, was that kind of a fluke? Is he the player that we saw in OKC and throughout the rest of his career? But yeah, tough for him, the fact that he's not really being mentioned at all. He played 20 games in Houston. He did average 21.2 points, 5 assists, 4.8 rebounds. He shot the ball pretty poorly, 40% from the field, 32% from three. Didn't really play much in Miami, only 4 games, averaged 12 points. Didn't really do a whole lot. So, yeah, very interesting that we're not hearing anything Oladipo-wise. Our producer, Brian, says that he might be out until January or February. I remember he obviously didn't play toward the end of the season, but I don't know what his timetable is to return. Another guy that we really haven't talked about much is Lauri Markkanen. There were some rumors out there that there could be a sign and trade with DeMar DeRozan and Markkanen sending him to San Antonio. So that would mean San Antonio is going after Doug McDermott, Zach Collins, Lauri Markkanen. Thoughts on Markkanen potentially in San Antonio?
Add Evan Fournier to that mix too. I mean, this is a team, if they were to pull something off like that, that's maximum shooting. I mean, you're surrounding DeJounte Murray, Keldon Johnson, Derek White with even more really spot-up guys around them. Markkanen, I think, it's so quiet right now with DeRozan and Markkanen. It's making me think now that you mentioned him, maybe there's something brewing behind the scenes between those two teams that they're working out. But I think Markkanen is someone that fell out of favor in Chicago, but he's one of my favorite guys from the 2017 class. He had a great rookie year, had a great second year as well, but just kind of fell out of favor there in Chicago. I think a team like San Antonio makes a lot of sense for Markkanen. He just needs somewhere to develop and reach his full potential. I think he could still be a very good stretch for in the NBA. Markkanen is someone who I think really could bounce back wherever he lands next. It's probably not going to be in Chicago, but San Antonio somewhere else. I'm still a fan of Markkanen.
Yeah, and I think some of these guys that we're talking about right now could be interesting buy low candidates. Oladipo is one because of how much his stock has dropped, but then someone like Kelly Oubre too, coming off a season that didn't really go as expected with, the Warriors, shot the ball pretty poorly at times, but, he's someone that's out there right now. And I think people don't realize, Kelly Oubre is still very young. He did an interview before free agency started where he talked about just, he's one of the younger, guys in this class that's unrestricted. He's only 25 years old. So I think because he's been in the league so long, we tend to forget that.
Sorry. Wow. Evan Fournier, 4 years, $78 million deal with the New York Knicks, according to Woj.
All right. So we talked about him earlier as an option for the Knicks. That was the rumored front runner. Yeah, 4 years, $78 million.
Wow.
Fournier's got some, he's gotten some big contracts throughout his career. When his career is over, he's gonna be one of those guys that you look at the career earnings and it's gonna surprise a lot of people. But wow, what do you think of that fit?
I think it's a great fit with Tom Thibodeau. I think he's going to love Evan Fournier. He's a great shooter. He pairs very well next to RJ Barrett and Julius Randle to space the floor for them. adding him in that young core is just really intriguing to me, where this Knicks team is running it back. Now you added Evan Fournier as your potential splash move. That's something that could really keep them atop like the top 5, top 6 in the East. I really like the fit there.
We also have Nick Batum going back to the Clippers on a 2-year deal. He was great for them last year. I think his story is incredible too. He said last year he didn't expect to be signed by a team because he had played so poorly. Not played so poorly, but relative to his contract, he's like, oh, I thought everyone hated me and didn't want me around. But it was just because that contract was so big. People thought he was overpaid, but, was really good for the Clippers at times last year. So back there on a 2-year deal. Spencer, any thoughts on Fournier to the Knicks? I agree with Evan here. And going back to his contracts, so he's been paid. There's been multiple years now. The contract that he just had with Orlando and Boston, we paid him, $18 million, $17 million a year. Now he has this big contract. So Fournier is doing well for himself. What are your thoughts on that deal?
Good for Evan. He's always been a solid player. Obviously you can speak to him probably a little bit more because you're obviously down there in Florida and you know him pretty well. But always somebody that was able to come out any night and honestly score 25 or 30. Like just he's able to get on these stretches of shooting. And it seems like he's a teeny bit streaky for me. But I think that being in that role in New York where you have a Julius Randle who's going to, have the higher usage, you're going to have somebody that's going to allow you to operate in a way as you can spot him up. He can put it on the floor. He's decent enough defensively to where you're not going to really get hurt on that end. He's got, some decent size. I think it's a good fit. I'm thinking from the Celtics perspective now. We were mentioning Marcus Smart and potentially wanting a extension with Boston. Does that make that more, apt to happening? I'm thinking as well, the role of a Romeo Langford in Boston probably getting up now with no Fournier there, which intrigues me just as somebody that, has covered Romeo Langford a little bit closer. I think that it's a good deal for Evan, and I think bringing in the youth movement, so to speak, for Boston is a good idea.
Yeah. No, I think with Fournier, it's interesting. He's someone that I think fills his role really nicely. I do agree he's a bit streaky, but he knows his role. I think he's also younger than people think. He's only 28 years old. I think people think of Fournier as being a bit older. I think if you ask a lot of people who's younger, Evan Fournier or Victor Oladipo, I think they would probably say Oladipo, but he's only 28 years old.
They're afraid to Google him.
Yeah, understandably. And he's another one of those guys. We talked about Patty Mills. He's played really well in international competition and kind of shows a different side of his game. So, no, I think it makes sense. I agree with everything that, Evan said about just the fit in New York and what he can kind of bring to that team. So, pretty interesting. One guy that we haven't talked a lot about, actually 2 guys I want to hit on, Dennis Schroeder. We talked about it earlier. He turned down, and speaking of guys that turned down a big extension, he turned down a big extension from the Lakers. I forget the exact number. If either of you guys remember, feel free to chime in. But, he's someone that we haven't heard a ton about either today. But let me look up the extension number for Schroeder. But I'm curious, where are we thinking Schroeder could land? Because there really hasn't been a lot of rumors. There was some talk about New York, some talk about, it was a 4-year, $84 million extension he turned down from the Lakers. So maybe regretting that right now. But there was rumor about Bulls, there was Knicks, but now we see both those teams kind of found new options. Where do we think Schroeder could land? Is it New Orleans? What's out there that makes sense for him?
I mean,
it goes back to DC, wasn't it? Doesn't it just go back to DC? I mean, I truly cannot think of many other teams that he would, money wise, that has anything left that makes sense. But
DC would have to do a sign and trade.
Right.
Well,
Exactly.
Isn't DC's main sign and trade options Kyle Kuzma and Montrezl Harrell? What could work really for DC to land him?
It's difficult for sure.
And Spencer Dinwiddie was meeting with the Wizards when free agency opened too, so that could be another team. If they reach something with Dinwiddie, that takes another team off the list, and you're kind of reaching New Orleans, and potentially that's it, unless he wants to take a severe pay cut and play on the MLE somewhere.
The Dinwiddie to Washington thing's so interesting because there was a report that the Nets have zero interest in Kyle Kuzma or Montrezl Harrell. So unless they're able to do it as a 3-team situation where they send those guys elsewhere, I'm not sure what really makes sense, how they'd be able to get Spencer to Washington at the salary he's going to want. Because if they don't, do a sign and trade, then they can't offer Dinwiddie, Schroeder, any of these guys, more than that mid-level exception. So that'll be interesting to see. So yeah, those are two guys, Dinwiddie, Schroeder will be interesting. I'm sure New Orleans is pursuing, both of those guys too, see who they can get. Norm Powell is the other one that we haven't talked about a ton.
Yep.
We talked about how he tweeted those eye emoji earlier, but is there any team out there that you're liking as a fit for Norm Powell? Obviously he got traded last year at the deadline, goes to Portland. He had played really well. He's so interesting to me because in Toronto, it seemed like he played his best basketball when he was around the starters and wasn't asked to kind of lead that second unit because
Starter Norm?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we saw it all the time. Like when he was with the starters, he made better decisions. He shot the ball better. He was just so much better than, when he kind of led the second unit, even though he was getting more shots in a bigger role in that second unit. What do you guys think we're going to see from Norm Powell? And is there anywhere that makes sense?
He's going to need he's going to want the bag, obviously. I'm just thinking about what teams can give it to him that would be appealing to him, which is interesting to me because I don't know who's left. Like I was thinking to myself before all this started, like Dallas, but obviously they went out and got Reggie Bullock.
Real quick, we do have one update. Derrick Rose, 3-year, $43 million deal with the Knicks. So 3 years for Derrick Rose.
New York
one too.
Yeah, say New York's probably out of the picture now, and I was going to say Norm Powell could have fit there.
There you go.
Continue, sorry. No, you're good. Who's got money?
I'll spitball here and say they have to get off Eric Bledsoe, but what about Memphis? I like Norm Powell.
I was just about to say Memphis. Yes.
That's a really good fit. Charlotte too.
Memphis is a good point too because they didn't pick up Winslow's option. Obviously, they can use more shooting the way that their roster is constructed. No, that actually is probably the best fit. I think I would say.
I think Portland has to get Norman Powell back, though, right? I mean, they gave up Gary Trent for him, a really valuable young asset. Damian Lillard is trying to win right now. This might be the last year for Neil Olshey to really make some headway in the West. Giving up Trent for Powell, I think it's a priority right now for Portland to get Powell back.
For sure.
No, yeah, I would agree with that. It depends on what they're willing to pony up to, Like that's the other part. Like, because I'm guessing Norm, with the season he's coming off of, probably he's probably in that 16 to 18 range, maybe a little higher, or is that way too low? What do you think?
I think it's right in the wheelhouse of what he deserves. I mean, he's shown right now. He's a starting caliber wing, and he helped Toronto in their finals run. He was a huge piece of Toronto. Like, he's a proven winner, great shooter, good defender. Does a little bit of playmaking as well. He's kind of a multifaceted wing that really fits on any roster right now.
I'm wondering if some teams look at, his production in Toronto, because I know like Raptor fans, we had the Dishes and Dimes podcast that's part of our basketball news network. And they every time he started having those big stretches where he was playing really well, they were like, nope, it's a fluke. We know this. He's going to come back down to earth. We've seen this happen before. He shoots the ball like last year before he got traded. He was shooting 43.9% from three. But then he has stretches where, he kind of disappears and doesn't shoot the ball as well. There were times in the postseason he didn't play as well either. So I wonder if teams are kind of wondering, was that a fluke? And are they scared to kind of reward that big production? He did play well in Portland, averaging 17 points per game, but his shooting did come back down to earth. It went from shooting 50% from the field to 44, and then from 44% from three to 36. So I wonder if teams are kind of worried about that streakiness and inconsistency.
It's always hard when someone gets traded mid-season. I think executives will give them a little bit of leeway there because, you change environments, you change who you're playing with. You're obviously playing with someone like Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum, who are very ball dominant. Obviously, at the first start, CJ McCollum was hurt, so he was playing a lot as basically the number two scorer. And that's when he was thriving. But then, they got McCollum back, and then boom, here comes all the role sacrificing and being more of a spot up guy rather than having the ball in your hands. It's difficult adjustment. I think that he is somebody who can put the ball on the floor a little bit more and can really kind of attack the rim. He's not just a 3-point shooter, and he's willing to gun him. I think he's got a little bit more value there. And then on the defensive end as well.
This is a really interesting point. I was just doing the quick math and obviously seeing Evan Fournier and now Derrick Rose. I think the Knicks right now might be done spending. I just did some quick math. They're right up near $45 to $50 million. They spent that $50 million in cap space coming in. So they bring back Nerlens Noel, Alec Burks, Derrick Rose, and now you get Evan Fournier on that big deal. I think the Knicks might be done there. I mean, they ran it back. They got Fournier. I think it's a pretty solid offseason for them if they wanted to do that.
Yeah, you know, after how well they performed last year, you know, to add Fournier and just bring back their core, you know, makes sense. So we'll see. Let's see. The Lakers and Wizards may still expand the trade to include Dennis Schroeder. So that's interesting.
So that was
something that was discussed. Otherwise, you know, I'm not sure what option Schroeder really has. Oh, it looks like Spencer froze again. We'll get him added back here shortly. But that would make sense for everyone involved because we're looking at it now. The only teams that have cap space left. Oh, there we go. He's back. The only teams that have cap space left are the Spurs and Thunder. So, I mean, if you're Schroeder, you better hope that Wizards deal can get expanded and that something doesn't happen with Dinwiddie. But that'll be interesting. Nick Batum, his contract has an option in year 2, so that's worth noting.
Alex, breaking news.
Yes.
Alex Caruso, 4 years, $30 million with the Chicago Bulls.
Yeah.
4 years, 37 to the Bulls.
37.
A 4-year deal.
Four-year deal, $37 million. So we talked about this earlier that Caruso might be on the move and that the Bulls wanted to sign multiple guards. You know, Jake Fisher mentioned that in the podcast that they wanted to bring in, you know, ball handling, playmaking, and just get someone that could kind of create. So Lonzo and now Caruso, very interesting. What are your thoughts on the fit for Caruso in Chicago?
That's the full MLE, I believe, for Caruso, too, in Chicago, around $9.5 million per year. I like Caruso. I think he's very underrated. Obviously, he gets a big spotlight in the Lakers for the past couple of years, but shot 40% from 3 at the Lakers. He's a great defender. He can guard 1 through 2. Very high-energy, athletic guy, too, as well. As a backup with Lonzo, I could even see Caruso and Lonzo playing together. That's a very solid rotation now of guards right now for the Bulls. You have Levine, Caruso, and you also add in Lonzo Ball. I mean, I like what Chicago's doing. I have to wonder what happens now with DeMar DeRozan if they're kind of out of that DeRozan race unless they get that market inside and trade going. But the guard rotation in Chicago is really legit for me.
Is Kobe White the odd man out here?
Oh, good point. Yeah.
Like, well, that's the only thing I'm thinking about because Caruso, that's a lot of money for someone to be, a backup or a role player, so to speak. And I'm just thinking to myself, are they like completely committed to Kobe White being a part of this core moving forward? Because we already see that they're making these win now moves. And that kind of makes me think, is Kobe White someone that they would entertain taking offers for, or would they just scale his role back? I'm genuinely curious about that.
Hypothetically, honestly, I mean, Kobe White could be really intriguing for San Antonio. Him and Markkanen together for DeRozan, I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me.
It's interesting. Whenever Jake came on my podcast and was saying that, the Bulls wanted to add better playmaking, better point guard play, that was the first thing that I thought of too. Clearly they weren't thrilled with Kobe White's play if that was their biggest priority going into the offseason. Now Lonzo and Caruso are reunited. They played 2 years together with the Lakers. So bring over that Laker backcourt. Pretty interesting. Let's see. We have some people in the chat. I know Laker fans are bummed. That's a big loss for the Lakers. He was someone that really was a great contributor for them. He also, had really good chemistry with some of those players, the continuity. We saw like there were times that it felt like they were just always on the same page. He was really good, with LeBron and some of those guys. So pretty big loss there. Shout out to Ramona Shelburne. She had said earlier in the day that there were other teams offering the full mid-level exception. There you go. That's what he gets from Chicago. So interesting move. You bring up a good point, Evan. What does this mean for DeMar DeRozan? Because the rumor was that, the Bulls were talking about a possible DeMar DeRozan sign and trade or signing, but then now it seems like it has to be a sign and trade. If DeMar DeRozan doesn't go to Chicago, because that's really the only team we've heard mentioned so far as a possibility, New York's money's dried up. There really isn't many options out there. What are we thinking for DeMar DeRozan?
I like, honestly, the fit. This is something that they did last year, too, getting Gordon Hayward on board. But what about DeMar DeRozan on a big win-now deal for 3 years in Charlotte? I love him with LaMelo Ball. I think that makes a lot of sense. James Bouknight, P.J. Washington, Kai Jones, Miles Bridges, Gordon Hayward, Terry Rozier potentially. I think that to get off Rozier's contract to make the salaries work there. But I love DeRozan in Charlotte. I think that's a big move that can make a lot of sense for them.
A lot of money to be tied up between Hayward and DeRozan, though, wouldn't you think?
No,
that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Also, but I like it too.
Hypothetically speaking, I don't know if this is even possible, but what about Clippers? He wants to go back to LA. You can sign and trade Beverly and Kennard, gets up to $27 million in salary. Maybe if the Clippers can make some sense.
We're getting to the point now where it has to be something creative like that if we're talking about sign and trade, because we already talked about it. San Antonio and OKC are the two teams left with cap space. He just left San Antonio. So the one thing I'm curious, no one's really talking about this, but the Thunder were apparently rumored to be making a big offer to Spencer Dinwiddie. And I think the thought process, if you're the Thunder, is let's make an offer and then we can flip him for assets later. We know Sam Presti wants to get young players and draft picks. Do we see the Thunder potentially try to use that cap space, bring in someone unexpected? The player gets their big payday, and then they can flip them for assets, before the trade deadline. That's interesting to me, and there was rumor again about Dinwiddie getting one of those offers. So the fact that, the rest of the cap space around the league is kind of dried up already. I'm curious, either we're going to see some sign and trades, which we've seen a lot of this year already, or, maybe some team gets creative like the Thunder and does something like that. But, there's still quite a few free agents out there and not a ton of space.
Yeah, I like the fit, honestly, a lot more for OKC if they were to get Dinwiddie instead of Kemba Walker. Maybe they could flip Kemba Walker somewhere else in the meantime for some sort of asset. But Dinwiddie and SGA would be a lot of fun together. But I think another name real quickly, Alex, that's kind of gone under the radar that we haven't talked about in a couple hours is John Collins in Atlanta. I'm kind of curious what's going on there because San Antonio still has money, so maybe they go after him. But I think the market's trying for John Collins now, too, where it seems like he's pretty much destined to go back to Atlanta.
Yeah, some people in our chat were asking, with the Zach Collins and Doug McDermott and all these San Antonio moves, could we see, the Spurs still as an option for John Collins? And it does seem like they still have money. I don't know if they have John Collins money, but you're right. I mean, the options are kind of drying up. So you have to wonder, do the Hawks get a pretty nice deal on John Collins potentially, if they're bidding against themselves essentially, or, do we see John Collins possibly take a qualifying offer and hit, unrestricted free agency next offseason? There was the report earlier, I believe, from Chris Haynes that Collins and the Hawks are pretty far apart and there's no momentum toward a deal. So the Collins thing is very interesting. Definitely something to keep an eye on. I can't imagine all the money drying up really would help those talks. Because if you're Collins, I'm sure he wants a big payday for the Hawks. You're thinking, go out and get an offer sheet and maybe we'll match it. So we'll see what happens there. Another one we're kind of waiting on for more information is Richaun Holmes. There was the report that the Raptors have shown interest, but and I know initially before free agency started, there was talk about Dallas and some others, but I'm not sure what Richaun Holmes is going to do either. There was also the report that the Kings badly wanted to bring him back, and they were kind of the front runners. So Richaun Holmes, another one that we're kind of waiting on. We might, it's going to get to the point pretty soon where if we don't see sign and trades and some creative deals, that some players that maybe thought they were going to get bigger paydays might have to look at mid-level exceptions, which could be interesting. Last year, that was the big shock of free agency, Montrezl Harrell going for a mid-level exception when we all thought he was going to get a big payday. Do some of these players take a mid-level deal or a short-term deal and then just kind of hit free agency again next offseason? We'll see. What are some things you guys...
It's tough to hit free agency next year, though, because everyone that's going to get paid is going to be on that star level. So you kind of have to act faster, I think.
So interesting notes here from our producer, Brian. LeBron James is now the longest tenured Laker. Pretty interesting there. And then in addition to the Lakers and Nets, the Warriors are also showing interest in Patty Mills. So something to watch there. How much do you think playing with Australia and just shining with them has helped his free agency stock? Do you think that teams pay attention to that at all?
They've seen it for years. I don't know how much that puts into it. Maybe it gives it a little bit more of a boost of value. But they've seen that for years. I think that Patty Mills' value comes in just, again, being a veteran, somebody that knows how to play the game, knows how to, really kind of ignite a second unit, and somebody who's able to shoot the heck out of the ball. I bet you that he would look forward to more of a hands-on role where he's handling the ball a little bit more, not just a spot-up guy. But he can commandeer, a second unit and really push things. And he's really solid player in the NBA. But again, FIBA Patty Mills is different.
One note, Jackson Frank, who was on with us earlier, says that the Lakers are likely losing their 3 best guard defenders of last season, which is pretty noteworthy. Great point there.
If they're bringing the band back together, by the way, does that include Avery Bradley?
Possibly.
Just
yeah,
a
that's a
thought.
good point.
Just a thought.
Let's see. Someone asked what the Suns should do with their MLE. They corrected it. But what do you think the Suns should do with that mid-level exception, Evan?
Yeah, it's really interesting because I would have said Nerlens Noel. I think he's the easiest option for him, but he re-signed already with the Knicks. There's not a lot of guys available right now that I would say are worth the MLE, but one intriguing one, he actually used to play for the Phoenix Suns. He could play kind of small ball 5, add some toughness on the wing, some good shooting as well. What about kind of poaching away PJ Tucker from Milwaukee on like a 1-year MLE or a 2-year MLE? He makes some sense to me. There's not really a lot of guys out there that make sense to me, though, with backup centers or power forwards with the full MLE right now. Getting Campaign back for the value they did was a steal, in my opinion, just $6 million per year for Campaign. That's something that really helped their flexibility. But a lot of the wings I thought might be intriguing for the Suns are off the market already. So I would keep an eye on some centers, some backup power forwards. Maybe a PJ Tucker type can make sense to me. But the options for Phoenix are kind of drying up a little bit in the MLE market. But definitely some names to watch there.
I have a question. And this is another one like Oladipo that no one's talking about. What's the market like for Andre Drummond?
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Is he an MLE guy? And is he an MLE guy, or is he below that? Because, Alex, I remember talking to you on the trade deadline show about this, about how once somebody's bought out, they kind of carry that stigma with them that they're not going to get paid the way they thought. So I'm genuinely, curious. I'm genuinely looking forward to seeing what happens with this situation with Andre Drummond, being someone that thought he was going to make somewhere between 15 and 20 and probably making much less than that. So I genuinely want to know if what happens with him.
I'm curious. One thing that's interesting, I had Miran Fader on my podcast not too long ago, and she actually did like a big feature with Andre Drummond and spoke with him and has gotten to know him a bit. And, he basically told her that he wants to compete for a championship, and that's his biggest priority right now. So, guys say that, but he also talked about, loving LA and feeling like he fit there and kind of, had a good role there and didn't want to just be a guy that puts up big numbers anymore. He wanted to, have a accepted role and kind of compete for a championship. So does he take one of those smaller deals? Like a Bobby Portis, for example, we talked about, took less money last offseason to go to the Bucks. Now this offseason did the same thing because he wants to compete for a championship. Do we see Drummond? I mean, I'm not sure what the market is for Drummond out there, but, he did average 11.9 points, 10.2 rebounds, and a block and a steal. With the Lakers, played 21 games with them. Always a guy that has a high, field goal percentage. I don't know what the market is. We haven't really heard anything like you're saying, but I'm curious. Do we see him take a mid-level type deal or even
big?
Less?
Back up big is, pretty much my thought.
I mean, he makes a lot of sense with the Suns. I mean, he played.
That's why I brought it up. I was thinking to myself, I'm like, you said JaVale McGee, and I'm like, well, JaVale and Andre both played here in Cleveland last year. I saw them play together. They're very similar. Andre, when he actually, buys in and, rim runs, and he's actually a pretty solid defender, to tell you the truth. Like, he's got really quick hands. The only problem with him is when he tries to do too much. When he scales it back a little bit, plays within himself, he's actually quite a good player, but that's why I was thinking about it. You talking about backup big in Phoenix, and I'm just like, that kind of makes sense to me. If they can't get JaVale, that Andre Drummond would kind of make sense. I don't know.
Yeah, that's something to watch out for. I think it makes some sense. The question is, will Drummond buy into that role? But he did a little bit. He did a little bit.
He might be forced to. I mean, if he doesn't have a market, then
True.
You can't just make it happen.
He's also the kind of guy, he's 27 years old. I feel like he's the kind of guy that needs to wait until Rashawn Holmes and some of these other players come off the board. And then he could be the kind of guy that, teams turn to and kind of pivot to. And, offer part of the mid-level or something. But yeah, I mean, tough for him, a guy that was, as you mentioned, I think there was a story you said that when he was in Cleveland, he was telling teammates that he thought he was a max player or close to it. So to go from that, not too long ago to now, I do think the buyout hurt him, how you're perceived. If you're taking a minimum deal somewhere, then that doesn't really help you whenever you have free agency coming up. So, and I think it also doesn't help him that the Lakers lost so early in the playoffs. Had he been able to showcase his game throughout the entire postseason run, maybe that affects things a little bit. But yeah, that's interesting. He's definitely someone to watch. I wonder if, I think he's someone that may sign a 1-year deal because there's no way he's going to get what he expects to earn in, this offseason. So maybe he's a guy that signs a 1-year deal, tries to prove it somewhere, go to a winning team, and then maybe next offseason he hopes to get paid more. But yeah, pretty interesting. One thing our producer Brian says, I can tell you guys, the Lakers' decision to prioritize Talen Horton-Tucker over Caruso will not go over well with the fan base. We heard a rumor that THT, any offer sheet he gets will be matched, and they let Caruso go. How do you feel about that?
He's stepping into a big role next year. I mean, he's looking at now 20 minutes per game. Yeah.
Yep. Huge. No, yeah. I think the growth that we saw from Talen Horton-Tucker was good. When he was struggling was when he was turning the ball over. The handles got to get better. But defensively, you obviously see the chops that he has. He's this burly, stocky type of guard that's basically like a brick house. But he's really solid. I think, expanding his role is not a bad idea. Losing Caruso, yeah, that's going to hurt just because, somebody who's on part of the championship team. And Talen Horton-Tucker, played a couple, of minutes there in that run in the bubble, but it's really someone you're going to have to depend on now going forward. And you have to see what happens, with the rest of the roster construction to see how dependent he's going to be with the Lakers. So, but I mean, of course the fan base is going to hate seeing the Caruso go because I mean, he's a fan favorite. He's somebody that exemplifies, the ultimate hustle guy, but this is a business and he got paid and, it's just the way that the cookie crumbles sometimes.
There was one rumor that Jake Fisher mentioned on my podcast a few days ago. He said that OKC could be an option for THT, that we could see them make a huge offer because the Lakers really aren't in a position. They have 3 players, LeBron, Russ, and AD, that are owed $120 million combined.
Evan.
So,
yeah, there it goes.
Hey, JaVale McGee to the Suns. We keep doing this, man. We say something and it happens. Props to you, Evan. Good call.
That was very good.
It's a perfect fit. I covered this on a story for Forbes earlier this week, but JaVale McGee is the exact type of prototype the Suns need for a backup big, athletic rim runner, can block shots, especially Jalen Smith does well next year. JaVale is a guy who's really content being out of the rotation for some games. He can just play spot minutes. So love the fit. I'm curious to see what the contract numbers are for JaVale.
1 year, $5 million.
Ooh, okay, I like that. Devin Booker recruited a guy from the Olympic team, so there's that.
Props to the Suns. 1 year, $5 million, and then that campaign deal was excellent too. I mean, I think they're
maintaining flexibility.
Yeah,
James is doing a good job.
Yeah, he really is. I like that.
That's why they call him champ.
No, yeah, I like that pickup. So yeah, we were talking about Talen Horton-Tucker. There was a rumor that OKC could make a big offer. The Lakers, they owe so much money to, their core guys. Could they really afford if a team threw a bunch of money at him? Now, I don't know what a bunch of money is, but he's 20 years old. So he fits with OKC's timeline. And, they are going after all these young guys and, seeing what they turn into. So does OKC become a possible suitor for THT, or do the Lakers get him back on a pretty team-friendly deal? That's kind of the question. We shall see. One thing that Brian says, he's a Lakers fan, our producer here. Imagine if the Lakers had made the Buddy Hield deal instead of the Russ trade. I was surprised they didn't, especially when it came out afterwards that the asking price was pretty similar, for Buddy Hield. I would prefer Hield. I think he fits so much better with that team and kind of the pieces that they have. But I think LeBron and AD wanted Russ. That's what everything kind of sounded like. So pretty interesting. People are in our chat right now. We're talking about the JaVale pickup. Let's see. Flex, I'm not sure who Flex is, but said that THT to Phoenix is a real possibility. Evan, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I mean, they have the full MLE if they want to use it. Maybe you can try to poach him away if the Lakers don't want to match that. JaVale does not take up any of their MLE, so maybe that makes sense. But Taylor Horton-Tucker is a guy that I don't know if he really has a role in Phoenix. I don't know if he's really worth the MLE right now. It's more of a long-term potential bank there. But I just going back to JaVale McGee for a second. The more I think about it, the more I just love the fit. Just stylistically, it's so perfect for DeAndre, and it's a good little mix there. But THT, I don't know about, but JaVale, I think, is a really good sign for Phoenix. Now we look back at it, guys. Chris Paul on the extension, campaign on a steal of a contract, JaVale McGee on a 1-year, $5 million deal. The Suns are having a great day so far, and you add in Landry Shamet on draft night.
Yeah.
They're good. And the Suns have a better team they did last year already.
I agree. And not to mention, I mean, the Suns were already going to get better because so many of their core pieces are young. So, I mean, taking one step forward, having this, the fact that this was their first postseason run for guys like Devin Booker, Mikal Bridges, DeAndre, and like, they're going to benefit so much from that and take a step forward. So to put better pieces around them too, makes a lot of sense. And that it was so frustrating watching the Suns team, watch Frank Kaminsky and some of these guys getting like huge minutes at times. So to have JaVale McGee as an option now to bring back campaign. Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense.
Two lob threats now. 2 lob threats for Devin and Chris.
Yeah. Some people in the chat talking about that Buddy Hield scenario. Brian mentions that, Russ cost $8 million more than the players they sent out. So pretty interesting. Some people are asking, let's see, what will the Sixers do? A lot of Sixers questions in the chat right now. Any thoughts on the Sixers? There was some talk about Danny Green, being re-signed. What do you guys think about Philly and and they lost, Dwight Howard to the Lakers? Thoughts on what Philly could do?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it all depends on Ben Simmons, honestly. What are they going to do with Ben Simmons? Because we heard earlier today from David Aldridge, the Sixers are asking for 4 first-round picks for Ben Simmons, which is just crazy talk in my opinion. But
that's insane.
However they go about that with Ben Simmons is really going to dictate what they do. I think they re-signed Furkan Korkmaz earlier today for a 3-year, $15 million deal. So that's the one move we've heard about so far. But I think it all just dictates with Ben Simmons. What ends up happening there? Where does Ben Simmons go? What's the compensation back? I really like the idea of Ben Simmons for CJ McCollum in a swap. I do think that's something we could watch out for later this offseason. But if Philadelphia doesn't get off that asking price, it could get ugly there in training camp, but that doesn't happen.
That's what I don't understand too. Go ahead.
One note about Simmons, I thought this was interesting. Jake Fisher said on the podcast that Daryl Morey wants to see what happens with Damian Lillard. If Lillard becomes available, he basically said if they were to trade Simmons now and then Lillard became available later in the offseason, that'd be devastating and you'd be kicking yourself. So they want to see if Lillard possibly becomes available. If he does, then maybe Simmons gets involved there and you could try to make a deal with the Blazers around Simmons. But they want to see what happens with Lillard before making any kind of decision with Simmons, which is why he probably doesn't get traded on draft night. And I think the expectation around the NBA right now is that Lillard, that whole situation will be resolved after the Olympics once he's back. He's already said on the record that he doesn't think this team's a championship team. They need to make big moves. We haven't seen really anything from the Blazers between tonight, draft night. So, if he's saying he doesn't think they're a title team and, it's frustrated with how everything went down with the coaching search and all that, maybe Dame does become available. But that's definitely what the Sixers are waiting for, I think, to see, if there's any movement there. Let's see. People are asking about different teams in the chat. We've talked some people are asking about Rashawn Holmes, Dennis Schroeder. We talked about them a bit. Schroeder, it seems like his main option would be that the deal with the Wizards with Russell Westbrook, KCP, Harold Kuzma, maybe that expands to include Schroeder. If not, there's not many options out there for him, so he might have to settle for a mid-level exception. Let's see. Someone just said, any Timberwolves news? There really hasn't been a lot on the Wolves front. Anything you guys have heard or any ideas for the Wolves?
They got Taurean Prince. That's their move so far. that's what they got. No, I haven't heard anything else on the Minnesota front, but I am interested to see how they move this thing forward. Obviously hurt not having a first round pick this year. Yeah. that definitely doesn't help when you're in they are in a rebuild, but they're in a really weird spot because they have Cat, they have D'Angelo Russell. Bringing in a wing help with Taurean Prince is nice here. Anthony Edwards, as we know, had a really good second half of the season. So they're kind of like in flux in a way. But I don't know what I would look for to complement those talents. It's kind of hard. Obviously, they got Malik Beasley there too. They've got, I think, a decent roster. It's just that the Western Conference is just so loaded that it's hard to stay afloat there. But I don't think they're like worst team in the league this year, especially if they can stay healthy and stuff. I'm a big fan of Naz Reid too, and obviously Jaden McDaniels. So we'll see. We'll see what they do. I don't think they're going to be extremely active though.
I think they're an interesting team, though. Kind of, I think internally might feel some pressure with Cat because he only has a couple years left on his contract. He might be getting frustrated behind the scenes. Who knows? And spitballing there. But I think that they have to do something in the next year or two to make Cat happier. He's going to ask out, in my opinion. He's a guy who deserves to be on a winning team. Minnesota has the nucleus in place, but maybe they're a team under the radar that can make an offer for Ben Simmons. I mean, I think that could make some sense. Maybe you toss back Malik Beasley, maybe seeing young guys in the process. Maybe they're one of those teams that's desperate enough to get multiple first-round picks in the future with Ben Simmons. Maybe that's a team that could watch out for with him.
Yeah, I think it was Dane Moore. He's a Wolves writer. He was mentioning that as a possibility, saying, he's talked to executives that have said, why not, if you're the Wolves, make a play for Ben Simmons. So that is interesting. Corey Joseph with Detroit just agreed to a 2-year, $10 million deal. Nothing huge there. Someone asked, with McGee, how does it not eat into the Suns mid-level exception? It was a $5 million deal, I think.
Yeah, 1 year, $5 million.
Yeah, so from reading up on it real quick while you guys were talking, the Suns are splitting the mid-level exception. So McGee is the first part of their MLE. They can still use the other half on someone else if they want to. So it'll just be something to watch there. But they are splitting the mid-level exception.
Yep. There you go. Split the mid-level. It's a good idea.
All right. So someone asked, do you think Jalen Smith will play a first rounder next year? That would be a massive plus. Will we see more out of Jalen Smith? What do you think?
I think a little bit, but now with JaVale McGee, I think Jalen Smith's just a project for them where they are a guy where have him develop for another year behind JaVale McGee. Maybe by the time 2022 rolls around, Jalen Smith's ready for a full-time backup center role because that'll be the third year of his contract. He's going to be making over $5 million per year at that point. But I do like McGee as a mentor for Jalen Smith. But this time next year, the Suns have a loaded rotation now. You have their second unit of Cam Payne, Landry Shamet, Cam Johnson, JaVale McGee. Then you also have other guys behind them as well. So I don't think Jalen Smith cracks the rotation this year, but got to watch out for maybe potentially after next season.
No, I agree. And, it's kind of hard because, you take the top 10 and you kind of have all these expectations for this kid. You already have someone playing ahead of you that was a number 1 overall pick a few years before you. It's just a really tough situation for him to get playing time. But at the same time, he's young. He's somebody who's definitely got bounce. I think that it's definitely different as far as, development curve for all of these young players. But particularly with this situation, because this is a championship caliber team, as we've seen. So for young players to crack those rotations, it's not easy. It's very, matchup based and stuff like that. But like you said, JaVale coming in, and hopefully helping him as a mentor. You have Chris Paul there already. You have Jay Crowder there. Like, that's huge for guys like that to try and find a niche at least. But that's probably going to push him back further in the rotation again, though. So we'll see what happens with Sticks, but that's a tough one. I'm really curious about the Schroeder Dinwiddie dynamic. I want to see which point guard wins out here. If it was up to me, I would take Dinwiddie just because obviously the size he has, the pull up acumen, the ability to operate pick and roll. Jackson Frank did a great article for us on basketballnews.com talking about that. He had a fit to the Knicks, but obviously the Knicks are done spending today. They went out and got Evan Fournier on a 4-year, $78 million deal. Brought back Nerlens Noel, brought back Alec Burks. They brought back Derrick Rose, so they're pretty much done. Dinwiddie's fits are pretty slim now as far as who can pay him if he gets the payday that he wants. We mentioned OKC as a possible suitor. Maybe New Orleans throws his name in the hat. But even for Schroeder now that you think about if that doesn't come back to a sign and trade and explodes into this mega deal, then it's tough for Schroeder to get paid. Looks like we have some news, though. finally, first deal here in a little bit. The Rockets are going to get Daniel Tice for 4 years and $36 million. So good deal for them. No, good deal for them. Good team friendly contract, and Tice gets some, long-term security there. So good for both parties, I think. And Tice, kind of pretty much like an Olynyk as far as his ability to stretch the floor, his ability to alter shots at the rim. Somebody who I think is a little underappreciated as a player, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, I agree.
Oh, interesting. Sorry, not to cut you off. Miami had the option to get Precious Achiuwa or Tyler Hero in the sign and trade. They chose Achiuwa. So interesting that Tyler Hero was made available in those talks, but in that wasn't chosen. But that's interesting there.
Toronto could choose him, or Miami could choose him.
Toronto had the option to choose Tyler Hero or Precious. Yeah,
Masai really liked Precious.
Apparently, yeah.
Yeah. We have another
one down.
Cody
Zeller 1 year deal with Portland, and Trey Lyles on a 2 year deal, $5 million with the Detroit Pistons.
What do you guys think of that?
Cody Zeller, that's not a bad gamble to take, I don't think. As long as he can stay healthy, I actually think he was an okay player for the Hornets in his tenure. It's just all about staying healthy with him. He's able to run the floor. He's definitely got more, a little bit more of a presence there on the glass. I think that, Portland's been starved for a big that can spell Nurkic for quite some time now. I know that Whiteside, could come in and fill in and do this thing, but obviously that was a couple years ago. But I think that having Zeller as this contingency plan is somebody that can fill in at center if Nurkic goes down or things change a little bit, is a good plan for them. Obviously, not going to cost them too much. But someone I think that was a little, again, underappreciated by some. I know that there was a revolving door in Charlotte at that center position, but I think that Cody is a little bit better than people give him credit for, and he's still relatively young himself.
Real quick, Toronto and Rashawn Holmes have mutual interest, as we talked about. The Kings offered 4 years, $60 million, but getting Holmes will require moving Dragic off to clear cap if you're Toronto. So I think that's the delay. And Rashawn Holmes actually just tweeted out a bunch of like the time emojis or the, what do you call it? I'm blanking on the word here, but
it means nothing. Norm Powell put the eye emojis. and now Rashawn's using the time emoji.
It was hourglasses, and they were saying now that Dragic has to be moved for them to open up space. So it's possible he's waiting to see if Toronto can do that. Who knows? That's reading into it a lot. But someone just asked the source for the Hero Precious choice. That was Jake Fisher. He's on Twitter Spaces right now talking about different moves. So from Bleacher Report, he's also the one that said the offer from Sacramento is 4 years, $60 million for Rashawn, but he wants to see what
he wants. More than 15 is what he wants.
Yeah, sounds like it. So he wants to see if Toronto can offer more.
Really quickly, just on Holmes to Toronto, if they had another big in Toronto, Pascal Siakam, we have to keep watching that now, because that's another big into that rotation at the 4 and the 5, where I'm starting to really wonder now if Pascal Siakam could be moved here soon, because you're adding a lot of guys in the front court right now.
Yep. Scotty. Is Kem Birch still there too?
I think he might. They have their cap hold still on Kem Birch. I think it's crazy.
Okay. I wasn't sure if he was there or not, but still, you look at Scotty Barnes, Pascal Siakam. Obviously, you have Chris Boucher there. Now, if you add Holmes, that's a lot of cooks in the kitchen. That is definitely a lot of cooks in the kitchen. So, but if they don't move Pascal, then probably Boucher would be the one that they would move. So, one of them two. We'll see. We shall see.
All right. So we will be on here for another 50 minutes, I would say. We wrap up at 9:30 Eastern time. We are going to be here every day, Monday through Friday at 5:30 p.m. Eastern time to 9:30. So hang out with us every day as different rumors and news breaks, I do want to thank our sponsor, Panini. Panini America is continuing to release digital trading cards on its Panini NFT blockchain platform, which includes a signature Prism basketball line. Check out PaniniAmerica.net to start collecting Panini NFT blockchain cards featuring all of your favorite NBA players. Oliver Maroney and I actually have a show, an NBA Top Shot weekly show, where we open up different packs and everything like that. Last week we had Panini VP Jason Howarth, and he gave us some of the blockchain NFTs to open up, and it's really cool. It's basically, if you like collecting trading cards, you're gonna like the Panini NFT blockchain. So definitely check that out. And thanks to Panini for sponsoring this. All right, so let's see if we have any more rumors or signings.
Just some small ones that we were mentioning when you were off screen.
Sure. Okay.
We were talking about the Daniel Tice deal. Trey Lyles went to the Pistons on 2 years, $5 million. So
looks like the Rockets are using the Oladipo trade exception to get Daniel Tice. It's going to be a sign and trade deal. So interesting there.
And like I was telling Evan, Daniel Tice basically just going to fill the role that Olynyk played last year. It might just be a little bit better defensively. Maybe not quite as reliable of a shooter, but still a solid shooter.
Sure.
Fits well next to a Christian Wood, I would say.
He's a good mentor for Alperen Şengün as well, that the rookie is drafted. He's very similar in a mold to Tice.
I like that. That makes sense. Let's see. I've seen a lot of people in the chat asking about Boogie, which is, pretty interesting. He was someone that was available much of last year. What do we think DeMarcus Cousins? I mean, I think he's one of those guys that we're not necessarily going to see much in the next few days. He's probably going to take a bit time. He's one of those guys that I think has to wait for some other signings to happen, and then what I think after other guys fall, maybe he could be someone that teams turn to. But any thoughts on either Carmelo Anthony or DeMarcus Cousins?
I think Boogie stays with the Clippers just because it was a good situation for him. It's almost like in case of emergency break glass with him, but I think that he's comfortable there. At least it looked like he was. And as far as Melo goes, I mean, he's not one of the premier free agents, so that's probably why he hasn't. A lot of these guys too that haven't signed is probably just letting the market settle out here a little bit. But sometimes agents just have things ready to go and want to just sign right away. But with Melo, I'm sure that they're going to probably look for money first before the fit there in Lakerland, because I mean, Melo still played pretty dang well for the Blazers and really bought into his role. So I wouldn't venture to say that him trying to look for some money still wouldn't be a bad idea, even though people are constantly saying we'll take the veteran minimum or whatever it may be to go play with LeBron and company. We'll see. But I bet you he's still looking for some money, especially seeing what other guys have been making.
Yeah, I agree on that. Melo is someone that I still think ends up in LA. I think it just makes too much sense for him to join the Lakers. But I was just, while you were talking there, Spencer, I was looking at the overall available free agents, and there's still a lot of good names out here. DeMar DeRozan, John Collins, Spencer Dinwiddie, Dennis Schroeder, Kelly Oubre, Rashawn Holmes, Lauri Markkanen, and Norman Powell. There's a lot of guys right now still on the open market. I think DeRozan is the next big domino to fall here.
We shall find out.
The DeRozan stuff interesting. I mean, I think we're all waiting to see if that Chicago sign and trade is going to happen. That was the big rumor that Lauri Markkanen could go back to San Antonio. If not, I'm not sure what other options are out there for DeRozan. So that'll be interesting to see where he does end up. The other thing with Carmelo, I see some people mentioning this in the chat. There was some rumors or rumblings that he could be going back to New York on a cheap deal. So I think he's at the point where he's probably going to be just considering a few different smaller options. Let's see, Reggie Bullock to the Mavericks, 3-year, $30.5 million. I want to say that was reported earlier.
It was just that they agreed to a deal. They didn't have the terms out.
So 3-year, $30.5 million.
That's a team that's now off the DeRozan race, I imagine. I think their cap's pretty much filled up now.
Yep.
Yeah, so Dallas out. That's what I'm saying. If it's not Chicago on a sign and trade, it's hard to imagine maybe where DeRozan ends up.
Do the Spurs do a sign and trade and try to find a different spot for him? Then because there might be a wing needy team or something like that. Like, I'm just trying to think about who has any bigger contracts that could make sense.
This is a team that I mentioned in my story on DeRozan Day on basketballnews.com. Maybe a surprise one that could be out of nowhere, but Indiana's a team that I think they're kind of stuck in middle right now. Maybe you can offer Miles Turner, who could be actually a really legitimate asset for the Spurs long term. Maybe you can flip Turner and Jeremy Lamb's expiring contract for DeRozan. Maybe that fit is a little clunky there with TJ Warren, but I that could be something to watch.
Well, that was the other thing I was going to say too, because then you also have Karis LeVert there. Yeah. So that probably would make them want to move one of those other guys then. Like, because there's only so much room.
I'm not sure I'd want to move Miles. I'm not sure you're getting enough back if you're moving Miles and getting DeMar back, but that's just me. Do you guys think that, what do you think about Miles Turner? Because I agree. I mean, Evan, you wrote a good article about how you can't really play Sabonis and Turner together. And even Rick Carlisle has said they would stagger them. So like, I get where the thought's coming from to move one of those guys, but I don't know. I feel like if they did make Turner available, they could probably get more back. That's just me.
No, I know that. Yeah. I agree with that sentiment. I think, honestly, you look at the big market, though, with what happened on draft night. Charlotte was a team that I think could be really interested for Miles Turner, but they drafted Kai Jones. Sacramento, we've seen them add in Alex Len, Tristan Thompson. Maybe they're out of the race for Miles Turner as well. San Antonio is a team to watch, and maybe it can make sense. They could cobble together some young assets, but not a lot of places right now for Miles Turner where I think they could get value back. Maybe Golden State, if they were to attach Andrew Wiggins with some future picks in the future, maybe that makes sense, but not a lot of options right now for Miles Turner to become a legitimate, like, full value back for Indiana. I could see the Pacers rolling with Turner into the season, maybe around the trade deadline. They could reapproach those thoughts.
Is there anyone whose names would mention in trade rumors more and then doesn't get traded than Miles Turner? I feel like since he came in the league, he's been the king of that, where everyone talks about it and then no one deals him.
It's 3 years in a row or 4 years in a row now. I feel like it's been going on for a while.
Yeah. Before the big contract, it was Kevin Love, bar none. Kevin Love, at least since he signed in Cleveland, he was in a trade rumor in training camp. He was in trading rumors at the deadline, trade rumors in the offseason, all before he signed the extension. Then when the extension came, I mean, he's always been linked to trade rumors, but like actual feasible trade rumors, I feel like Kevin has been in the offseason rumor ever since 2014. So
yeah, that's fair.
But no, Miles Turner absolutely always in these trade speculations. I feel like CJ McCollum started to come up in those talks too a lot over the last 2-3 years as well.
That's true.
So some people are just always apt to be in the rumor mill and nothing happens.
Part of it is because you look at, those guys, like they're guys that could fit with a lot of teams. Like Turner, you could, if you want a great shot blocker and a guy that can extend out to three, he makes sense. If you're, you need a scorer, a guy that can, fill multiple roles. CJ's kind of that guy. Like the guys that can fit with a lot of different teams are, if anything, it's flattering. It shows that a lot of teams want you and that you have a game that can, work many places. But I'm curious, some people are asking in the chat about some like lower tier free agents. Are there any like guys, I'm going to pull up the list right now to see, are there any like sleepers to keep an eye on that, we talked a little bit earlier about players that we're keeping an eye on, but are there any like sleepers, even they could be like veteran minimum guys that you guys want to keep an eye on as we kind of look through the free agent list?
I'm kind of curious just to see, he might be a tier above what you're mentioning, Alex, but Kelly Oubre is someone to watch. We're just watching him up close in Phoenix a couple years ago. He was legitimately their number 2 option behind Devin Booker, and he did very well in that role during DeAndre Ayton's first couple of seasons. I wonder where Oubre could go. The market's kind of drying up for him. Maybe I could see a team like San Antonio, but they just signed Doug McDermott. But Kelly Oubre is a guy to me, if he can get in the right role in the right system, he's a legitimate 18-point-per-game scorer, in my opinion. He offers great defense, very athletic too. I think Oubre is one of those dark horse guys. If he lands in the right system, maybe Miami on the mid-level exception, that can make some sense to me, honestly, for Kelly Oubre. I really am intrigued to see where he can land. He's one of the youngest guys in the market that can mention right in the show, Alex.
Spencer, anyone that comes to mind for you? We lost Spencer. A few guys that I'm looking at. Let's see. Kendrick Nunn is interesting to me because apparently there was a few teams that tried to trade for him at the deadline, and I think he's going to get some interest. Again, he's one of those guys with the restricted guys. It sometimes takes a few days. Teams like weigh their other options and then pivot back to those guys. Devontae Graham, there was some talk about possible sign and trade talks, but he's really played well last year or two. He's been kind of streaky and he had some injuries, but I think he is interesting. And then Reggie Jackson too. There were some rumors about Reggie Jackson. He obviously played so well during the playoffs and really stepped up. So those are some guys that I'm kind of looking at. Spencer, we lost you for a second. I mentioned Devontae Graham, Kendrick Nunn, Reggie Jackson. Bruce Brown is interesting. I think he's restricted, but he's interesting player. Played well for the Nets. Any guys that are kind of lower tier free agents that you're keeping an eye on, Spencer, or anyone in the chat too? Feel free to mention people. We'll throw them up on screen.
I agree with Nekias earlier. I think Justice Winslow is one of those guys, just a former first-round pick who has been dealing with a lot of injuries the last couple of years. Obviously, the shooting stroke is not the greatest, but his ability to create off the dribble is extremely, extremely underseen. The way that he plays defense, he's a very, very, muscular guy, somebody who can really, frustrate opponents defensively. That I think is definitely somebody that could make a difference on a team. I don't know how much money he's going to command, but I just know that, obviously his player option to get picked up, or he didn't get offered a qualifying offer. But Josh Hart, another one I think that no one really talks about. He
came up in the chat actually as well. So continue.
Yeah, no, Josh Hart, somebody that I loved on New Orleans last year. Really just a team first guy. Really picks up the pace. Somebody that just kind of does it all. I mean, it's hard to break down his game because he's just such a jack of all trades. It's almost like he's a shorter version of Larry Nance Jr. Which it's funny because I mean that'd be someone I think the Cavs would love to get, but I don't know what it would take to pry him away.
We have one guy that I was just about to mention who just signed, PJ Tucker to the Heat. So that's interesting.
Oh wow,
perfect fit. Perfect fit. Yeah,
he's a perfect Heat player. He's going to fit there really, really well. I like that. Interesting team that Heat have kind of built up. They've been very active today. So PJ Tucker, interesting. One guy we didn't mention, I see people in the chat mentioning it, Otto Porter Jr. You mentioned him in your article about the Lakers and guys to target, Evan. He's one of those guys. It kind of reminds me of a Nick Batum, where the contract was everything that, everyone talked about the contract and how he's overpaid. And, if he comes in now on a cheaper deal and is a guy that is kind of, in a complimentary role, he shot the ball really well last year from three. He could be a guy that surprised people next year if he's on a cheaper contract and people aren't talking about, the ton of money he's making. He's made $125 million in his career. So everyone talks about that, but he could actually still be a decent contributor.
He's a guy to me where, like you mentioned, Alex, he's a perfect fit for the Lakers on their mid-level exception. Want to go after him. Great fit, plus 40% from three. And you'd think he'd be over 30 by now, but just like Evan Fournier, he's only 28 years old. So he's just now hitting his prime years. So Otto Porter, makes a lot of sense for the Lakers if they want to go out and get another wing.
Iguodala, Paul Millsap also out there. People are mentioning that. Patty Mills, Rudy Gay, Markieff Morris.
2 years, $15 million for PJ, by the way. So that's a solid payday for him.
Yeah.
That's a team, honestly, with Miami, you toss in PJ now to the mix, Kyle Lowry, Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo. That's
vets.
A lot of skin in the playoffs. That's a team that's really going to bother some people.
No question.
How good is that team? What do you mean? Are we thinking they can compete for a championship? I mean, I don't think that they're there, but what do you think about this team's core and what their upside is?
I think they could compete for a championship. They were just in the championship 2 years ago. I mean, they lost Jay Crowder, right? Okay. They lost Solomon Hill. But they bring back Duncan Robinson. You now have Kyle Lowry as a part of that core. Bam Adebayo clearly, had a little bit of a regression there, in the playoffs as far as, just some decision making and stuff like that. But, guys got to grow from that. And also he had the pressure of playing on that huge deal he signed before the season started. Jimmy Butler for most of the season was dealing, like Nekias said, with some illness. I think they're in great shape. I don't think that they're not a contender.
I think they're a contender. I think they can go deep, but I don't think they can win a championship. I don't think they're better than Brooklyn. I don't think they're better than Milwaukee. I look at the top teams in the East, and I think things have changed since Miami went to the Eastern Conference Finals. And look, it is Pat Riley, so it's always possible that there's something else up his sleeve and they could make a trade and, improve. And maybe, they're always active in the buyout market too, because there's no state income tax in Florida and it's Miami. But I don't know. I think, don't get me wrong, I don't want to, upset Heat fans here. I'm not saying the team's horrible. I like the moves and I think they've done the best with, kind of the situation they were in. But Are they immediately better than Miami or I'm sorry, Milwaukee or Brooklyn or some of those teams? I don't think they can beat those teams, but that's just me.
I think Miami's solid leader right now. I would say, in my opinion, the 3 seed in the East. I think they're behind Brooklyn and Milwaukee, but they're right above in that tier 2 range now, where they're leading that pack behind those two. Where I think they could make the Eastern Conference Finals. I don't know about a finals push, but this team is going to give some people some problems. I love the Lowry fit. I love the PJ Tucker fit. Just total Miami guys. I love what they're doing so far, and especially bringing back Duncan Robinson too.
It's interesting too, because there wasn't a lot of talk about Miami, being like a big threat. I know we talked about them as like a option at the deadline. They tried to go after Lowry, but interesting that now they made all these moves when there really wasn't a whole lot of talk. But props to Pat Riley and that team. They definitely did improve. Don't get me wrong, but interesting to see what happens next. There's one question. Also, the other thing too is if they are competing with Milwaukee, the fact that they stole PJ Tucker away is pretty big. Not only is it an addition for them, it's subtraction for Milwaukee. So that is pretty big.
Plenty of sneakers down in South Beach.
Yes. Some people are asking, what about Colin Sexton and his availability? Spencer, you want to talk about that trade situation and whether we could see him on the move?
Yeah, I mean, I addressed it a little bit earlier. I think that after they got Evan Mobley, that those talks are going to probably go out the window. Probably going to just play out this season, see what happens. If he plays really well, then he'll have earned himself a huge payday. If he doesn't play well, then you obviously have questions about that. This is going again back to the Cavs having so many players on rookie scale contracts, because Darius Garland's deal is going to end up coming up here next season, not this season, but the next season after that. Then you have to start worrying about how to pay all the other guys, because you can only have about a max of 2 contracts with maximum value. So it's a tough conversation, but at the same time, there's no rush. There should be no need to rush, I'd say, because he's their most consistent offensive presence. He's an improved playmaker, somebody who still needs to find a way to have some patience operating in pick and roll, but he's a secondary guy. It's not like he's the main creator now. Darius Garland has that role. And now with Evan Mobley, I'm sure you're going to see Evan Mobley with the ball in his hands a lot, being kind of that point forward-ish type of player. So Colin Sexton off the ball, really, really good, cutting on the baseline, getting to the rim, drawing fouls. He's gotten some calls now. He's really just kind of, this pit bull kind of player that I think the Cavs appreciate his work ethic, but at the same time, he's also very much so improved. And now that you look at this back line behind Isaac Okoro, behind Darius Garland and Colin Sexton, now you have Isaac Okoro, Evan Mobley, and Jarrett Allen behind you. And then when you don't have Okoro in there or Mobley, you still have Larry Nance Jr. So you can cover for those weaknesses. If they get by Darius Garland and Colin Sexton on the perimeter, they're just going to run into a world of hurt to where they're going to have to either spray it out or they're going to get the shot blocked. So they've surrounded them, the 2 guards in Colin Sexton and Darius Garland, with protection behind them now on the defensive end, to where on the offensive end, you kind of have to still keep Colin Sexton around, because again, he's your most offensive presence as far as consistency goes. And he's continued to improve, and he's, still has those moments where he has some tunnel vision. But at the same time, he's an improved guy on the lob. He's an improved guy with pocket passes. If he drives, he's had some really nice passes on driving kicks with his left hand, just kind of whipping it over to the opposite corner elbow. So these are things that he's still developing. He's still 22 years old. They're still trying to figure out the right value for him, and trying to figure out who the 2 guys they're building around are going to be. Now, from what I've heard, at least from folks that I've talked to, is that they don't want to put the pressure on him to be the guy. It doesn't mean that he won't be an important piece of this moving forward. He's definitely a part of this growing young core together, that they call the core 4 is now turned into a core 5 with Evan Mobley now. So I don't see the Cavs moving Sexton unless they were blown away. And I think a lot of the stuff on trade night or on draft night was a lot. I mean, when there's smoke, there's fire, obviously, but I didn't think that anything substantial ever surfaced with those.
Another Cleveland question I wanted to ask you, Spence, because I think a lot of contending teams could be in on this. We saw what Blake Griffin in Detroit this past year, and he went to Brooklyn. But you have to think now, drafting Evan Mobley, signing Jared Allen, that big deal. Kevin Love maybe potentially on the open market here soon with the buyout. I mean, if that happens, a lot of contending teams, maybe especially like the Lakers, I would like Kevin Love in LA. Like, what's your thoughts on potentially a buyout or a trade with Kevin Love? The trade value, I think, is non-existent, but potentially a buyout.
Non-existent is pretty much how you would put it, especially now that you see Team USA when he gets publicly flamed by Jerry Colangelo for showing up basically out of shape. With Kevin Love, the solution is simple. You just got to play better, and you got to be available, and you got to show that you're still, worth, a contender wanting you and stuff. Like, he has had his moments where he's shown he can stretch the floor. He's obviously an amazing defensive rebounder. Really solid on pick and slips and whatnot. But where you're really hurting and what you're starting to see is those past back issues catch up to him. He had some issues with his calf. Any of these issues are just kind of compounding on top of each other, setback after setback, to where I'm looking at this like, how much money is he going to be willing to leave on the table in a buyout? I don't know if he's going to be willing, because that is security for him. Not only that, but at the same time, it's really difficult for the Cavs to move him. It's really hard. And now you look at it, there's only 2 years left on the deal. You're almost thinking to yourself, is it worth it to even, part ways? Because he himself said, even at Team USA training camp, that these guys are going to have to, basically play him a little bit less. Like, he knows that he's not that guy anymore to get, 30 touches a game. He's not going to be playing 35 minutes a night anymore. He's probably going to be more in that reduced role. As long as you can stretch the floor and get those rebounds, he's able to do that. So I think that you got to show that you're healthy first and foremost before you even think about talking about buyouts, and before you even think about talking trades. And I think he himself knows that. But he's largely disappointed of where he is currently, and I know that he's got to be devastated about how it went down at USA.
Yeah, it looks like here we have a deal coming through, Spencer. Gorgui Dieng to the Hawks, 1 year, $4 million deal. I think that's good insurance while Untitled Chapter will recover from his labrum injury. As a backup to Clint Capella, and he can stretch the floor for Trey Young too. I like the fit for Gorgui in Atlanta.
Right. And I mean, not that Gorgui Dieng signing a 4-year $1 million deal is going to, impede anything, but does that, having, again, kind of like we were talking about with Toronto, does that make John Collins any more or less of a priority? Like, that's something that I think I would think about. It's, for me, I think John Collins would be probably the best fit to stay in Atlanta. And I think that Atlanta probably understands that. But he's probably going to also want that payday. Everyone wants the payday at this point, especially, we're reading about how Rashawn Holmes was looking for more than that $15 million, because that's what he was offered, obviously. But I'm curious to ask you this. Out of the moves that we've seen today, what has been your favorite?
Oh, it's a tough one. There's been a lot of good moves so far today. Honestly, I know maybe this is just bias because I covered the team, but I think JaVale McGee was a really solid move for the Suns for 1 year, $5 million. They needed a backup. Dario Saric being out for the year is a huge loss for the Phoenix Suns as a connector in their second unit. Getting JaVale McGee on board there is a solid move. I think a bigger move, maybe it's a little bit of a hot take just because I think it's a lot of money for this guy, but I think the fit overall with the team is very solid. Evan Fournier in New York is something I'm really liking the more I think about it. Just with RJ Barrett, Julius Randle, Mitchell Robinson at center. You have a good young core there. You spin a little bit, run it back with this whole Knicks core. You re-sign Derrick Rose, Nerlens Noel. This Knicks team's now Spencer in the position where they could again be a top 5 team in the East next year with how things go. I like that Fournier move the more I think about it.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking to myself, I like what the Bulls did, just bringing in a guy like Lonzo Ball to put next to Zach LaVine. You're thinking about the other moves that they've been linked to, obviously with this DeRozan noise going around, who still hasn't been signed, by the way. Very interesting of note, because we're 3 hours into free agency at this point, and DeMar DeRozan was one of it's too quiet. But I think that the Bulls did a solid job getting him and Caruso. Really, again, curious to see what happens as far as Kobe White's role goes, or if that's something they may consider down the road. We're still waiting on Norman Powell. We're still waiting on Lowry Markkanen. But for the most part, I think it's been a relatively busy day. You wrote the article on the Spurs, and I know that we kind of touched on it, but you bring in, Zach Collins. They brought in another center as well, I think. And then who have the Spurs brought in today? Let's look up.
Doug McDermott was the big one.
Doug McDermott was the first move they made. Yes, you're right.
Yeah, Doug McDermott, Zach Collins. I think that might be it so far.
Okay.
But there's a lot of smoke around potentially Lowry Markkanen if they do.
Markkanen being a part of the Sun trade. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Really interesting what they're doing, because we heard before Fournier signed that the Spurs are kicking it around on him as well. So this is a team where I feel like they should be tanking, kind of trying to get a top 5 pick next year. But if they're getting Lowry Markkanen, if they're signing Doug McDermott, if they're going for these veterans and great shooters to surround their young core, they think they have a chance next year, Spencer. And that really kind of throws me off a little bit, because I feel like, honestly, the Spurs should look in the mirror and say, we're not competing anytime soon. I think it's time just to hit the reset button around these young guys and just take a year off, so to say, from competing. It's
tough. It's definitely tough to, kind of accept that. But being out west, that's tough. That's really tough to put together almost that middling roster. But biggest names that are still out there, obviously Spencer Dinwiddie, Dennis Schroeder, Patty Mills, Danny Green, Kelly Oubre Jr., and a couple of restricted. We just mentioned Lowry Markkanen and Taylor and Horton Tucker. There's been noise about Otto Porter Jr. being interested in the Nets. That came out last night, I believe. Rudy Gay is still out there. So out of those names, who do you think could benefit from getting one of those players?
I think Otto Porter Jr. makes a lot of sense for either the Lakers or the Nets. We've heard, I think, a lot of smoke. I think he lives in Brooklyn right now. JJ Redick would make a lot of sense to the Brooklyn Nets as well. I think he's someone to watch out for there. But I think these kind of veteran free agents can really help swing things for these title contenders, the Lakers, the Nets, the Bucks. How they use those exceptions, those veteran minimum contracts, going to go a long way towards how their rosters are late in the playoffs next year. So something to watch out for there. But the more I keep thinking about it, Spencer, just the biggest thought in my mind right now is DeMar DeRozan. Just why is it taking so long? What's going on with his market? Because these teams we mentioned all throughout the show, they're drying up. There's a lot of teams right now that are running out of cap room. There's only about 2 or 3 teams in my mind. And now it's kind of creeping back in my head now for the first time, Spencer. Like, is DeMar DeRozan going to take the mid-level exception with the Lakers? I mean, that's just something that's crossed my mind now, just because he wants to win a title. There's not a lot of money out there. Maybe he just says, hey, screw it, I'm going to go to LA and win a title this year.
That might be ending up what happens. Like, it's crazy, because you're thinking of the guy that's probably going to get somewhere around that 18, 20 million, maybe a little bit more. And, just the situation doesn't shake out the way you thought it would. Or maybe I believe I saw that the Heat still have a mid-level exception too. And remember about the reports about Kyle Lowry and him potentially reunion there in South Beach. So that would be really intriguing and interesting, even though, as we saw earlier, Nekias was not the biggest fan of that, because DeRozan and Jimmy Butler are largely very similar players on the offensive end. But the storylines, they're starting to die down a little bit. We'll see what happens. But free agency, we're 3 hours in and a lot of names have come off the board. I'm curious about some stuff over the weekend that we didn't really touch on, at least on a live show. So we had some moves made by Boston and Dallas with the trade, where Josh Richardson went to Boston, and we had Miles Brown went to Dallas, I believe.
Yeah, Moses in Dallas and that.
Yeah. Moses Brown. Sorry, my bad. We were talking about Miles Turner. It was in my mind. But what do you think about Jay Rich's fit with the C's?
I like it. I mean, they need some wings. They need some shooters. Richardson just had a really bad off year. I don't know if the COVID year kind of impacted him or not, but just didn't work out in Dallas. I thought his fit originally with the Mavericks was really good, but that just didn't work out there. I like his fit in Boston as a reserve with Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown. If it works out for him, he's going to earn himself a payday next year. He still has that player option for over $11 million.
Sure,
he's a guy to me that could make himself a lot of money. And that rotation in Boston, that's another team that's really intriguing to me, Spencer, because Boston's been very quiet today. I wonder what they're up to, what they're doing, because they were originally thought to be in the Lonzo Ball race. That didn't happen, of course, but they have some room. They have some wiggle room to make some stuff happen. So I wonder exactly what's going to happen there with the Celtics.
It's an interesting question. And what if they were able to get DeRozan? Now that I'm thinking about it, I mean, Fournier's gone. They don't have the wing that they still have. Obviously, they have Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, but it's not like DeRozan can't play the three. Like it sounds like a fit, but who knows what he's going to command. But no, I just wanted to touch upon that and also figure out what else happened and stuff, because I obviously was not too much around. Okay, Jake Fisher said tonight in a chat, according to Brian Fritz, our producer, that the Raptors are trying to make a deal for Dame.
That's interesting.
That's a piece of news that we haven't heard yet.
I mean, they have all the young assets now, and then you have Pascal Siakam. You could cobble together Siakam, OG Anunoby, Scotty Barnes. Like, if the Raptors feel like they can make a move happen, that's, I think, honestly, one of the best deals in the market right now for a guy.
It would have to be. To be. Yeah.
That's a Masai Ujiri move, too. He gambled on Kawhi. They won a title. I mean, why not run it back and do it again?
Yep. And Brian's patting himself on the back here. Quick plug for Brian and I's podcast, Keep It at 94. He just goes, who said that the Raptors are a fit for Dame deal? Oh, wait, that was me. So Brian Fritz giving himself a nice pat on the back. You can't see him. He's in the back producing for us, but we really appreciate that. But no, Dame to Toronto is an interesting thought. And also what pieces it would take, because we were just mentioning now that, especially because, they showed interest in Rashawn Holmes. They, obviously have very high hopes for a guy like OG Anunoby, who had an amazing season. Just got Gary Trent Jr. back on 3 to 54. Can they trade Gary Trent Jr. right back? Is that possible? Is that a possibility, or is that something against the cap? Because that'd be interesting.
Yeah, that might be illegal. I think, unless they just did like a straight up swap, but.
Yeah,
I mean, just thinking more about it, just think about the Raptors roster right now. You could trade Fred VanVleet, you could trade OG, you could trade these young guys, Barnes, Boucher. I mean, if they're really legitimately on Damian Lillard, Toronto.
That's a shakeup. That's a shakeup if that would happen.
That's a serious team where if you're Neil O'Shea and Damian Lillard comes to you and says, I just want to get traded, and you're thinking like the Spurs where you just want to get the best deal possible, I can't think of a better option right now than Toronto. When all those young guys, you have the win now guys, Siakam and VanVleet too, like. That's something that's really, really interesting me since that news just broke a little bit, where if the Raptors are interested in putting the full court press on Damian Lillard, and that has to be one of the best offers on the table anywhere.
If you were Masai Ujiri, what would be the one or two guys you would say, no, I'm not trading him. I'm not trading him over there, because you have to still keep those pieces to win with Damian there. It can't just be just Damian, because that would essentially just be Portland North.
Yeah, I think it'd have to be a mix of keeping young guys and veterans, because Dame's not going to want to go to a place with all young guys. Like, hey, I'm going to lead a team with Scotty Barnes and OG Anunoby and try to win a title. Like, that's just not going to happen. Maybe you can just flip Fred VanVleet, who can match up salaries for a guard, plus maybe Anunoby. You can keep Scotty Barnes, Pascal Siakam in your front court there. Maybe that makes some sense. But maybe one of those veterans, one or two of those young guys can make some sense for the Raptors. But I think it makes a lot of sense for Toronto to try to do this. They're a team that's been out of it for a year or two, but I think they're in a position where if Masai Ujiri wants to roll the dice again and make it happen, that they're a team that can really make some noise if that were to occur.
Let's look at this from Portland's lens, just hypothetically. Obviously you're going to probably be in rebuild mode at that point. But is that a good leg to start on? Bringing back, Fred VanVleet and an Anunoby to pair with, still you have CJ McCollum, you would still have Yusuf Nurkic. You still, it's almost middling again though, because you're going right back to square one, without the face of your franchise. But I'm curious from Portland's lens, how that would look and where they would probably position themselves, because they've been highly against trying to rebuild it and redo things. So that's what I'm thinking to myself, like, how would they react to this? Would they try to push in all their chips and be a 6 to 8 seed, or maybe, even like just barely getting into the play-in tournament, or how they would react to that?
Alex, you just joined us. I mean, what's your thoughts hearing about this Dame news where, according to Jake Fisher, they could be in the mix for Damian Lillard trade if Dame were to ask out soon?
That's very shocking. It makes sense, though. We talked about, Pascal and the assets that the Raptors have, and it's Masai. So I mean, Masai's always looking at. There's certain executives that are always kind of looking for those big players. It makes a lot of sense. They have a ton of assets there, and I'm just curious. I mean, obviously, this is all dependent on whether or not Dame requests out. But if they did, trade some of these young players, let's say they give up Siakam and some other guys, like I wonder how Dame would feel about that, because they'd be giving away a few different, key pieces.
Win now pieces. Yep.
Yeah. Is that team really closer to a championship than Portland? Like, I'm not sure. That's tough.
But does he have a choice in all of that? That's the other thing.
Yeah. I mean, they could get him, and I'm just wondering, how happy he would be there if that did happen. But I hear what you're saying. It's one of those things. Like, it's one thing if Toronto wants him. I'm not sure. Some people are asking in the chat, is this the actual report? The reason we're talking about this, Jake Fisher from Bleacher Report said that the Raptors are pursuing Dame Lillard. So that's something to look at. I mean, again, it would take several things to happen. Dame actually asking out, and Portland liking their offer, and all this different stuff. It's basically a hypothetical at this point. I'm just not sure. It's interesting. It definitely is, but I'm just not sure it makes a ton of sense as far as like the window for Toronto and all that. But if you're Portland, I get going after those assets. There's a lot of nice pieces there in Toronto, and you look at some of the teams that can make big offers. It makes sense in terms of what the Raptors can offer, but I don't know.
It's difficult. It's difficult to imagine, but at the same time, and I'm thinking to myself here too, because correct me if I'm wrong, but OG hasn't been paid yet, right? He didn't, or did he get his extension?
Yeah, he got an extension last offseason for $18 million.
Okay. I'm trying to think to myself the numbers, because obviously Dame's Supermax makes it very, very difficult to move someone and match contracts up. So, and obviously Pascal got paid a couple of years ago. So, but yeah, no, that's a really enticing. That's extremely enticing. If I was there, but
interesting. So we are wrapping up here. Let me see. Apparently, some people are saying that Jake Fisher in his chat was saying that Toronto has the assets to go after Dame, not necessarily that they're trying to. So that's
we were speculating.
Yeah,
at least we're speculating.
That's a distinction there. But top players available still: point guards Spencer Dinwiddie, Reggie Jackson, Dennis Schroeder, Lou Williams, Devontae Graham, restricted, Patty Mills. You also have Kawhi Leonard, but it seems like he's going back to the Clippers. DeMar DeRozan, Norm Powell, Kelly Oubre, Danny Green, Bruce Brown, Josh Hart, Victor Oladipo, Avery Bradley. Some of the bigs are, John Collins, restricted, Rashawn Holmes, Paul Millsap, Lauri Markkanen, Andre Drummond. Let's see. There's a lot of guys, but those are some of the big names to keep an eye on. We're going to be doing this every day of the week, Tuesday through Friday as well, going live every day at 5:30 p.m. Eastern time. We want to thank our sponsor, Panini. They're the ones that are helping making this happen. So shout out to Panini. They have their NFT packs available right now and their trading card packs as always too. So we will keep you guys updated on everything that happens. Every rumor that pops up, we're going to be reacting to them on these lives. And in the meantime, check out basketballnews.com. There's tons of articles up there breaking down all of today's rumors and moves. There's also, plenty of analysis on there too throughout the week. As teams sign these players, we're going to break down what that looks like and how they fit with their new team. So definitely check out basketballnews.com. Anything else you guys want to add? Spencer, Evan, appreciate you guys hanging out throughout this time. Let's see. Anything else you guys want to add in before we jump off here? Oh, there's one more thing. The Heat offered a sign and trade of Andre Iguodala for DeMar DeRozan. The Spurs, however, told them that they have a better offer trade wise.
Devontae Graham to the Pelicans.
Oh, Devontae Graham. Hey, see, every time we want to jump off here, there's something that pops up. Interesting. Okay, so Devontae Graham is signed with the Pelicans via sign and trade with New Orleans, sending a first-round pick to Charlotte. So Charlotte gets a first-round pick back. Not bad.
Good call.
So interesting. How do we feel about Devontae Graham to the Pelicans?
Very good floor spacer. He's a really good fit for them to stretch the floor for Zion and Brandon Ingram. He's also young, fits right into their core. I love Graham in New Orleans. I think it makes a lot of sense. Curious to see what the numbers are on this sign and trade, but this knocks out Spencer Dinwiddie as an option. Dennis Schroeder is an option for the Pelicans. And very interestingly, this clears some extra money on the surface for the Hornets. Maybe they can get in this DeRozan race.
That's a good point.
It is. Is that another suit or two for a Dinwiddie?
Oh yeah, that could be a real option. They have to get off Terry Rozier's contract, I think, to get into any of these talks. But Rozier, I imagine, could be someone that could be had for an expiring contract for not that much.
Right. Real quick too. By the way, Alex, I did not mention one person earlier on somebody that I think is underappreciated in the free agent pool. I like Hami Diallo, and he's a restricted free agent. He's 23 years old. Not sure what the Pistons are thinking as far as matching them and stuff like that, but somebody who really grew at OKC last year before he got dealt. Offensively, obviously inconsistent, but defensively, somebody who really gets after it, gets to the basket. My God, he gets to the basket. Extremely athletic too. So somebody that I think could really help a team looking for a shooting guard / small forward, whatever you want to consider his position.
It looks like he got 4 years, $47 million. Devontae Graham did. So interesting there. And then, as we said before, it sounds like DeMar DeRozan, the Spurs have gotten interesting offers for a sign and trade with DeRozan. So we'll see what they decide to go with. But we'll be back every day on this stream. We're going to come back tomorrow at 5:30 p.m. Eastern time to discuss all the latest rumors and reports. Again, check out basketballnews.com for tons of articles on free agency. We'll keep kind of breaking things down over there. And then also make sure you guys follow us on Twitter too. We're providing tons of analysis and stuff on there. Anything else? I think, Dinwiddie still out there. OKC, we talked about that earlier as a possibility. Maybe they make an offer, but anything else before you guys want to wrap up?
Yeah. There's still just a lot of big names out there, whether it be when we get off later tonight or tomorrow, that we're going to be covering all here on basketballnews.com for the stream. But there's still a lot of good names out there, and we're going to have a lot of fun stuff to cover here throughout the week on free agency.
For sure. Well, we appreciate everyone hanging out with us. We'll be back again, as I mentioned, tomorrow at 5:30 p.m. Eastern time. We want to thank our sponsor, Panini, and thanks for hanging out with us, guys. Take care.